In a world where your skill decides your entire future, he was born with nothing. He was thrown away like trash for being skillless. But while everyone mocked him, he spent 5 years training with a dragon serpent in literal hell. And when he finally returned, his level had surpassed 8 million in a world where level 99 is supposed to be the limit. Now the same people who look down on him get one shot with a single punch. Can the weakest outcast become the strongest adventurer the world has ever seen? This story begins with the protagonist, Ryuya, recalling how he told Londite, the guildmaster calling her Auntie, that an adventurer needs 3 things: energy that drives any task, the ability to stick to one's intentions, and a heart that sympathizes with one's friends. Once he gains a skill, he will definitely join a guild and become an adventurer. Afterward, he suggested to his friends that they go forage for scraps. They were outraged. Wondering why he was telling them this, the protagonist thought about a blessing ceremony in this world. After turning 14, even orphans like them could receive it. It was the only chance the 4 of them had to escape their terrible lives. In the kingdom of Centakelion, at a church 5 years ago, the ceremony was very rich in gifts. His friend Kridrod received a top-tier skill suitable for magic, Great Sage. Zeta received the extremely rare dual skill Holy Wave and Healing Hand. Libra received the Brave skill, which, when used skillfully, is also a truly unique skill. The friends rejoiced at the gifts they had received. The priest said it was God's grace, power bestowed upon them, pathetic humans, to fight terrible monsters and demons. Kridrod told the priest he would definitely become the best mage in the world. The old man replied, "Good, he hoped so." The priest's assistant turned to Zeta and said, "Let her return to the church. Her skills are inherent to a holy maiden." The girl replied, "Good, she will definitely be useful to people." Liber exclaimed, "He grew up in the slums, and now he's brave. They will do it." The priest declared, "Using the blessings bestowed by God is the duty of those who have received them. Let them know this. Do they all understand?" The friends all shouted yes. Then the priest turned his attention to Ryuya and gasped, "They still have him? What's his name?" It didn't matter. He didn't have the skill. MC wondered, perplexed. Why only him? The old man said he'd console him. There were many who hadn't received the skill. This year, 4 people were present at the ceremony with him, but an exceptional situation had occurred. It was simply unheard of for 3 people to gain skills at once like this, and all of them top tier. Ryuya remarked in bewilderment, "Then why wasn't he the only one?" The priest said, "It's God's will. Therefore, he shouldn't be depressed any more than necessary. Let him go and return to his former life. That's how ordinary people live. If he understood everything, he can go." The protagonist was simply crushed by what had happened. Kridrod approached him and sympathetically expressed his apologies. Liber added that he was very dear to them. They're just kids, and they've only survived this far because they helped each other. He responded with a voice trembling with emotion, but he has no skills. "So, will they stay friends?" Zeta replied, "Yes." Kridrod declared, "Yes, now everything is new. With these skills, they will become great." Zeta, grinning, said this is where they will say goodbye. She will never forget him. Liber exclaimed with a grin, "Good luck searching for trash alone." The friends left. The shocked protagonist heard Kridrod laughingly tell Zeta, "Well, she really went overboard with saying she would never forget this loser." She replied, "Courtesy is now the key to success." Liber laughingly asked, "Is she practicing on him now?" All 3 laughed loudly and disappeared from sight. He began to ruefully ruffle his hair, in utter despair. The priest left and irritably remarked, "Hadn't they told him to get out of here? The only virtue the powerless have is obedience." Finally, he would give him some advice. Many incompetent people often experience this. Didn't he think about leveling up if he had no skill? This was all just a fantasy. How could he fight monsters and demons, gain experience, and thus level up without any skill? That was a completely stupid idea. There's no sin in being ordinary. The guard kicked him so hard that MC flew a considerable distance and fell face first onto the ground. The priest added, however, that it was foolish to go into the forest to level up, only to end up being devoured by demons. That's what fools do, but it's his will. No matter how many incompetent people die, this world will lose nothing. Let him follow the path that suits him best. The protagonist was in a completely depressed state. His thoughts were running through his head. He had lost. Any pathetic orphan's life would change if he managed to acquire a skill here, at the blessing ceremony. He was the only loser in the once-in-a-lifetime bet. Liber, Zeta, and Kridrod apparently won big. But that was good. If his friends were happy, then he would be happy too. Yes, he would be happy. With these thoughts in mind, he couldn't help but burst into tears, screaming out how hurt he was. He thought, yes, terribly hurt. Why were skills rare? If only he'd gotten a simple skill, one that would have been well received during adventurer registration, that would have been enough. But all 3 of them had acquired powerful skills. With such luck, if only they'd shared them with him. And he had nothing. They'd taken him and abandoned him. Weren't they friends who always helped each other? Many other thoughts swirled in his head. He ruffled his hair in despair. Then he suddenly stopped, tried to get his emotions under control, and told himself, I have to stop this. Now he needed to think about what awaited him. How was he supposed to live now? If he continued living the same life as before, alone, he would eventually die under a fence. And what would it take to prevent that? He'd have to make another bet. In other words, he needed to level up. Arriving in the forest, he resolutely thought, no matter how many hundreds of thousands of unskilled people had challenged him and failed, the chances of that happening in his current situation were extremely slim. Seeing the horned rabbit monster, the protagonist rushed after it, thinking, what's your level after growing up in City 1? Perhaps that didn't matter either. From now on, to survive, to even look back at his friends with a little triumph, he had to become strong. There was no other way. Family, fortune, friends. Someone with nothing to lose can become strong no matter what. A few days later, when he had killed 0 monsters, he cried out in dismay. This is completely unreal. He was going to die like this. What on earth was going on? Even the horned hare, who seemed the weakest to him, had beaten him up. Blood was flowing again. He was scared. Regardless, he ran around every day, only to receive more wounds. There were no serious injuries, but he was scratched and bitten. If this continued, it would be the end for him. After all, it was pointless. People without skill try to level up, right? And it all ends tragically. They get mauled to death. It's in a person's best interests to lead an ordinary life. A person who doesn't understand their situation has a dream, and when they face reality, they see all this. At the end of the road, a level 1 with no skill, and their comrades in the struggle awaits death. If I don't return now, I really could die. Although, since I'm going to die no matter which path I take, what difference does it make? Then, full speed ahead. The protagonist ventured deeper into the forest, and then, deep within, he encountered it. The blue dragon. Even he knew the terror emanating from this monster. Rumors and legends circulate that it killed the best adventurers in the blink of an eye and destroyed countless towns and villages. What should he do about it now? He was definitely about to say goodbye to his life. Suddenly, the dragon looked at him closely, and the MC heard a voice say that by the will of heaven he dared to descend to earth, and he never thought he would face such a strange fate. The protagonist muttered in confusion. Maybe that's the dragon speaking? The monster replied, he's wrong. He's not just a dragon, he's a serpent dragon. The protagonist panicked, thinking, no, this can't be. The dragon spoke, addressing him as a human boy. His fate had managed to tie together destiny, influence the will of heaven, and bring him together. What does he wish for next? MC felt like he was going crazy. He wondered what he was talking about. Fate, the will of heaven, desire? Was he talking about killing him? The dragon continued, saying that whatever he wished for, he had to do it with his own hands. Until he truly desired something and reached out to achieve it, neither heaven nor earth, neither people nor gods would grant him anything. So, what does he wish for? The protagonist thought in confusion. What kind of nonsense is he spouting again? No matter how much he asked for skill, God gave him nothing. But if he asked the serpent dragon, would he grant his wish? After thinking a little more, he said then, he wishes for power. Such immense power, which even without the skill the god was supposed to grant him, he wouldn't have any trouble with. He'd give him that? The dragon laughed and asked again. Power? So cliché, but that too was possible. However, as he'd already said, neither heaven nor earth would grant him anything. He must grasp his desire himself and feed it. All he can do is help him obtain everything, both what he wants and what he doesn't. This is also the will of heaven. MC, incredulous, clarified, is this true? But how can this be done? The dragon said, he will speak briefly. He, the blue dragon Umanonushi, will become his devilish trainer and will train him through brutal beatings. He will be completely exhausted. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise. So that's how it is. But he didn't really have much of a choice. 5 years later, the protagonist one day told Umanonushi, the break is over. They need to repeat the training. But the dragon declared, that's enough, he exclaimed in bewilderment. Why? Umanonushi replied, let him check his status. MC activated his stats and was surprised to see that all his stats had incredibly high scores. He said, puzzled, wow, but he is a talentless nobody without any skills. He still needs to train a little. The dragon said it just so he knew. Normal people don't exceed 99 points. The protagonist exclaimed in surprise. Seriously? Umanonushi replied, seriously. He asked then, why him? Because his opponent was him. The blue dragon snake? The dragon remarked. He could only say that such was his fate. The maximum level for a being like him is 10 million. Since he became stronger with him, the best time to stop at that limit. The protagonist said thoughtfully, that's how it is. To be honest, he hasn't fully realized it yet. He wanted to become strong enough to overcome his lack of skill. Was he even close to his ideal? The dragon asked sarcastically. Was he about to cry from sadness now? He answered no. He was simply remembering his hellish days. But he was very grateful to him. This was all thanks to him. MC bowed politely to the blue dragon and thanked his teacher once again. Umanonushi said, he's giving him a parting gift. The power he'd received, he'd cultivated over the years and seized it. He'd said they weren't doing anything. But as for the gift, let it remain between them. Rhea had promised him that. Flapping his wings, the blue dragon said, his fate has reached the next level. Now he better go and do as he pleases. At that moment, a spatial hole formed in the air, and Umanonushi began to disappear into it. The protagonist shouted, will they see each other again? The dragon responded, if so, this is what fate decrees. After a while, the protagonist, left completely alone again, muttered, these 5 years were like a dream. He almost died in every way, and that was indeed true. He began to recall episodes of his torturous training with the dragon. But at that moment, he heard sounds characteristic of goblins. The protagonist cursed. They were so tactless. They were interfering with his memories. He attacked his opponents, shattering the ground between them with his blow. The goblins looked at this in bewilderment. it, then at him. MC cursed himself. It hadn't worked. He'd shattered them into tiny pieces again. How difficult. If there were no corpses left, they wouldn't run away after all. Having destroyed his opponents, he thought, somewhere around level 10,000, everything starts to crumble. He wondered out loud, looking at the goblins' bodies, what to do now. His training hadn't just made him physically stronger. It seemed this story was also about the work of cleansing his soul of minor grudges and hostility. He would gain power and ascend, laughing at the friends who abandoned him. He'd experienced such feelings before the training, but now for some reason, they were gone. He'd risked his life so much that he had no time for it, but now, things couldn't go on like this. He remembered Zeta mockingly saying she would always remember him. Maybe he should put that plan into action again? Yes, even without skill, he could barely make ends meet with passable quests. He'd try being an adventurer. With these thoughts in mind, humming to himself, he set off for town. At that moment, several men, looking like real criminals, called out to him. The largest of them laughed obnoxiously and said, "It's dangerous to walk here alone." The protagonist wondered if these were mountain bandits. The bandit continued, "If he doesn't mind, could they escort him to safety?" The protagonist wondered if they were taking his personal belongings by force. Then they wanted him himself. He wondered out loud, "Are they kidnapping people?" The second bandit laughed indignantly. "He's putting them to shame with these words. They were ordinary people, kind and a little wild." The third bandit remarked, "Well, if he'd had any other good skills, the slave trader would have paid a lot for him." The second bandit admired what a brilliant plan. The lead bandit turned to the MC and said, "Here's what it means. If he doesn't want to die, he'll follow them obediently. Don't worry, they'll sell him for a high price. He'd be happy if they paid good money for him, wouldn't he?" Rhea calmly replied, "He doesn't have any." The bandit stared at him in confusion. What was he talking about? The protagonist explained that, unfortunately, he had no skills. Even if they sold him, they wouldn't get any money for it. The bandit angrily replied, "Even if he lied, the slave trader's appraisal skill would see through it. Honestly, even if they sold him for cheap, that would be good." The protagonist sighed and said, "It can't be helped." The bandits laughingly asked, "So, he, the source of their income, has resigned himself to his position?" He replied, "He has." With these words, MC spun around and struck one of the bandits so hard that he nearly decapitated him. The other bandits looked at their comrade in surprise and alarm. They exclaimed in bewilderment, "He killed him? With just his bare hands? Let everyone be careful, he does have a skill after all." One of the bandits exclaimed, "A skill for surprise attacks? That's a marvelous thing. We must kill him, he'll be no longer a commodity. He can be dealt with one hand." The protagonist thought in surprise. Their comrade was killed, but the joy of high-quality loot is more important to them. Are they mental idiots? Two bandits rushed at him, but the protagonist dispatched them with a single blow, and none of them even understood how it happened. Another bandit pressed himself against a rock face and began begging for help. MC exclaimed in irritation, "No, if he let them get away, they'd go back to killing and selling. They'd already done enough." Clenching his fists, he thought, he didn't feel like a callous man who didn't care about murderers. But rather than drag him out of this wilderness for several days and hand him over to the authorities, it was better to finish him off now. At that moment, another bandit emerged from behind the rock, somehow different from the others, and exclaimed in surprise. While he was distracted, he dared to kill them all. He had such a powerful pure enhancement skill. Rhea was surprised. "Is this their leader?" He answered out loud. He already said he had no skills. The bandit leader, having applied the enhancement, improved his physical form and exclaimed, "What a meeting." To be honest, he also possessed an enhancement skill called 10% strength. Why don't they measure their strength? The protagonist was indignant. Had he even listened to him? He's banditing in the mountains? He has skill. He's the chosen one after all. The bandit looked puzzled, but so what? The protagonist explained that the point of strength is to use it for others. But he, with his skill, only uses it for himself. And on top of that, he's trying to harm others. What kind of idiot is he? Then, just as he wanted, they'll measure their strength. With these words, he placed his hand on a huge rock and lifted it up like fluff. The bandit leader shouted in confusion, "Wow." The MC looked at him and said, "Well, they can begin." The leader shouted that he was being attacked, and the protagonist pinned him down with the rock. After that, he looked up and saw a man watching the scene in a daze. The protagonist leaped high into the air and landed right next to the man, who exclaimed in amazement, "How did he manage to reach such a height?" The MC asked gloomily, "Was he the slave trader who had forced those bandits to attack? Were they his bodyguards?" The man backing toward his cart answered in a voice trembling with fear, "No, that's not it. He must have met them on the road while transporting goods." Rhea, flexing his fists, said the shop was closing for today. The slave trader bowed to him so much that his pants split in the back. He began to apologize, exclaiming, "He really is strong. Since that's the case, maybe under his command, they'll put his skills to good use. As a reward, he'll pay him 3 times what he paid those good-for-nothings. Such a price for his abilities." The protagonist sarcastically said, "Is he offering him to become his accomplice?" The criminal's voice trembled, as if he'd misunderstood him. "The slave trade is a wonderful business too. You have to give your clients what they want. This job once ranked 16th among the most sought-after professions. If he's not interested in money, payment in kind is possible. From an innocent girl to a mature woman, of course, even men." He laughed nastily and added, "Of course, this is for the world, for people." Those were his last words in life. After the protagonist dealt with him, he opened the carriage and said, "If anyone's here, they better run." Looking closer, he saw a girl named Noam, handcuffed to the bars. MC wondered in surprise. Was she also a kidnapping victim? Sometime later, the two of them arrived in the kingdom of Centikelion at the Simonora Fashion Center. The salesperson asked the lady if she had any requests. Did she need the bare minimum? Or something for a party? They'll fulfill any order. Today, she's wearing a beautiful casual outfit, just like pajamas. The girl answered sharply, "It's pajamas." She confusedly asked the protagonist what she should do. She was allowed to choose whatever she wanted, but this is her first time in such a fancy store. Let him help her. The protagonist looked at her indifferently. Noam thought sheepishly, no enthusiasm. He seemed more annoyed. What was to be expected from city dwellers? It was probably cool. On the contrary, he was remembering how he freed her. The MC asked again, "What? She just said she'd do anything?" The girl confirmed, "Yes, she said so." She was asking him, she'd do anything. Just let him take her with him. He asked, didn't the slave trader catch her? What about going back to her hometown, for example? Noam grabbed his clothes and said, to tell the truth, she had recently undergone a blessing ceremony, and that's how she was able to obtain a skill. But it was some kind of amazing skill. Ever since that day, a strange atmosphere has hung in the village. One night, when she was going to bed, robbers suddenly showed up. Rhea guessed that she'd been kidnapped by slave traders. The girl replied, yes, that's right. They'd said there would be plenty of buyers for a young girl with such skill, and they'd laughed so obnoxiously. The protagonist thought, for people like that, such a rare skill is priceless. I wonder how the slave traders in this story knew about this girl's existence? They were whispering about her in the village. That must be how she got involved. She continued, she didn't want to go back there, neither home nor the village. After thinking for a moment, he said, fine, he'll take her with him. Picking her up in his arms, he added, but right now he plans to become an adventurer, she exclaimed. Then she'll follow that path too. So it was by chance that they came here, but is that really a good thing? Noam called out to him again, breaking him from his memories, and said, she's finished. The girl showed him her new outfit and asked, how does it feel? The seller flatteringly said, it's suitable for any journey, just as she'd requested. MC took out the payment and thought, Snake Dragon Master. In his pocket, he found his parting gift. Could it have such a use? He showed the seller the coarse gold dust, and the young man joyfully exclaimed, of course, such payment will do. Noam sheepishly thanked the protagonist and added, she will definitely do anything for him. He wondered, why so ardently give herself up? After this, the allies went to the guild. On the way, she delightedly asked, what is that large building over there? The protagonist replied, a palace. That's the capital, isn't it? The girl was surprised. A palace? Then that's where the king lives? He noted, that's probably it. Thoughts began to form in his head, and he returned. 5 years later, approaching the guild, he said, how wonderful. In place, as expected. The MC told the girl that abilities mean everything here, so there are plenty of rude people here. Surely that doesn't bother her? She replied, confused. No, it doesn't. He remarked, yes, it seems unrealistic, but they will get in. Once inside the guild, he asked if he could come in. The enormous Londite replied, of course, they wanted to register? Noam screamed in fear and surprise. Is this a monster? She buried her face in Rhea's back and said, she knew it. The Adventurers Guild is a scary place. The guildmaster remarked in surprise. She seemed afraid of her. Not suitable at all. And the young man has quite strong nerves with her. The protagonist replied, 5 years ago, he was completely petrified in front of her. She looked at him closely, narrowing her eyes, and exclaimed, ah, he's the boy who called her auntie. He said, yes, it was he, Ryuya. Master noticed, that's right. And what about those three? How are they doing? At that time, Noam was trying to convince herself, this woman isn't scary. She's huge, but not scary. He hesitated before answering and briefly recounted what had happened between them. Londite said, so that's it. People with rare skills are recruited ahead of time, right? Well, that's normal for the church. They remained a company without any morals. He said that's why he trained alone, so that even without a skill, he could become an adventurer. In addition to helping someone in trouble, he asks her, could she please register him as an adventurer? Noam said, she asks her for the same thing too. Lord Ryuya is a wonderful person. He saved her when she was kidnapped by bad people. Such a wonderful person will definitely be a good adventurer. It's the absolute truth. He asked in bewilderment, why is she acting more desperate than him? The girl hesitated. Londite said, what a fool. Do they need to repeat what an adventurer needs? The protagonist answered without hesitation. Energy that enables him to accomplish any task. The ability to stick to his intentions and a heart that sympathizes with his friends. She laughed and exclaimed, yes, he's accepted. Welcome. He replied, confused. Skill wasn't on the list. Noam exclaimed, she'd kept him company countless times during training. And MC is such a good person, and she, Miss Londite, is kind, even if she seems formidable. The guildmaster chuckled and remarked, well, that's true, but the girl has been through a lot. This is a legal matter entirely. Rhea said, that's true. Regarding that incident, when he met her, he killed the slave trader and his henchman who attacked him on the spot. The woman added, outside the city, hand-to-hand combat is essentially no problem. He's a good boy. The protagonist pulled some papers from his pocket and added that the slave trader had something useful among his belongings. He hands it over to her. Londite, looking at the papers, exclaimed in surprise, wow, these are slave trade ledger books, duplicates of contracts, even notes on client habits. How cool to give such a gift before registration. He thought, it's good that he's been on the safe side, and he's killed a lot of people. Noam exclaimed, he's amazing, isn't he? Londite said, then she's giving this to the promising recruit. He knows how to use it, right? With that, she handed him a name card. Noam asked, What is this? The protagonist replied, a guild card. It displays the information needed for registration. He pierced his finger, dropped some blood on the guild card, and explained that if you smear the blood, the necessary information will appear. When Londite saw his stats, which included a level of 17 and an F rank, she exclaimed in surprise, wow, level 17 is enough for a beginner. Is that the result of his training? MC, however, was surprised by this number for another reason. He thought, 17? No way! Is his level too low? Noam exclaimed in admiration. How convenient. He asked her to wait a bit while he activated his status, where his level showed around 9 million points, and he breathed a sigh of relief, thanking the heavens. But then, why is his level so low here? He wondered out loud, is it true that 99 is the maximum level for a human? Londite replied, it's true. It's written in some book. She had never seen anything like it in practice. Even an adventurer can reach a rank upon reaching level 50, and for someone to surpass level 60, that's the stuff of legends. Rhea said, I see. He thought, in other words, the guild card wasn't designed to display levels above 99. Therefore, it only displays the last 2 digits available for display. The guildmaster remarked, all is well. Registration is complete. Now he's an adventurer. The protagonist pushed Noam forward and asked Londite to take another person. The girl said, she's asking for her love and favor. Let her work here. The guildmaster said, well, since she's gone through the ceremony, she's already a wonderful adult. There's no reason to refuse her, even based on guild principles. But maybe this will register her skill. With these words, she showed her the guild card. The master asked if she, as a capable adventurer, was ready to use her skill, the one that had brought her so much grief. The protagonist clarified, what if she doesn't show it? Londite replied, no, especially not her skill. It must be difficult for a girl, but she still had to do it. Noam declared she would. Since she and her new friend would be adventurers, she had no doubt about it. Londite, handing her the guild card, exclaimed joyfully, good answer. Let her use it. The knife is right there. A woman approached the MC and asked why he was sticking up for her like that. Was he already in a relationship with her? He replied, that's the usual saying. The girl dropped blood on the card, smeared it, and the result shocked Londite. The information stated that she was level 1 with the Alchemy King skill, rank F. Ryuya, surprised, asked what Alchemy King meant. The guildmaster snatched the guild card and looked at the list. She then screamed in amazement. She thought so. This is the highest level of alchemy. SSS qualification. No one looked at her in surprise and asked, what does that mean? The woman asked, confused. She didn't understand. It's a top-tier crafting skill, encompassing the skills of a mixer, a blacksmith, and a mechanic. With only one alchemist, the city's price would skyrocket. That's so cool. A veritable walking industrial revolution. The girl said in bewilderment, finding the skill unusual. He clarified, really? Londite looked at her admiringly and said, so, back in her homeland, everyone went crazy. She was definitely a golden egg. Everyone loses their minds when a skill like that appears. Her allies clarified, just like she did now? At that moment, Masho exclaimed, this is incredibly cool. A true treasure. Londite sternly advised him to shut up. Noem declared that she wanted to be only with her savior. She trusted only him. He thought he too had experienced the feeling of mistrust. The trust and human connection he had built up until then had been shattered by this skill. Since he could do it, he wanted to help this girl. He said it out loud. Look, Noem replied, yes, that's true. At that moment, other adventurers approached them. Ma Xiao exclaimed, he heard everything. If she has such a cool skill, let her come to them. With him, the owner of the Ghost Hands skill, they will become B-rank friends. And if you look closely, she's so cute too. You can create phantoms day and night. You couldn't wish for better. The protagonist, covering Noem with his hand, told the guy to get out of here. She wants to be in his company. There's nothing more to say. If the adventurer shouted in irritation, telling him to shut his mouth, don't let him dare show off in front of him. Londite calmed him down. She shouted, that's it. She declares legitimate self-defense. The protagonist hit the unruly guy, and the allies left the guild. 40 minutes later, southeast of the city on the Corant Plain, Londite drawled, well, she's fallen in love with him again. Oh, how they gave that guy a hard time. He responded sullenly. He'd done him harm. Noam exclaimed in delight. It was incredible. The guildmaster said, don't worry about it. This idiot will be finished off someday. Something else is important. They're starting training new recruits, gathering medicinal plants. She can't hear them. They want to gather herbs. The allies answered in unison. Yes, they do. Londite continued enthusiastically. Let them listen to her. They are pink babies, just born. There's something good in cooing too. She leaned sharply toward the protagonist and told him to repeat it. He obediently made a baby sound. The guildmaster continued. Now she will furiously pound into them all the intricacies of adventurer work and not take a break. She asked the protagonist again sharply. Is he happy? He answered. Yes, he is. The woman added. And if they weaken, she will stuff them with black algae reminiscent of the excrement in their bodies. The MC thought in confusion. The training had started off promisingly. A few minutes later, Londite said, so that's the thing. The time limit. Even the most experienced can put 10 pieces of the wrong material in one basket. Ryuya raised his hand and announced that he was finished. She looked into his basket and noted in surprise, everything is correct. How did he do that? The protagonist replied, He trained in the mountains, the woman exclaimed dramatically. Oh no, he's a wild child. At that moment, Noam screamed. She's done too. When the master looked at her basket, her surprise knew no bounds. She exclaimed in confusion, is this a top-grade medicinal herb? Where did she get that? It's simply a miracle, the protagonist asked the girl in surprise. Maybe it's thanks to her alchemy king skill? That stuff usually doesn't grow here. She shrugged in bewilderment and replied, who knows? It just caught her eye. But there it is. It's simply amazing. Even without skill, he can do anything. She respects him, he muttered sheepishly. She's exaggerating. Londite drew their attention to herself and informed them that the medicinal herb collection had finished surprisingly quickly. The allies happily asked, so can they leave early? The master declared they would be inspecting the territory. There is an area on this plain that is off limits. She had planned to inspect the place they were heading to once during their training, and since they were going to be adventurers, they should remember the following. MC mentally noted that the master was trembling, and besides, his faint fog, something extraordinary definitely awaited them ahead. Londite said that if they got lost by mistake, they could say goodbye to their lives. The Adventurers Guild of the Centicilian Kingdom has designated a forbidden territory that must not be entered under any circumstances. It's called the Evil Spirit Zone. The clergy is also erecting a barrier and defending itself as best they can. Half the territory was overrun by evil spirits. If you were to enter here carelessly, they would simply drive you to death. The protagonist asked if they were really outside the barrier now. The woman replied that now was the perfect opportunity to show them her skill. It was called hearing enhancement. With this power, you could clearly make out even distant whispers. Even with a disembodied spirit that made no sound, something would work. After some time, the protagonist noticed that he was surprisingly passive. Noem asked, why not aggressive? Londite exclaimed in bewilderment. What do you mean? Why? With his help, she had saved herself from certain death more than once. Adventurers know how to avoid danger. Noem spoke respectfully. That's what she's the guild master for. The woman silenced her and said she could hear something. MC looked up and pointed at something, asking, is this it? Noem screamed in fear. Londite exclaimed, it's the Legion! They have to get out of here. This is a representative of the most sinister class. No physical attacks work on it. Damn it. And she believed those guys from the church. Rhea stood his ground fearlessly, the monster approaching him. Noem screamed his name in fear. Master cried out in bewilderment, what the hell is he doing, you idiot? He turned around and replied, he trusts Noem. He has an idea. At that moment, the evil spirit pounced on him. Master screamed his name in horror. Everything around him went dark for a moment, then everything dissipated. He, alive and unharmed, looked up and said, that's what he thought. Both girls exclaimed in confusion. He's even thinking about something? They were stunned by the fact that he was fine. He thought evil spirits were sucking the life force out of people. Just as he thought, he was wiped off the face of the earth when he unleashed something incredible. You could call it a technique. But more importantly, it seems the reality is more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Noem exclaimed in delight. Physics has no effect on him. This is simply amazing. Londite asked in bewilderment. Does he really have some kind of skill? Ignoring their surprise, he said gloomily, he's coming. Londite asked in confusion, what? The protagonist said that if he continues to exorcise evil spirits like this, there won't be a single one left on this plane. The master exclaimed in confusion, is he serious? It will take 2 to 3 days to clear this plane. They'll walk through the miasma. 35 minutes later, the allies were already in the center of the miasma. Londite exclaimed in amazement, a palace in the fog? How is that possible? The protagonist grumbled, why did they both follow him? She replied, that's just the guild master's nature. Noem replied, she doesn't want to part with her master. She'll always be by his side. He noticed she was shaking. At that moment, Londite shouted at him, legions. Having dealt with them, he broke through the wall of the palace's interior, presumably the top floor of the throne room, and the allies entered the building. Abinion grinned and said, it's not often that people come to visit her. MC asked, is she the boss of the evil spirits that infest this plane? Noem exclaimed in confusion. Some pale person, Abinion said, likely lumping her in with all those spirits. How presumptuous and rude. She is one of the supreme beings that rule this world. One of the 18 devil spirits, the devil spirit Abinion. The protagonist asked then if she could disappear from these parts. She exclaimed indignantly, how horrible. He continued, but weren't the local evil spirits because of her? The devil spirit replied, she doesn't know that. They must have simply been drawn to her miasma. The protagonist noted, that's why it's causing trouble for the entire area. If she finds refuge somewhere else as far away from the city as possible, that would be the best option. Noem added, precisely. He continued, since she was a higher being, he thought it was within her capabilities. Abinion drawled, no. She liked it here. That's why she settled here. They, humans, do the same, right? MC replied, perhaps so. But they don't live as long as she does, and don't possess her strength. If she is wise, then perhaps she will curb her divine arrogance and yield to them. The spirit said, well, since we're talking about arrogance, here's what she will say. According to a rule that has never been broken in ancient times, the weak submit to the strong. The weak surrender screaming, prostrate themselves in an instant, and beg for supreme mercy. Otherwise, death awaits them. Only this way, and no other. He thought, even negotiations have their limits. He said out loud then, if he were stronger than her, would she submit to him? Abinion exclaimed in irritation. He didn't even understand the situation he was in. Ignorance, and such vanity deserved certain death. She would kill him slowly, and he would feel the torments of hell. Noem exclaimed in bewilderment. Her master wanted to fight the boss of evil spirits? Londite replied, let them say whatever they wanted, but this was a whole other level. So says the intuition of an adventurer with over 10 years of experience. Her intuition had been telling her that for half a day, too. Abinion casually turned to them and told them not to worry. She would spare them and allow them to return to the city, or wherever they came from. The girls exclaimed in bewilderment. What? The devil spirit continued. In exchange, they would spread the news of this boy's tragic death throughout the area. They would be singers, warning others. MC said he had no doubt she wouldn't leave anyone alive. She's very kind. Spirit replied, it's a problem of efficiency. Only he doesn't know what he's gotten himself into, so that's enough. He noticed. And yet, she leaves two alive. There's a kindness in her judgment. He even liked her a little. Abinion, not expecting this, looked at him in confusion and then exclaimed irritably, what's wrong with him again? Even if he flatters her, nothing will come of it. It's all pointless. The protagonist, flexing his fists, said, that's why he'll take her life until she completely capitulates. Spirit grew angry and shouted, it's really unpleasant. No one has ever treated her like that before. The protagonist was surprised. Is that true? She flared up even more and replied, no, not in that sense. And anyway, let him sit there. Before she dies, she'll give him a lecture on the structure of this world. He noticed. She said device. Abinion shouted at the girls that they would listen to this too. There are 3 types of higher beings on Earth. To be honest, she belongs to the top species. She is a devil spirit, and there are only 18 of them in the world. Rhea said she already mentioned this when she introduced herself to them. She exclaimed, he still doesn't know. How can they say that a person can only reach level 99 at most? People can train as much as they want, but their level, humans, shouldn't go beyond 99, right? How pathetic. The protagonist inquired based on this, how are they doing with this matter? The spirit exclaimed, that's a good question. To make them even more desperate, she dared to tear off the pages of the notebook one by one. Abinion began tearing off pieces of paper, and it turned out that all 3 higher races had different maximum levels. For devil spirits, it was 99,999 points. She looked at her opponents and triumphantly declared, her level is 59,845. Noam exclaimed in amazement. A level higher than 10,000? Lundite said in bewilderment. There's no way a human could compete with someone like that. That's it, their city is finished. Abinion joyfully exclaimed. Yes, that's the reaction she was expecting. Then the spirit looked at the protagonist and asked, what about him? Has he realized his worthlessness? He calmly looked at her and replied, no. Abinion exclaimed in surprise. What? In response, he activated his power, which began to damage the devil spirit. She cried out in bewilderment. What kind of astonishing life energy is this? Her body, the body of a devil spirit, is evaporating. Londite said in confusion, pointing at her opponent. Why has she turned pale? Noam noted in confusion. Did it work? Abinion panicked, thinking, this can't be. She couldn't see this guy's information. In other words, his level is higher? As if reading her mind, he answered, because his level is 8,347,917. Not only was the devil spirit stunned by his answer, but so were his allies. Abinion, evaporating, asked what he'd said. MC had answered. He'd told her the number. She screamed that she surrendered. She was stupid. She didn't know what she'd gotten herself into. She begged him for mercy. Let him at least spare her life. Rhea deactivated his power, and she collapsed and began to bow to him. He asked in surprise, do you believe him? Without raising her head, the spirit answered, of course. The way His Majesty's power surpasses hers chilled her to the bone. The protagonist thought in confusion. She addressed him as His Majesty? Abinion, without rising from her bow, continued. She humbly apologized for disturbing him, but was he by any chance familiar with something like a giant snake or some kind of natural phenomenon? He clarified. She's talking about a snake dragon. The spirit screamed. They carelessly break the rules of the universe and leave. The protagonist asked, confused, what that meant. Abinion said she'd recently said there were 3 kinds of higher beings on Earth. But beyond this world, beings called the 8 snake dragons, the 4 dimensions, the 2 poles, they dwell in an inaccessible space. Once every few hundred years, they suddenly arrive and exert such an influence that the world is turned upside down. MC grimly remarked, thinking he understood what she meant. The spirit continued. In other words, he, His Majesty, was chosen by the snake dragon, and she humbly asks for forgiveness for the rudeness shown to him. She will do anything. He clenched his fist and said then, let her die. Abinion looked at him with fear and let out a puzzled breath. He unclenched his fist and said he was only joking. Sometime later, on his way back, he thought, just like that, peace had come to the plane. And on the way back, he was inundated with questions from his allies. Londite said in bewilderment, such an incredibly high level. He'll have to believe him. And she's seen everything. Noam said admiringly. She thought he was simply an amazing person. For a strong person like him, skill is unimportant, unlike her, because she is used as they please. He countered, that's not true. He was also quite troubled by despair and the inferiority complex of a man without skill. He was even envious, and the impetus for training was frustration. Even now, he considers himself a mediocrity. He'd simply grown stronger, and his abilities were likely limited. Therefore, he'd often rely on those with exceptional skills like her from now on. Would she help him at a time like this? The girl, looking deeply into his eyes, joyfully exclaimed, yes, indeed. Abinion said, he has exceptional personality. He remarked in surprise, She's still here. Isn't she moving here on request? The spirit replied, she'd already cleaned the palace. Lundite turned around and noted in bewilderment, yes, he's really gone. He was there. Abinion said it was because the palace was a phantom. It was created from a part of her. Ryu thought, she's pretty cool after all, he remarked out loud. Well, let her not cause any more trouble. After that, the four of them continued on their way. The spirit declared that she intended to be with His Majesty everywhere. She turned her attention to the girls and said, just let him look at their faces. Lundite and Noem looked puzzled, and the guildmaster said, what's wrong? They knew nothing of these intentions. Evil spirits will come to them, won't they? Abinion stuck her tongue out at them and replied that if she turned off the tap, everything would be solved. That's it. She won the argument. Regarding her appearance, thanks to her miasma adjustments, she could float freely, ranging from white to transparent. She had won, after all. After that, she spread her arms wide and exclaimed, well, they're all returning to the city together in triumph. The allies noticed that the source of their troubles was even talking. The protagonist chuckled. She said a triumphant return? An unexpected turn of events? Or what do you call it? Abinion said. Exactly. Since the oath had been sworn between master and servant, she owed him something. He asked, perplexed. What? Suddenly, she leaned toward him and kissed him. Noem, horrified, covered her face with her hands. Londite was outraged. What was she doing? The protagonist thought in surprise. He felt her body. She was a ghost, but he could still touch her? After that, the devil's spirit calmly declared that they were now spiritually connected and could share a portion of each other's sensations. He asked, perplexed. What? Abinion laughed, saying, he should take a look at the girls. They both looked at them in confusion. The spirit continued with a smile. You can't see through an opponent stronger than yourself. But in his case, everyone was completely naked before him. To his surprise, he saw the characteristics of his allies, and he noted with amazement that he really could see it. Something different. Lundite panicked, grabbed Noem, hugged her, and asked fearfully, what, naked? That's cool, sure, but a little scary, Abinion added. Without a doubt, she shared it with him. He was only telling these girls. This was her modest help. It couldn't be achieved with just his fists. Or could he not accept it from someone who brings trouble? MC looked at her carefully and said, is it fair for a devil spirit to have such a face? The spirit grinned and replied, it's been a while since a man called her beautiful. He thought, well, that's it. They've worked heroically since the very first day after registering as adventurers, and they returned to the city in triumph. When the allies approached the guild, a bandaged Mashao shouted, Dogidza, pointing at the protagonist. It's him. The big guy readied his club and said, what? Londite called out his name in surprise. The protagonist looked at his stats. His skill was a solid fist of total annihilation. He also wondered, what's your level of likes and dislikes, X? This information isn't displayed on the guild card. Noem and the others probably have something similar. The big guy, looking at MC, asked in surprise, is it true that he doesn't have a skill or a weapon? He wasn't nice to his little brother, wasn't he? He'll pay for this. Ma Shao shouted, let him finish him off. After this, the wounded adventurer looked at his attacker and said, he's finished. Now they'll take phantom revenge on him with his brother's entire faction. Dogidza kicked him with all his might and told him to shut up. Then he turned to Ryuya and said, first thing, he'll take him. First, he'll break his arms and legs. After these words, the big man looked at Londite and said, and then, she's been an eyesore for a long time. So from now on, he's the guild master and she's his lover. And he'll put that girl next to her to good use too. The protagonist calmly replied, no, he was indignant. They returned to the city in triumph, only to be threatened. The protagonist activated his power, and the big man's body began to tremble. Dogidza exclaimed in bewilderment, what's wrong with his body? MC replied, it's an energy drain. Abinion said, it's impossible to listen, it's so rude. She turned to her master and asked if she could punish these worthless creatures. He replied, no, it was his personal battle. Dogidza, looking at the devilish spirit in surprise, remarked, what is this? What a beautiful ghost. Is he the only one who sees this? After some time, the case was closed. Then the allies cleared the Adventurers Guild of the troublemakers. The next day, a cartoonish portrait of the big man hung on the notice board. Lundite, looking seriously at her allies, said she apologized, but she would like them to take the dungeon quest. They were in a difficult situation. Her companions looked at her in bewilderment. She continued, first of all, she should thank them. They cleared the plains for herb gathering and cleaned up after Dogidza and his company. The protagonist replied, nothing special. The guildmaster added, she had promoted them in the guild. Let them look at their personal cards. Noem exclaimed in surprise, wow, he's risen 2 ranks. Abinion noted, they immediately raised him to rank D. That's very good. Londite told Noem she hasn't raised her level yet, so please forgive her. But with her skill, she can easily rise to rank B or C. The girl exclaimed, it's fine. Her master contributed more than she did. The spirit chuckled and said how modest she was. The guildmaster said they were going beyond all bounds. They were rapidly rising in rank, and she was helping them. That's why she said they were in a difficult situation. The protagonist asked, perplexed, what's the problem? Abinion noted, that's even more of a problem. It's their abilities. Lundite exclaimed, that's right, and the powers that be won't leave them alone. They'll either want to accept them or crush them. The guild can't protect ranks F to D. The Devil Spirit added, the church, the royal palace, the magic academy, and other organizations. The list of those who would want to use them is endless. MC looked at his hand and thought, if he didn't want to be used, he'd have to show some guts. All he had were his hands, but if he used them seriously, he could start a war. Immense power isn't evil in itself, but one shouldn't use it solely for one's own gain. He could use it to bring peace. Londite looked at Abinion and noticed, she knows a lot. The spirit chuckled and said, well, it's her. The protagonist took the quest request from the guildmaster and said, he gets it. He needed to complete as many quests as possible. That way, they could raise their ranks, right? Londite replied, exactly. Just in case, she'd write a letter of recommendation in her own name. He thanked her and read the quest. They were to go to the kingdom's dungeon to collect materials such as miscanthus root, tsitsi horn, and red sand core. Rank A or B was recommended for this quest. 43 minutes later, the allies were already at the dungeon gates in the kingdom of Centakelion. Noem exclaimed in surprise, these gates are so huge. The protagonist was also amazed. The dungeon guide, Kamadan Shiski, exclaimed upon seeing them, no way. Now let them go away. Level 17, rank D, and he still has no skill. Is he completely stupid? Or maybe he's blind. The quest description seemed to say it all. What the hell are they thinking in their adventurers guild? MC said, they have a letter of recommendation. The girl sternly ordered it to be given to her. Noam trembled and told the spirit, this girl scares her. When Kama read the letter, she exclaimed in surprise, are her eyes deceiving her? Her sister wrote that these two were strong, everything was fine, but she didn't believe them. So the allies entered the dungeon. Noam addressed him by name warily. He thought, as he suspected, she was only level 3. This place scared her. Out loud, he replied that she should stay close to him. The girl replied, thank you, but that wasn't the point. She was thinking about the materials specified in the request. She showed him the document. He was surprised, right? The girl replied, it was true. Kama exclaimed indignantly, stop flirting with them. This isn't some attraction for couples. She's gonna leave them here. The allies looked at her in confusion, and then the protagonist asked, do people with strong skills get more opportunities in the dungeon? She replied, of course. It's unfair, but no matter how hard a person tries, a strong skill decides everything. There's nothing to be done about it. Those with a strong skill live much richer than others. It's easier to level up that way. He considered it. She was right. He was sure many unlucky people would agree with her. Finally, Kama spoke up. They've arrived. They could get the miscanthus root here. That was their first goal. Noam exclaimed in surprise. That's strange. There's so much of it growing over there. She'll go and collect it. Kama snapped. No, it's a trap. The root is the monster's body. When a living creature enters its territory, it entangles the victim and sucks out all their blood. An effective method would be an ability that could strike, penetrate the earth, and strike, or set everything on fire with a fire skill. At that moment, MC, holding the desired root in his hand, asked behind her, is this what they're looking for? The guide looked at him in confusion, made a strange sound, and approaching him, touched the root. After that, she noted in surprise that if he sensed danger, he should try to escape. The protagonist answered, that's why he pulled it out so quickly. Kama was confused. She didn't understand anything. This root was bigger than ordinary miscanthus roots. It was so huge, she'd never seen one like it. Noam said it was miscanthus dragon root. The chance of getting it was less than 1%. The protagonist looked at her in surprise and asked, does she know about that? The girl replied sheepishly, I think so. He thought item appraisal was one of the features of the alchemy lord skill. Since she went with him, the quality of the ingredients he found was improving. It was the same during the tutorial quest. Londite then admired how delicious the herbs she'd collected were, so the second target was the horn of the tsitsi. The allies walked some distance, and Kama exclaimed, wow! It was a demonic beast with a large horn on its head. The guide said, this monster pierces steel armor like a sheet of paper. Meanwhile, MC, removing the horn from the now defeated tsitsi, remarked, oh, really? Kama exclaimed in confusion. He defeated him? That can't be right. That was also something amazing. She'd never seen anything like it. Ryuya, ignoring her astonishment, asked Noam what she could say about this subject. The girl said it was the best material not only for crafting armor, but also as an alchemical ingredient, the chi blade. Kama, as incredulous as the protagonist, asked in surprise, is this really another rare drop? Noam replied, it is. He thought admiringly. Long live the Lord of Alchemy, he asked. So this item is rarer than they were looking for? Oh well, then, they only have one last request. Looking at the way the girl held the blade, he asked, isn't it heavy? Kama, somewhat irritated, said, don't let them get carried away. There's red sand left, right? It's far more dangerous than what they've encountered so far. The protagonist asked her to lead them to this item, adding that they were relying on her. The guide replied, don't let them say she didn't warn them. Red sand is a soft, high-quality mineral that can be used to make medicine, but when exposed to air, it disintegrates into various compounds and mercury. To defend itself, it attacks any living creature that comes near it. It's also called a mercury slug. MC thought, so it's liquid. And how are they supposed to drag it back to the guild? Kama stopped and added, it's around here somewhere. Suddenly, a bright glow appeared in front of them, and the guide exclaimed in surprise, yeah, it really did, and there was so much of it. Rhea asked, so how do you defeat it? Kama screamed, she doesn't know. It's immune to physical attacks and it's poisonous too, probably with some kind of skill. The protagonist thought no matter how strong the poison, it won't affect him, so he'll have to deal with it. He said out loud, Noem, he'll dive into it. The girl answered anxiously, okay. He dove without thinking. The guide screamed in fear. Didn't he even listen to her? He's going to die like this. Kama froze in horror, but after 2 minutes she cried out in confusion. Has the mercury stopped moving? At that moment, the protagonist emerged from the sand and she, startled, screamed. MC, showing her the object, asked, is this his core? The guide, confused, replied, it's round, yes. But how did he even survive? Suddenly, Noem rushed up to him with a glass on a tray and said anxiously, the mercury poison is accumulating in his body. She made an antidote for him. Kama, completely perplexed, asked, when did she manage to do that? Rhea thanked the girl and replied that he was fine. The girl was indignant. Don't let him lie to her. Let him drink it, he said in bewilderment. But he's not lying to her. The guide, amazed, thought, what's wrong with this guy? At that moment, Abinyan appeared. She flew up to him and said, don't let him just stand there. If I don't do anything, the core will melt and disappear. Let him give it to her. With these words, the spirit took the core and spoke. Her body is separated from the outside world, and there is no air, not even oxygen. Abinyan placed it inside herself. The protagonist asked, so are they going back? Noem answered, good. As expected of him, he handled everything with such ease. Kama asked the spirit, will she be able to pull it out later? The spirit replied, well, it will be a little unpleasant, but she can handle it. The guide looked at the protagonist and thought with confusion, even though he doesn't have the ability, he is strong. She had underestimated him. She was sure he would be very happy to receive 3 rare materials. Perhaps she had found a good man after all. She shouted out loud to her allies to wait for her. A week later, when her companions returned to the Adventurers Guild, Londite exclaimed, they're so fast. Are they finished already? What should I do with them? Welcome back. Her allies laid out the requested materials before her. After a while, she added, she'll introduce them to the master of the Artisans Guild, whose name is Senjui. A burly man approached them and asked, those two? MC in turn remarked in surprise, the Artisans Guild? What does that mean? The guild master looked at him pointedly, and Senjui, looking at the core, exclaimed in confusion, that quest? Where do they need such rare materials? Although, even an adventurer of high rank would need several years to collect all this. Londite told the man, the quest isn't over yet. She's asking him to sit down. The protagonist thought in surprise, a representative of the artisans? Why is he here? He wondered out loud. So they have something to make with these materials? Noem noted. Painkiller, tonic, and red sand. Those are the 3 main ingredients for an X potion. The protagonist asked, confused, what is that? The master replied, it's a very strong version of a regular potion. They say this concoction can even restore lost limbs and blood. The client for this quest is the Royal Palace and its Artisans Guild. They need to gather the materials, craft them, and deliver at least 10 bottles to the Royal Palace. Even the best doctors and alchemists can't fulfill such an absurd order. Senjui added, it seems the war with the demons in the northeast isn't going well. Such a potion could be created by someone with high alchemy skill, but there's no such person in his guild. If there was such a person anywhere in the kingdom, they'd be worth their weight in gold. That's why, when someone receives such a skill during the blessing ceremony, they're hunted. MC listened attentively. The master of the Artisans Guild added that they'd have to call off this quest. It's a shame they lost a lot of money, of course, but it can't be helped. At that moment, Noem exclaimed, let them take their time. She'll make this potion. Senjui looked at her in confusion and exclaimed, what? Who the hell is she? What the hell is she talking about? The girl replied irritably, she has the alchemy master skill. She knows how to make this potion. Let him trust her. The man stared at her in bewilderment and asked Londite with irritation, she had such a person in the guild? Why hadn't she told him about this before? The master replied, it looks like this girl decided to use her skill of her own free will. Maybe that's why? A week later, Noem, wiping sweat from her brow, joyfully exclaimed, she's finished. 300 bottles of potion. Both the guild masters and the protagonist asked in surprise, so much. The next day, Senjui bowed low to Noem, pronounced her name in a diminutive form, and asked her to join the Artisans Guild. MC was surprised, thinking, so that's how things turned out. He even called her. The artisan master continued, this place isn't right for her. Alchemist is a highly respected profession, especially if he's a master of alchemy. He promises better conditions and untold riches, so let her join his guild. But the girl categorically declared, she refuses his offer. The old man began to persuade her, please, let her join. Noem replied with a smile, but if there was such a request, she was ready to fulfill it. The protagonist thought, it seems she has become more confident. If the quest helped her grow, then it wasn't useless. Senjui wasn't about to give up. He said, by the way, he had one more request. It was no secret that the quantity of potions was far greater than the royal palace had ordered. She certainly deserved praise for a job well done, and besides, the king himself would want to see her. The allies were very surprised by this. When they arrived at the palace, they were led to the throne room and informed that the king was waiting there. The friends thanked their escort. His Highness Leonard Friedrich Senta Kilian Elric Saul XIII said warmly, they've done an excellent job. Their potions will certainly save the country. He understands how difficult this task was, and he didn't think anyone could accomplish it. It's a great feat for such young adventurers. He would like to reward them fittingly. Noem replied, her voice trembling with emotion, They simply did the best they could. The protagonist wondered, did he understand? And yet, he gave out this quest. Are there really circumstances that force such quests to be given? The king continued. First of all, let them accept the order of the green spirit. With these words, he handed them the reward. Then he turned to Noam and said, let her allow herself to be appointed royal alchemist with full pay. Of course, she won't be able to accept requests from other kingdoms, but they will pay as much as she wants and give her whatever she desires. Confused, Noam asked him to listen to her. Royal Minister Husaid Kamial was indignant. How rude. The girl continued. She wanted His Highness to understand. These potions required extremely rare materials, and she wants him to reward the one who collected them alone. It was Lord Ryuya who did it. Leonard looked at the protagonist in surprise and clarified. Is this true? He answered. It is the absolute truth. The king asked, so he was involved in this too? He is an artisan too? MC wanted to answer. No, Noam simply didn't want to go without him, even though the king himself had invited her. But out loud he said, no, he's supposedly her guardian. Leonard exclaimed in surprise. Guardian? What does he mean by that? The protagonist briefly told him the story of how they met. His Highness said it, so that's it. He saved her from the slave trader, and he even collected all the materials single-handedly. His name is Ryuya? He must be a very talented man. What skill does he have? Leonard noticed that the color of the protagonist's eyes had changed. He answered, he has no skill. His Highness exclaimed in amazement. Is he lying to the king? MC noticed. No, he told the honest truth. The king cried out indignantly, as if he would believe it. There are people in the world who hide their skills to avoid harm, but this is the king, and he must use all the human resources of the kingdom. It would be a sin to hide a skill from him. The protagonist calmly asked if he should show him the guild card. Leonard replied, yes, let him show it. When His Highness looked at the document, he exclaimed in amazement. He couldn't believe it. This was the first time he had met someone without a skill. Husaid noted, with all due respect to His Highness, he still believed this man was lying. He couldn't have achieved all this without his skill. He felt like he was trying to gain his trust. If he had no skill, he was useless. Let the king pay attention only to a girl with alchemy skill. Noam declared decisively that if they were driving away her master, then she was leaving too. Husaid's anger softened, and he said with a broad smile, they're doing this for her, right? Such a chosen young lady shouldn't stand next to useless trash without skill. Trash like him is worthless. Noam replied irritably. He's her savior, and she wouldn't hear anything from someone who spoke ill of her master. The minister, perplexed, remarked how rude. At that moment, a Binion appeared in the air and praised the girl. Well said. Then the spirit turned to the powers that be and angrily declared, let them sing her lord's praises. Otherwise they might suffer. At first, she had decided to destroy the entire kingdom, but now she'll probably limit herself to just this palace. The allies stared at her in surprise. Husaid shouted in panic, who is this pale woman? Leonard was dumbfounded by her appearance. Abinian, gritting her teeth, asked the protagonist, may I? He asked his ally, don't do anything. The minister screamed hysterically, is this a ghost? He ordered the guards to seize her. MC leaped forward, shielding his friends, and holding out his hands exclaimed, let them stand still. They don't want to fight. The spirit laughed maliciously and sarcastically remarked, the small fry have come running, and hundreds of thousands of their kind are no match for her. The king, confused, asked Ryuya, does he have a servant? The protagonist replied, he had met her and befriended her. Abinyan smiled and added, and she fell in love with him. She is the mistress of all the evil spirits living on earth. They, humans, call her Courant, and she serves this young master. This is her king. Husaid cried out hysterically, what? He subjugated a walking disaster. The protagonist spread his hands in bewilderment and replied, that's how it happened. A shocked Leonard said, if this is true, then his achievements are even greater. The minister began to persuade him. His Majesty must not be deceived. This ghost woman was simply trying to deceive him. She was in cahoots with this idiot without skill. Let him think for himself. Is this guy capable of defeating such a monster? The spirit irritably called him bald and asked if his mind was completely empty. Husaid was speechless at such treatment. Noam and MC couldn't believe it either. She just said it outright. Abinian continued irritably. Unlike him, she could see her master's power. He trained with a great dragon and has a level above 8 million. The protagonist thought sadly, and she said that too. Leonard cried out in confusion. Above 8 million, but the minister didn't give up, exclaiming angrily, now it all makes sense. It was simply a large number that only a child could come up with. An idiot like him, a moron who thinks only in terms of human knowledge, is truly pathetic. He received power from a great dragon whose level reaches 10 million. Abinian remarked, good thing she enlightened those fools. Noam happily praised her friend. She's so good. Spirit replied in a satisfied tone, oh well, let her continue praising her. Leonard shouted at the guards to call Leslidza. After that, he said thoughtfully, if he really had such a high level, then he was becoming even more intrigued. He wanted to see his strength with his own eyes. The minister looked at His Highness in bewilderment. Leslidza is from a noble family who wants to faithfully serve her country and will soon become a general. He wouldn't mind fighting her one-on-one. MC calmly replied, okay. At that moment, a knight from the Leslidza kingdom entered the throne room and asked in surprise, is her opponent an adventurer? What nonsense at such a time. The protagonist looked at her in confusion and thought he could look up his opponent's stats. She was 21 years old, level 31. She possessed the skill Shosei Hitokuzane, an attack with a holy attribute. He thought, wow, she's just over 20, and already level 31, not bad. And besides, she's a woman? The girl told him she wasn't sure if he knew, but she didn't use her skill in battle. It's too dangerous. The protagonist replied, well, yes. A 20% increase in strength for each subordinate is a powerful skill. Lesledza exclaimed in amazement. He has the skill appraisal? MC said, no, he doesn't have the skill at all. The girl chuckled and remarked, nonsense. But obviously, it's not that simple. He's right. Her skill gets stronger as the number of her subordinates increases. Currently, she has about 100 people under her command, and they count even when they aren't participating in battle with her. In other words, her attacks are now amplified 20 times. He said, that's damn impressive. Lesledza continued, she'll simply cut him down with one blow of monstrous force. Now he understands that it's stupid to use her skill in a regular sparring match? Rhea calmly replied, no, it's fine. Let her use it. The king wants to see his strength. If she doesn't hit him with all her might, he'll be disappointed. The girl assumed a fighting stance and warned him. She was starting to think he was trying to insult her. Well, as he pleases. Let him try not to die. The knight activated all her power and actively used her skill. It was truly spectacular and sweeping. The aura around her changed, everything sparkled, and she delivered her signature blow. The protagonist held her sword to his face with one hand and looked at her calmly. The guard knights exclaimed in confusion, impossible. He stopped her attack with one hand? That blow cuts through steel with ease. Noem and Abinion were triumphant. The guards were perplexed. This guy doesn't even have any skill. How could this be possible without a strong defensive skill? The girl herself exclaimed in amazement. Her sword? How the hell could this have happened? The protagonist replied, he simply shifted his body weight, that's all. Lesledza exclaimed in irritation. Impossible. He could counterattack and win. He responded in bewilderment. Could he really hit a woman? She looked at him in confusion and asked, she's a woman. MC retorted, isn't she? At that moment, Leonard shouted, enough. He turned to Rhea and said, he's proven his strength. He admits his words are true. Abinion cried out jubilantly, of course it's true. Her lord is the strongest. His Highness, ignoring Husaid's displeasure, continued, so he's made his decision. The minister couldn't believe his ears. Did the king really believe him? Leonard turned to the protagonist and asked if he was capable of accomplishing the impossible again. He asks him to go with Lesledza to the northeast and join the war. To the astonished gazes of those present, the king bowed his head before him and added, their enemies are demons. Let him save their kingdom. It's a hero's duty to confront the threat. The protagonist thought, demons. There are over 72 types of these creatures in the world. They are classified by strength from soldier class to demon king. The maximum level is 999. Humans can defeat soldier or knight rank demons, but humans cannot defeat those of a higher rank. Countless demons threaten humanity. Only by uniting can they fight back. When the allies arrived at their deployment site at the front line, they saw scores of dead and wounded. Lesledza said in confusion, this can't be. It was a real massacre. It's terrible. MC thought. They were told there were 6,000 people on the front lines, plus another 1,000 in the last line of defense. But it seems things are not going well at all. Senior Commander Gazant Futmayu asked, is that her? The girl replied, perplexed. The X potion should have been delivered by now, shouldn't it? The commander sheepishly replied, yes, but they've already used it all up. His assistant, Marcus, also lowered his gaze. Lesledza exclaimed in surprise. What did he say? Gazant said, and the demon's advance suddenly became far more ferocious. Their forces were insufficient. He had to use up all his potions, and he begs her forgiveness. MC noted grimly, and they're still in such a sorry state. The knight general cursed indignantly and exclaimed, such a bloodbath. But enough of this. She'll personally chop off that demon's hands. Abinion asked, did she know he could easily grow them back? At that moment, Noem screamed, everyone get out of her way. Her allies called her name in surprise. The girl declared she was starting to treat the wounded. After that, she turned to Abinion and asked her to get everything she needed. The spirit immediately complied. Noem resolutely declared, first, she'll prepare X potions. In the blink of an eye, she set up a mini laboratory for making potions and exclaimed, there are so many materials and all sorts of tools here that she received from the king. Now she'll prepare more potions. Gazant asked in surprise. And she can do that? The girl replied, she can. After all, she's the master of alchemy. The warriors looked at her in confusion. Her allies smiled at their reaction. Then Marcus shouted, did everyone hear? We need to give the potions to the most wounded first. The most seriously wounded. Even those with mortal wounds can be saved. The warriors thanked the girl. After all, she saved them. The protagonist thought, despair replaced by hope. Light shone in the wounded's eyes. Abinion remarked with a smile, she's a brave girl to have the courage to use her as an item storage. She reminded her of someone. The protagonist replied, Londite mentioned that too. The spirit, looking thoughtfully at Noem, said, she wants to help too. He exclaimed, exactly. She can draw energy, right? Or maybe she can do the opposite? Abinion grinned and picked him up. The wounded soldiers suddenly asked in confusion, what's with this sudden fog? When the substance touched the wounded, they began to notice that they were getting better. Could this mist really be healing? MC thought, the spirit is releasing its life force. He wondered out loud, is it really necessary to carry him in her arms? She replied that it was absolutely necessary. He understood that this way the wounded's regeneration would be enhanced. Their first task was to heal everyone. That way he could keep the death toll to a minimum. An hour later, Lesledza thanked her allies and said that without their help, thousands would have died. This is an amazing feat. She guarantees that word will reach His Majesty. With these words, the girl removed her helmet. Gazette remarked, "Are you sure she should take it off?" Abinian exclaimed admiringly. Wow. She thought the knight didn't take off her helmet because she didn't look very good. But really, she's a real beauty, right? The protagonist thought, not so rude. Lesledza replied to the commander, "They've saved many soldiers, she should show them due respect. It would be rude to thank them without removing her helmet," she said, and she'd made her decision. Then she asked what the demons were doing. The commander replied, "They're retreating now. It looks like they're playing with them, but they'll probably attack again." The girl was indignant. "Are they laughing at them?" Handing the envelope to the commander, she noticed it was from the king. When the man read His Highness's order, he exclaimed in bewilderment, "Is this really true?" Lesledza responded sheepishly. They finally handed over full command to her. From now on, she's the supreme commander. Gazant was about to protest, but she insisted she thinks he still remembers her skill. MC, who had been looking at her in surprise, thought, exactly. She had a very powerful skill, and besides, her skill has no power limit. The girl exclaimed, "All 7,000 soldiers will become her power. This is their trump card in this war." Gazant objected doubtfully. "It's not that simple. Will her body withstand it?" He thoughtfully noted, "If there are 7,000 soldiers, how much will the strength increase?" Marcus told his father, 1,400 times. The commander agreed. Right. Skills can have consequences when used. Her body might simply not withstand the blow. Lesledza answered decisively. She was ready for this. She was a knight, and a knight dedicates herself to protecting the kingdom. If there's a way to dispel the threat facing the kingdom, then she wouldn't mind giving her life. The final decision, however, was hers. She could only use her ability in a critical situation. Besides, her new allies had saved so many people, she wouldn't let them die here. Rhea thought, and that's why she wanted to put herself in danger. The girl continued, "When the battle began, let them find a safe place to avoid the power of her skill. They would only have one try." Gazant, close to tears, exclaimed, "What determination!" Marcus added, "She's willing to do this for them." "No, for the kingdom." The protagonist apologized for interrupting. He said, of course, he has nothing against their strategy, but he can't just not participate in the battle, can he? Lesledza responded, confused. "He's already saved so many lives. That's enough," he declared decisively. "No, he'll go there," she asked, puzzled. "What does that mean?" Finally, Lesledza, drawing her sword forward, asked the protagonist standing behind her, "Is he sure? Does he really think this will work?" He replied, "That way she can use her skill and he'll take the brunt of it." The girl concluded, "So he's confident?" Gazant asked, looking at them, puzzled. "What's going on? This looks strange." The warrior replied, "But it's Lord Ryuya. It must be something important." Marcus remarked, "Yes, it certainly is." Lesledza asked MC if he was sure he could handle it. What if it was too much for his body? He replied that in his opinion, it wouldn't be a bad idea to give his life to save a beautiful girl. She exclaimed in surprise and sternness. What did he just say? What did this all mean? Rhea advised her to ignore it. The girl surprisingly responded accommodatingly. She understood. "Don't pay attention." He continued. He simply wanted to support her, and he wasn't alone. Her sword held the resolve of 7,000 of her soldiers. Her skill, they entrusted it and her with their lives. Only in this way could they make her stronger. They would suffer no losses in this battle. Her skill would give them victory. She must play the leading role. The king had asked him for it. He remembered how Leonard, having asked him about this, added that he shouldn't tell Lesledza anything, and, handing him the envelope, remarked that he had written it in secret from her. The girl asked in surprise, "The king?" At that moment, demons appeared, and she turned her attention to the enemy, declaring, "They're coming." The ground trembled with their stomping. As the demons approached, the allies exclaimed in confusion, "What a huge army!" Abinion, looking closer, said, "There are about 30,000 of them." The allies exclaimed in unison, "How many?" As the demon army approached, Benyon, the viscount and leader of the demons, soared into the air, laughed and declared, while they were dying, he'd gathered a gigantic army. Let them show him how they'd flutter while dying. They're just pathetic insects. Lesledza exclaimed in amazement. "So that's what demons are like." The protagonist remarked, by the way. "Why does he have such an annoying voice?" Benyon introduced himself to them, adding that he was the viscount of demons. Abinion snorted and remarked, "Well, he's just a viscount. Well, for humans, he's certainly a powerful opponent." The protagonist said what was expected of a devil spirit. Then, he doesn't really care. He told Lesledza, "Change of target, they will attack the leader." She asked in surprise, "Is he sure?" Abinion said with a smile, "He made a wise decision." He continued, "They will kill him first. The others will scatter. They will take him out of the game, and that's it." Abinion remarked, "What kind of devil spirit is she anyway? More like a common ghost." Lesledza worriedly said, "They will only have one chance. What if she can't defeat him?" MC calmly replied, "She can handle it. He's right here." She swallowed nervously. Waiting for the right moment, he gave the girl the command to begin. Lesledza exclaimed, "Come what may." With these words, she activated the full power of her skill, and with one blow, she incapacitated more than half of the opponents. It was such a powerful explosion that it seemed the entire world shook. Benyon cried out in bewilderment, What's going on? The kingdom's warriors were stunned by the force of the blow. One of them exclaimed, "What an explosion!" Gazant admiringly remarked, as expected of the mistress. Marcus shouted, "Long live their savior." Lizledza fell exhausted, breathing heavily. The protagonist asked, "Is she alive?" The girl groaned, "Such a recoil." But they'd hit the bulk of their army. Her whole body ached. She wouldn't have the strength for a second strike. The protagonist replied, "Fine." She looked at him in bewilderment and asked, "What?" He turned to Noam. His ally handed him the potion and said, "This is a potion, let them drink it to the bottom." He poured the medicine into Lizledza. After drinking the potion, the girl remarked in surprise, "Unbelievable, she's completely healed. That's what this potion means." Noem cried out, "She still has plenty left." The MC told the knight to prepare for a second strike. She exclaimed in bewilderment, "Have he lost his mind? Even if all her broken bones were to mend and her wounds healed, it would still hurt to use the skill over and over again." He repeated again, "Prepare for the second strike." Lizledza was indignant. He was ignoring her words. Then she suddenly shouted, "To hell with it all." With these words, she dealt a second blow to the enemy, then fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Noem handed her the potion again. Lizledza drank it. Ria said, "Excellent." Now, a third blow. The girl attacked the enemies again. This was repeated several times. She drank the potion and struck with her skill. After some time, Lizledza was completely exhausted. Abinion said in bewilderment, "She could have wiped all these demons off the face of the earth in one fell swoop. Why exert herself so much?" The protagonist replied, "Because this was a human battle, not hers. It was the kingdom's army that had to rally and repel the demonic threat, and her skill allowed them to do so." Looking around, he summed up, "Well, that's where they ended." At that moment, Benyon showed signs of life and said in bewilderment, "Damn people, what kind of skill is that?" The protagonist noticed, and the survivor climbed out. The demon viscount continued, "They're vile people. Their skills irritate him so much." The MC asked in surprise, "He's not going to run?" The demon chuckled and remarked, "He's in a good mood, apparently. After all, he'll be able to have some fun. After all, killing people is the best entertainment." He soared into the air. "Ryuya," he said, "he'll be his opponent, and he'll be able to give him a good time." Benyon laughed ominously and exclaimed, "This is what everyone's been waiting for. His death will be pitiful. Does he think he'll be easier to deal with than all his soldiers? He's so pitiful. He's so stupid, he doesn't even realize it. He'll get great pleasure from killing them, these inferior beings. They'll die suffering hell." The protagonist used the appraisal and saw the demon's stats, which were quite impressive. He thought, not only is he high level, but he also has a wide range of skills. A formidable opponent for a mere human. The demon continued to talk about what he could do to him, but MC interrupted him, pointing out that he was a talkative man. Benyon exclaimed, "So be it, he will die first." The enemy activated an acid fog and attacked Ryuya with it. The kingdom's warriors panicked. This fog was deadly. They needed to retreat immediately. Benyon rejoiced. This was the true power of demons. A wide range of abilities. That's the enormous difference in strength between pathetic humans and demons. Are they not just going to give up? How pathetic they all are. The protagonist, rubbing his eyes, said, "I can't see a thing. If the fog isn't cleared, the soldiers might get hurt. Then we'll have to do the following." He deactivated the deadly mist, sending forth a similar substance, white and very dense. The enemy exclaimed in bewilderment, "What kind of white mist was that? His attack was simply blocked?" That couldn't be true. His power was stronger than the devil spirit. At that moment, Abinion appeared above him and said, "She highly doubts it." Benyon muttered in confusion, "A devil spirit? Where did she come from?" But the devil spirit's abilities surpass even the strongest demons. What nonsense. How could she have ended up here? No, this was pure nonsense. The spirit sighed and said, "What a lot of words." Well, she wouldn't deny it. She obeys a stronger one, that's all. Was that nonsense? The demon thought he'd misheard. He exclaimed in surprise, "What was she talking about? A devil spirit obeying a person stronger than her?" As if he'd believe that. Abinion chuckled and said, "He'll see for himself soon." Seeing the protagonist, she exclaimed joyfully, "He finally made it out." He grinned and replied, "He was a little lost." After that, he confessed, he was a little surprised when he began to see through her eyes. The spirit laughed and sarcastically remarked, "He probably wants her to make sure all the soldiers are safe." She already did. "And what's wrong with his face?" MC grumbled. He doesn't understand what she's talking about, but thank her for fulfilling his request. With these words, he patted her head. Benyon watched the scene in complete shock. He said in confusion, "It's impossible. Acid fog is 500 times stronger than regular acid. It's impossible to survive in it, much less remain unharmed." Ryuya replied, "It's just that he has very high vitality and defense." The demon repeated his words in bewilderment, and then exclaimed, "Who is he? Is he even human?" The protagonist replied, "That's right, he's just a simple human, and he doesn't like killing, but he looks down on people and sees nothing wrong with killing them." Benyon asked, "So what?" The protagonist abruptly pulled him close and said straight to his face, "So he'll have to kill him then." With these words, he dealt the opponent such a blow that he blew off half his head, shattering it into tiny pieces. The demon hissed angrily, "Yes, he will definitely destroy him. He has high regeneration." While he spoke, his head actually regenerated. MC began striking him with lightning speed, not giving him time to recover. And the demon thought, no way, he doesn't have time to regenerate. At this rate, will this pathetic man simply destroy him forever, like a normal person? After some time, Ryuya began to climb out of the large pit into which he had driven the opponent with one blow. Abinion approvingly said, "Good job," he replied. It's all thanks to her. At this moment, Gazant noticed with surprise that the sky had brightened again. Marcus said, "So, Lady Lesledza and that boy had completed their task." He suddenly told his father to look ahead. Allies appeared on the horizon. The protagonist was carrying the knight general in his arms. Seeing the warriors, he said with a smile, "They have won." Gazant, with tears in his eyes, turned to Lesledza and joyfully said, "She's back." Marcus rejoiced. "It's over. Finally, victory." All the warriors were overjoyed and ordered the gates opened. The girl herself looked at the protagonist and said, "She can stand on her own now. Please let her go. It's a little embarrassing for her." He fulfilled her request and warned her not to overdo it. Noam said tenderly that if he carried her like that, she would be happy. Abinion admitted, yes, she would be over the moon too. Noam told the spirit she really wouldn't mind, and she meant it. A few hours later, the allies marched triumphantly down the street. All the residents joyfully greeted them, chanting their names. The protagonist sheepishly remarked, "Isn't that too much?" Lesledza exclaimed with a smile. "What nonsense. They easily defeated the demon army. Of course they are happy." The people shouted, "Long live the kingdom! Long live the king! This is a great victory." The allies were greeted by a joyful Leonard, who congratulated them on their return. The king added that he had already received the report, but he wanted to hear everything personally from the participants of the battle. "Let them tell us quickly." Noam was surprised at how happy he was. Lesledza, to the delighted cries of his majesty, explained that after the first demon attack their army was in terrible shape. But when they arrived, they replenished their potion supplies and healed the entire army. The demon warlord brought 30,000 demons to the next battle, but with Noam and Rya's help, they were able to destroy them all. In the end, they suffered 0 casualties. Leonard asked anxiously, "What about her skill? He could hurt her." The girl had noticed, rightly so, but she survived, thanks to her new friends. Above all, the main credit for defeating the demons belongs to the protagonist. She would like him to receive the highest reward. She looked at the confused protagonist with a smile. The king had noticed, so that's how it was. Perhaps he was sent to them by God. He countered, "No. This victory wouldn't have been possible without all his subjects." The warriors rejoiced at his words. Leonard said in a trembling voice, he was about to burst into tears. "Then, why doesn't he make them all aristocrats?" Hussein exclaimed in confusion. "Is he sure of his decision? Where has it ever been seen of commoners becoming aristocrats? And even more so, a piece of trash with no skill." His Majesty exhaled loudly and said irritably how annoying he was. MC was surprised to see the king angry. The minister continued, "His gratitude as a ruler was enough for such commoners. Truth be told, it would even be too much." The king interrupted him and exclaimed, "Loud words." He extended his hand forward and ordered everyone to listen to him. The king's job is to govern the kingdom and help his subjects. And this time, the kingdom was saved by the protagonist. In other words, he fulfilled his duty as a king. The title of aristocrat is only the least of the rewards that await him. Hussein refused to believe it. Leonard approached the protagonist and said they would decide on the name of the house later. First of all, would he agree to become an aristocrat? MC was confused and didn't know what to say. His Majesty continued, "He liked him, and he wants such a man to continue serving him. Please let him agree." Lesledza also looked at him pleadingly. He noted with confusion, "What kind of faces are these? How could he refuse?" At that moment, the minister desperately shouted at the king to take his time. Leonard and Lesledza asked in an irritated voice, "What is it this time?" Rhea mentally noted how noisy this man was. Hussein exclaimed, he'd just learned they had an important guest. He had to respect the guest first, and then decide. The king asked in confusion, "Who is he talking about?" The minister replied, "A hero had arrived." The protagonist asked the general in surprise, "Who is this hero?" She exclaimed in surprise, "Does he really not know? A hero is someone chosen by the church. The church determines people's skills, and the strongest are recruited into its service. They are the elite, the finest fighters. Heroes serve the church faithfully." He thought, a pawn of the church, huh? Londite had already mentioned them. Incidentally, the girl's face clearly showed how much she hated them. But why is that? Liber, striking a theatrical pose, addressed his Majesty and exclaimed, "To save the kingdom, the desperate brave Liber has arrived." Everyone looked at him in bewilderment, and only the minister started applauding, exclaiming how awesome. The king asked in surprise, "Save them from what?" The hero laughed, grimacing, and remarked, "Well, of course. Doesn't their kingdom suffer from constant demon attacks? So he's arrived. Now they can rest easy. A strong hero like him will have no problem stopping the demon invasion. Maybe they'll throw a party in his honor." The protagonist thought, looking at him so noisy, always waving his arms. What was his name? Liber, I think. So he's one of those people who gained a powerful skill and then abandoned it? Is that really him? Liber was in full swing, shouting, his power will restore order. Finally, they will see his greatness. Will he succeed? Of course, there's no doubt about it. The king spoke contritely, unable to even get a word in edgewise. The hero continued, "And ballads will be written about his victory. And as a reward, he will receive a beautiful princess." Lesledza, to hide her irritation, hid behind Noam. The girl looked at her in surprise. What was she doing? At that moment, MC called the hero by name. Liber exclaimed in irritation, "Who the hell is he? And why did he think he could just call him by his name?" Rhea said in surprise, "It's him." The hero responded in bewilderment. "He has no idea who he is." Suddenly it dawned on him, and he exclaimed in amazement, "Wait, is that him, Rhea?" The king asked MC in surprise, "Does he know the hero?" The protagonist replied, "Yes, they used to be friends." Liber was indignant. "What? He has no idea what he's talking about. How could a hero like him have a friend without a skill? It's shameful. The protagonist said so, but he actually knows him. Lieber asked why he's here. Isn't trash supposed to be in the trash heap? The protagonist noticed the disdain in his eyes. He said out loud, perhaps he should leave. Lieber immediately bowed to the king and asked, well, maybe they should get down to the urgent matter already? His Highness asked in confusion. What was he talking about? The hero was indignant. What? Stop pretending. Their kingdom is being attacked by an army of demons, and the church sent him, the brave man. Leonard exclaimed. Oh yes, priests and heroes with powerful skills who were supposed to fight the demons, and whom he asked for help. Lieber answered. That's right, the king continued. He'd been sending requests for help over and over again, ever since the demons appeared, and the church continued to ignore him. Lieber lowered his head in embarrassment. The protagonist clarified. Is that true? Lisledza replied. It is. The church's sacred magic is very effective against demons. Priests are perfectly capable of handling it, and she's completely silent about the hero's skills. The king said the church has monopolized all means of combating demons. Therefore, they send a request for payment to the church for the work. They literally suck money out of kingdoms on a global level. They're just a shop for greedy swindlers. Lieber objected, asking him not to jump to conclusions. After all, he did come, right? The church helps many kingdoms, so they can't immediately respond to their request. Leonard slammed his fist on the table and exclaimed in irritation. So they even have priorities? A moment's delay could lead to the deaths of people. His kingdom donates a huge amount of gold to the church every year. Apparently, he should think 3 times before sending a donation next time. Lieber responded, but they aren't the only ones making donations, and as for his words, they wouldn't want to lose the donations, but he asks that His Highness think about it. After all, he, the hero Lieber, can marry Princess Lisledza. MC turned to the girl in surprise and asked, did he call her a princess? She silently pulled her helmet back on. Noam shivered and noticed how suddenly it had gotten colder. Leonard indignantly clarified, give him the princess to protect the kingdom? Lieber replied, the church's patronage would be useful to them, and a king's duty is to protect his kingdom. Leonard drawled. Interesting words, is that a threat? Lieber grinned maliciously. The protagonist thought, yeah, that's awful. Maybe he should intervene? Although no, it's too early. Lieber straightened up, puffed out his chest, and exclaimed, come on, he's waiting for an answer. Let him have the princess, and peace will come to the kingdom. Even more, it will be a true paradise. The king abruptly rose from his throne and angrily shouted, no way! Lieber nearly fell over in surprise. Leonard continued, it was better to be at the mercy of demons than the likes of him. He refused to give him his daughter in marriage. The hero exclaimed in bewilderment. What nonsense. Let him come to his senses. This was no joke. His Highness asked if he hadn't noticed what mood everyone was in. The demons had already been defeated. The kingdom was saved. They didn't need him. Lieber shouted in confusion. What was he talking about? Wasn't that a welcoming parade in honor of his arrival? He even waved to everyone. The king sighed wearily and remarked on what a fool he was. How inflated his ego was. After that, his expression changed, and he angrily shouted at the hero to get lost. He was no longer going to talk to a worthless person like him, and let him tell the church that his kingdom was seceding. They wouldn't get a penny from him again. Lieber stared at him in confusion. He clearly hadn't expected such a reaction. Rhea noticed that the king was very angry. Lisledza agreed. That's true. The hero exclaimed in bewilderment, asking them not to jump to conclusions. He can't believe it. He's just bargaining, right? Then they can come to an agreement. Leonard responded rudely. He didn't care what he didn't believe. Lieber responded, but who dealt with the demons? Let him tell him about it. The hero was almost hysterical. The minister, surprised by his reaction, tried to calm him down. Then he said, it's hard to believe, but this man with no skill dealt with the demons. With these words, Hussein pointed at the protagonist. Lieber exclaimed in confusion. Rhea? He rushed towards the protagonist, shouting, let him tell the truth. It's a lie. He's hiding the truth. The MC replied, nothing of the sort. The hero still didn't calm down, but he's trash without skill. He's nothing but trash. He, the hero, should have dealt with the demons. At that moment, Noam couldn't take it anymore, jumped up to Lieber and slapped him so hard he flew off. The girl's face expressed irritation and anger at the supposed hero. She rudely told him to shut his mouth. She wouldn't allow a coward like him to speak such a thing about her master. Almost everyone present had personally witnessed him defeat the demons. The warrior commander named Zizbak said it. That's right. That's true. He swears by his knightly honor. The girl continued, he's a real coward. He's humiliating the one who fought while they relaxed and hid. Let him get out of here. Lieber, lying face down, covered in blood, thought angrily, she's a pig, a pathetic girl. She cut his face. She's just an ill-mannered bastard. Leaping up, he shouted angrily, he'll finish her off. Insulting a hero is punishable by death. The protagonist stepped forward, activating his power against him and saying, the only rude one here is him. Lieber choked, coughed, and exclaimed, what's with that fog? Habinyan looked at Noam with a smile and praised her. Well said, she's great. The girl smiled happily in return. Lieber saw Habinyan and asked in surprise, a ghost? Where did it come from? The spirit, looking at him, said, he's just like a real clown. He's funny, but it's time for him to go. With these words, she activated her magical power. The hero was swirled in a fiery whirlwind, thrown from side to side, and screamed in surprise and fear. When he disappeared, the protagonist told his ally he could have done it himself. The spirit remarked, "Why bother wasting his power on such trash?" Leonard turned irritably to his minister, saying that the entire festive atmosphere had been ruined. He usually negotiated with the church, didn't he? This was all too suspicious. Perhaps they had bribed him? He needed to check it out. Husei turned pale with fear and exclaimed, "No, nothing of the sort," the king declared. "I'll think about his next appointment." In the meantime, he could wait and prepare. After this, His Highness turned to the protagonist and invited him to come down and discuss something. The allies silently followed their lord. He asked sternly, "Why are they here?" The king wanted to speak with him. Noem replied sheepishly, "They are always by his side." Abinion drawled, "They are one with him." MC turned to the ruler and asked for his forgiveness. At that moment, Lisledza appeared next to them, embarrassedly saying she had been hiding behind them while the hero insulted him. Ria said, "Let her forget about it." Lieber was after her. He didn't think the king would want her mixed up, did he? Leonard said, as that idiot hero had said, Lisledza is a princess and his fourth daughter. The protagonist noticed, and he was frightened. His Highness replied, "It's very important to continue the royal line." Lisledza whispered to her friends in confusion. Scared? What was he talking about? Abinion whispered conspiratorially. She had no idea. Do they have any thoughts on this? Meanwhile, the king continued. Lisledza is special. She was born from the woman he loved with all his heart. The protagonist didn't understand the ruler's situation. Was he scared? Not a political marriage, but a love match, then. This is serious business. Leonard said, but ironically, her mother is of low rank. No one will support his daughter. Therefore, she cannot inherit the throne. MC spoke with understanding, and he decided to make her his knight. The king admitted it was absolutely true. He tried to distance her from the royal family's problems. He wants her to find her happiness. At least, that's his wish as a father. But then the church showed up. He doesn't know how they found out she's a princess. Most likely by marrying Lieber to her, the church wants to interfere in their politics. Judging by this hero's character, he's unlikely to give in so easily. Riria clarified, and he's not going to agree? He wondered if that's why the king was so eager to defeat the demons himself. Leonard replied that of course he wouldn't allow his daughter to be used as a political tool. Therefore, he wants to make him an aristocrat. He wants him to become her ally. Let him think about it. Sometime later, on the way home, the protagonist thought. He'd been given time to think, but what should he do? At that moment, Lieber called out to him and said he had something to talk to him about. The protagonist was surprised to see him back. The young man suggested they speak privately. Noem told her master that he was probably up to something bad. He was pleased that she was standing up for him. He turned to Noem and asked her to keep an eye on the girl. The spirit assured him that she would fulfill his request and that he could rely on her. The former friends retreated beyond the western tower. MC said he missed their measured life. Lieber exclaimed contemptuously, he didn't want to remember that miserable life, and he was lucky. At the ceremony, he received a valuable skill, and he, Ryuya, looked like an abandoned dog. The protagonist looked at him sadly and asked how Kridrod and Zeta were doing. The guy replied that he had no idea. He was immediately sent to hero training, where they prepare him to fight demons. The protagonist thought if a person is weak, they get rid of them. Lieber managed to survive such a selection. The hero spread his arms and exclaimed, "Wow, right? An ordinary guy became a hero!" He's capable of anything, and all thanks to his skill. This is his success. After all, the best deserves the best, right? So that's what he's getting at. Let him talk to the princess. He's on good terms with the king, right? It's just that he doesn't even know what she looks like yet. But even if she's ugly, he's willing to put up with it. MC thought, so that's it. That's why he acted like that in front of her. Noem asked in surprise, so that's his goal? Ria noted that he'd met people who were proud of their skills before, but Lieber was a different matter. He'd never been like that before. The guy asked, so, will he help him? A trash without skill will help a hero. Great, right? He asked in confusion, why does he treat people like things? The hero grinned and said, he's trying to give his empty life some meaning. It's a plus for the princess too. After he marries her, he'll get rid of a king's other children. And that's it. Oh right, what else did he want to ask? That little girl who's been following him, does she have the skill of an alchemy lord? He'll take her too. The protagonist was silent, feeling irritation and anger welling up within him. Lieber continued in a smug tone. People like her are rare in the church. She'll be useful. True, she hit him. He'll have to teach her some manners first. And then there's that ghost. She seems useless, but it'll do for fun. The protagonist smoothed his hair and asked in a quiet voice, what's he talking about? Lieber smiled broadly, spread his arms and exclaimed, so that's it. Even someone like him can be useful. Let him be happy that he's helping the hero. MC thought irritably. He'd changed so much in just 5 years. Maybe it was the training center where he was groomed as a hero? Could a person really change that much? He told his former comrade out loud how rotten he was. Lieber stared at him in bewilderment. He continued. He might be poor, but he was decent. As soon as he gained the skill, his vision blurred. How did this happen? Lieber cried out in confusion. What? What was he doing? A piece of trash with no skill? Was he stupid? Surely that was it. The hero repeated several times in a shrill tone that he was a stupid idiot. Then he continued. He doesn't understand anything at all, does he? He's trash. Trash unworthy of life. And don't let him look down on him. Trash with no skill. With these words, Lieber hysterically drew his weapon and shouted with hatred. He'll cut him down. He'll finish him off like a pig. He swung his weapon, intending to kill his opponent, but Ryuya, without moving, dodged the blow, and the hero flew past, and his sword was broken, which left the guy in amazement. The protagonist noted that he was aiming for his neck. He was going to kill him. Lieber said in bewilderment, "His weapon broke. What the hell was that?" The protagonist retorted, "He should be the one speaking. What kind of surprise attack was that?" Lieber laughed maliciously and exclaimed, but now he understood why he was being so brazen. He clearly had some kind of powerful skill. The MC thought sadly, missing the point. The guy continued, "Apparently skills can be acquired without the church ceremony. He obviously has a skill that dramatically increases defense. Some kind of body strengthening skill? No, something else. Fine, he'll acknowledge him as his opponent. He'll show him how he became a hero, his most powerful and versatile skill. He'll understand that his skill is a joke compared to a hero's skill." The protagonist calmly looked at him, thinking, while he was chatting, he should check his stats. What he saw astonished him. Lieber, among other things, was level 21, and his skill was called Skill Steal. He thought, even such vile skills are blessed by the church. The hero continued, curious about his skill? Okay, fine. He'll tell him everything now and show him how. The protagonist replied, not really interested. Lieber exclaimed, he can steal others' abilities and use them as his own. MC was momentarily confused. Would he take his power? It was all a bit confusing. Lieber again spread his arms theatrically and shouted, he is the strongest. No matter how strong his opponent with his skill, he will always be stronger. Besides, he won't be able to use his skill as long as he has this. His opponents will know despair. Ryuya noted, this was most likely the skill of a sneaky thief, not a hero. Lieber angrily shouted, shut your mouth. Only the winner is always right. He extended his hands forward and summoned the skill theft, directing the power at the protagonist, who looked at him in confusion. After that, the hero shouted with glee, the theft is complete. Now that his skill is his, he's nothing against it. The protagonist activated his power against him. Lieber was thrown into space, flipped several times, and crashed to the ground with all his might, where he flew forward a little further, leaving a furrow in his wake. Not understanding anything, looking at the dripping blood, he said in confusion, what was that? This trash just got stronger? Didn't his skills strengthen his body? MC, without removing his fist, replied, so maybe he should see for himself? Lieber knelt down and hysterically shouted, what the hell? He doesn't believe it. Ryuya chuckled and said, his skill didn't work. It's on standby. Taking the guy by the shoulder, he continued, well, it can't just appear out of thin air, right? He understands that himself, right? Lieber said in bewilderment. What? He doesn't have a skill? The protagonist responded with another powerful blow, which took the boy's breath away and sent him plowing through the ground again. Afterward, he wondered in bewilderment, what is this power? When did he acquire it? So he has not only a strong body and physical strength, but also incredible speed. The protagonist struck the air near him, causing an explosion in space. Lieber seemed to have lost his mind. He exclaimed in utter confusion, what is this? It's simply impossible. How much does his skill enhance his physical abilities? The MC calmly replied, no, there's no skill. Lieber laughed hysterically and remarked, now he understood everything. Ryuya clarified, really? The hero said with an evil grin. He had heard of such a thing. Some of the best skills can have effects that can negate the effects of other abilities. So his theft didn't work. The protagonist sighed and said, he already told you. He doesn't have a skill. Lieber laughed hysterically again and said, it looks like he's gotten a decent skill. This is excellent. This is simply wonderful. He'll get this skill. What's up his sleeve? He'll tell you now. He can sacrifice his skill to gain it permanently. It's a top-tier operation that can only be used once in a lifetime. The protagonist thought something like that was written in the description. The hero exclaimed angrily, he will take away his skill forever. It's called total deprivation. Finally, he'd be able to obtain the ultimate ability he'd been waiting for. Had such a powerful skill really been right under his nose? He'd get it now. With these words, the hero activated the ultimate skill, total deprivation, and aimed it at MC. A bright glow emanated from his hands and electric discharges appeared, cutting through space. But Ryuya stood calmly, as if it didn't concern him. Only his body felt a slight, insignificant sensation. Lieber raised his fist to strike and exclaimed maliciously, it's a pity he didn't realize its value sooner. And now, it's time for them to say goodbye. He lunged toward the protagonist, intending to deliver a crushing blow, but the protagonist shifted his body slightly and delivered a powerful punch to the solar plexus. The hero exhaled convulsively and crouched on the ground, exhaling in bewilderment. What's going on? MC told him to listen to him now. Let him look at his stats now. When Lieber activated his stats, his astonishment knew no bounds. He had no skill at all. After falling into a stupor for a while, he came to his senses and screamed hysterically. He's now without a skill. After that, he began calling for the theft to be cancelled. Ryuya turned his back on him, thinking, so, he's won. Lieber screamed terribly. This is all a dream. How can he? And without a skill, it's all just a nightmare. The protagonist, overcome by his hysteria, approached him and knocked him out with one blow. Then he looked at the unconscious Lieber and sadly thought, a friend has turned out to be an enemy. It was strange. The next day, it became known that Lieber, the hero, was now without a skill. As a result, he was expelled from the church. Meanwhile, the protagonist asked the king if he should pay compensation for the broken wall. His Highness replied, no, he shouldn't worry about it. That cocky fool Lieber was so confident in his powers, but in the end, he lost them. MC thought he even felt a little sorry for him. although he deserved it. Noam exclaimed, her master did nothing wrong. That hero himself is to blame. Abinion added, that fool attacked him. He started making demands, and then attacked. He's the real criminal, Leonard said, a simple idiot who didn't know his place. Spirit replied, yes. She laughed heartily then. Rhea thought, naturally, that he had been summoned here. He looked at his allies and asked, those two, weren't they supposed to go home? Abinion said with a smile. She and Noam were watching from afar. The girl confirmed, that's right. He mentally protested. She even nodded in agreement. Spirit added, even if he is the strongest, his heart is still uneasy. That's how a girl's heart works. And Noam is no exception. He wondered, perplexed, what maiden's heart was she talking about? Abinion said, since they'd already seen everything, they had to recount every detail to this pompous old man. She'd managed to explain to him that he wasn't to blame. Leonard noted good-naturedly, there was no need to call him that. The protagonist silently asked him for forgiveness for the spirit. The king continued, when it came to self-defense, evidence from loved ones alone might not be enough. The church would clearly point this out. Let him not forget that they grew up by stepping over other people's heads. The spirit exclaimed, there's nothing to worry about. If they defied her master, he would easily finish them off. He thought it was too early to kill them. He wanted everything to proceed peacefully. Of course, he wasn't going to make any major concessions. Not to mention that they would probably try to slander him. He was sure he'd clearly attracted their attention. He said out loud that the church was the only one capable of standing up to demons, and he, having defeated one of their heroes, had clearly undermined their authority. It was inevitable. Things were bad. He didn't want to interfere, and he didn't want to get along with the church either. The king laughed and said, of course, his kingdom would do everything possible to support him. He would do everything in his power to thank him. Abinion clarified, would he simply help out of the goodness of his heart? Leonard replied, of course, she noted. And no ulterior motives? The king confirmed, none. But he couldn't speak out in his defense if he was a simple adventurer. The protagonist was surprised, you see? His Highness had said he'd ask again if he wanted to become a noble of his kingdom. The protagonist thought gloomily. Here they were again. He too thought there were clearly ulterior motives, and he assumed he'd be comfortable with so many privileges. The king, looking at him, noticed, but it didn't look like he'd accept his proposal. He apologized to the ruler. Leonard sighed and said, well, what can you do? He won't force him, but if things are left as they are, the church will take action. Abinion said he needn't worry. If it comes to that, he'll simply wipe this church off the face of the earth. Rhea thought irritably. There she was again. There would be no equal for him or her. That's why she wasn't worried. Her sense of self-preservation was dulled. His Highness asked in a frustrated voice, but what about his daughter? No one can know when exactly the next hero will come and declare the same thing. The protagonist noted the king's woes. The devil spirit exclaimed, she has an idea. She settled into the astonished king's arms and said, her life is much longer than a short human life. That's why her wisdom allows her to come up with great ideas. Leonard simply gasped in surprise. The protagonist thought, what modesty. Abinion exclaimed, let her lord marry the princess. MC was dumbfounded by her words. He thought, wedding means making a vow before God and becoming a married couple. He exclaimed out loud, confused. What? She continued, it's the perfect plan that will solve all their problems. It's so simple. He thought indignantly. No way. His Highness remarked. It could work. Rhea exclaimed in confusion. What is he saying? The Lord replied, let him think about it. The church's goal is to marry the princess, all to secure a position in the royal family. This is possible, as long as his daughter is unmarried. The protagonist understood that this was true. A person can only commit their life to one partner forever. That's the church's rule. Abinion continued, and then her lord would enter the picture. To resist the church's attacks, the kingdom's support was needed. There was no other way, right? And only someone with the people's support can marry the princess, right? Leonard chuckled thoughtfully, pondering his own thoughts. MC thought, he's a pacifist by nature. If it helps avoid problems, then it's best to do so. But at the same time, he really didn't want to become an aristocrat. So, he doesn't yet understand how to make things better. A spirit flew up to him and said that aristocrats aren't just the king's relatives. Just think about it. He'll be directly connected to the king. Why shouldn't he become the king's son-in-law? His Highness exclaimed joyfully. Of course, if he marries his daughter, he'll become his son-in-law. That way, he'll be able to fully utilize his power. The protagonist remarked perplexedly, but he'll still be an aristocrat, right? The king exclaimed, not hiding his joy. That way he'll become a member of the royal family. That's different from simply being granted the title of aristocrat. He'll occupy a position above any aristocrat. He thought they were right about that. Being related to the king was a powerful asset. Leonard said admiringly to the spirit, such a calculating demon. She's a true genius. A ghost girl. Abinion retorted playfully. He's an idiot, but she's no ghost. The protagonist thought, and they seemed to be getting along. But this is unacceptable. At this rate, they'll soon have the upper hand. He exclaimed out loud, stop. They both stared at him. What's going on? The protagonist shouted indignantly. Stop making decisions for him. No matter how successful this option was, they still couldn't pull this off without the most important thing. They both asked in unison, the most important thing? The protagonist drawled in surprise. They seriously don't understand? First of all, Marriage is supposed to be two people who love each other and are planning a future together. Abinion asked in confusion, "What's the matter? He's not interested in girls?" He exclaimed irritably. "That's not what he meant. Lesledza is very sweet and attractive. She's dear to him. And anyway, she, a spirit, is too close to him." MC thought, "Everyone is trying to marry the king's daughter. To prevent this, he will have to marry her? What nonsense." He turned to the king out loud and noted, "He himself said that he wanted her to marry someone she liked, didn't he?" Leonard replied, confused, "That's true, something like that. But this isn't a political marriage. He can rest easy if he's by her side." Ryuya firmly stated, "Her feelings are more important. Whatever they come up with, there can't be a marriage if she doesn't like him." After that, he breathed a sigh of relief and thought, he said it. And it doesn't matter that it's the king. Yes, the most important thing in marriage is not position and benefits. What's important is loving each other. Abinyon exclaimed, "So it's not a problem. Now they'll find out everything. They'll call this night girl, and everyone will know." The king enthusiastically supported her. The protagonist asked, confused, "Will they invite her?" He thought, "Isn't it strange to talk about a wedding without the person they're going to marry?" After a while, Lesledza arrived and told the protagonist, "He's here." The king apologized. "She was probably busy after the battle." The girl countered, "No, Ryuya did a lot in that battle. She should at least repay him with politeness." The spirit whispered to MC, "Let him look up her information now." He replied, "Okay," even though he doesn't like to use it for nothing. When he looked at her stats, he noticed that her level had risen to 35. She gained experience in that battle? No wonder. 30,000 demons were crushed by 7,000 soldiers. And the stats also listed her affection level. 5 hearts. What was that? He'd long wondered what affection levels even were. This parameter isn't listed on the guild card. Is this a special feature of Abinyon? The spirit suggested that, as it's written, the parameter expresses the degree of affection. It shows how a person feels for him. That's proof of love. Feelings from the opposite sex are indicated by a heart symbol. You could call it love. He replied, "She's a real devil. Since when have feelings for love?" The spirit said, "She thinks the events on the battlefield played a role. Besides, he beat up that idiot who was hitting on her. That's enough to make her fall in love." The protagonist said, "Yes, that's true. But somehow, it's very simple." Leonard turned to his daughter and said, "They've just talked about something. Is she ready to get married?" The girl looked at her father in confusion and said, so bluntly, "No. Is he really going to give her to the church?" The king replied, "He wouldn't do that, but they won't leave you alone until she gets married. That's why he decided to marry her off to a well-known person." Lesledza began to stop her father, telling him not to worry about her. She would dedicate herself to knighthood for the rest of her life. Her duty was to be a protector of the weak. His Highness chuckled and asked, before he started acting out, if perhaps she could find out who he was talking about. Lesledza was embarrassed and replied, "No, whoever it was, she had said it all." His Highness had declared that Ryuya would be her groom. The girl was dumbfounded by his words. Confused, she looked at her father, who had placed his hands on the protagonist's shoulders, and asked in confusion, "What did he just say?" The king had said that he could always be at hand, but he'd gotten angry. The princess exclaimed in confusion, "Angry?" Leonard continued, saying he wouldn't continue the marriage conversation without the bride herself. That's why they'd called her. The protagonist thought irritably, he'd just spilled the beans. Lesledza didn't know how to act or react to all this. Her surprise and confusion gave way to embarrassment. The king concluded that if she was truly against it, they'd have to abandon the idea. She quickly shouted, "Don't jump to conclusions." Then, realizing she was being emotional, she became embarrassed and hesitated, trying to say something. Abinyon whispered to the protagonist, as she had said, this girl had fallen in love with him. Her congratulations to him. Finally, Lesledza, very nervous, exclaimed, "She can't do this." The king looked at his daughter in disappointment. MC pointed a finger into the air admonishingly at the spirit. The princess, seeing her father's state, said, "The problem isn't Ryuya. He's a true hero. If he becomes her husband, she will be the happiest woman." Leonard asked, perplexed, "Then what's the matter?" The girl replied, confused, simply, "He has no him." The alchemist looked at everyone in surprise, not understanding what she had to do with it. The protagonist also wondered, what does Noem have to do with it? Lesledza exclaimed, "She loves the young master too, right? She can't do this to her." Noem exclaimed, "First and foremost, what matters to her is his happiness. She's only here thanks to the protagonist's efforts, so she has to thank him somehow. She won't stop him from building a happy life." Lesledza grabbed her by the shoulders and exclaimed, "That's wrong. Just letting go isn't the only way to thank him. She'd always been there for him, supporting him. She can't just up and take him for herself. He needs her more." The girls started arguing over who needed MC more. Ryuya himself wondered, confused, what was going on. At that moment, Abinyon exclaimed, "Then she'll take him." Both girls looked at her in surprise and exclaimed in unison, "What? The spirit and the king said that? Then what will they say to that? Lord Ryuya will take them both." The girls looked at their allies in amazement, and then at the protagonist. The protagonist, in turn, gloomily clarified, "What are we even talking about? What do you mean he'll take both of them?" The spirit chuckled and said, "She's sure they'll get along." Leonard noted that this was common among strong and powerful men. For example, he has 4 wives, and they all have his child. Perhaps they can't decide? He thinks he can easily entrust his daughter to a man like him, and he wouldn't want to offend young Lady Noem. Don't forget her ability as a great alchemist. Abinyon supported his highness. She said that a worthy lord should have many wives. Was it worth brushing aside such a chance? The king looked at MC and asked if he would accept this marriage for the sake of his country's future. Ryuya, confused, thought that if he refused, he would be a real devil in their eyes. They all looked at him like that. It was all already decided. It was all decided for him. After thinking a little more, he replied, okay. He was ready to take responsibility and take them both as his wives. After that, he looked at them and asked, so, why are they silent? Lesledza and Noam, as if waking up, began jumping for joy, holding hands and shouted hooray at the same time. The alchemist told the princess to take care of her. The king's daughter responded and reciprocated. The protagonist thought in surprise, do they really mind? No, of course, he had a premonition that he and Noam would eventually end up like this. But to have a princess too. Leonard exclaimed joyfully, that's great. This is simply wonderful. Now the protagonist is his son. He is a member of his family. He hugged MC and expressed the hope that he will continue to be useful to their state. They will throw a celebration for this occasion. Ryuya said, he is too loud. Abinion, lighting his smoking pipe, said, such a cheerful king. There is definitely something to this. It has been a long time since we had such fun. After some time, the protagonist became thoughtful. He has 2 wives. Furthermore, all the people of the kingdom learned of what had happened on the battlefield, and they began to believe that a true hero had appeared in the kingdom, and he was just another adventurer from the Adventurers Guild. He had no skill, and his name was Ryuya. At that moment, Zimnanto, the king's first son, commanded the guards to open the gates. Stepping out of the carriage, he said, that's it. He'll leave on foot from here. Isabel, the king's daughter, looked at the protagonist's photograph and said, the face of a true country bumpkin. She'll get off here too. She hadn't been to the palace in a long time. Russelsh, the second prince, exclaimed with a smile, and so did he. The guards exclaimed in confusion, it's the princes and princess. They shouted, the king's children have returned. After a while, Lesledza congratulated her husband on his return. He grimaced and wiped his forehead with his hand. The girl anxiously asked, what's the matter? Is he feeling unwell? MC replied, no, he's just very happy. He thought he'd received a mansion from the royal palace. They say Minister Husaid's family lived here until recently. Who the hell is that? Lesledza, noticing his frown, asked if she'd done something wrong. She never dressed like that. Indeed, she was wearing a beautiful dress. The protagonist assured her, no, that's fine. The princess said sheepishly that she'd never acted like a girl, having trained to be a knight. She didn't know if she'd be a good wife for such a great man. The protagonist sheepishly remarked, well, he's not that great. Lesledza hotly retorted, oh, and he is. He's the strongest man and hero on earth. Her father, the great king, asked her to be with him, representing his country, so she'll do whatever he wants. He muttered thoughtfully, she says whatever he wants. What strange things had the king told her? The princess asked if he wanted to eat, take a bath, or maybe they could practice? Spar? MC noted that the last sentence seemed unnecessary, and that was good. He asked what Noam was doing. The girl replied that she was in the lab with Abinion. He thought Noam, now a wife, had moved here, and she'd taken up the study of alchemy in earnest. Noam was using one of the rooms in the mansion as a lab. Now she was obsessively mixing different materials, trying out new recipes. The Artisans Guild was buying everything she made. She was amusing herself however she could. At that moment, Lesledza said she was sorry to say this, since he'd just returned home, but her father had sent a letter. He was absolutely required to come to the palace tomorrow. The protagonist thought gloomily, since he became his son-in-law, he wasn't at all embarrassed to call him that. He was his father-in-law after all. The princess added, be careful. If this was necessary, then something was clearly wrong. It seemed her brothers and sisters had returned. The next day, it was time for the meeting. The protagonist arrived at the palace. Zimnanto exclaimed, so he's the hero. He did well. First Princess Isabel looked at him haughtily. Russell said with a smile, he praises him as a future king, and expressed the hope that he would continue to serve his kingdom. Isabel was indignant. Don't try to fool an ignorant commoner. She, the king's eldest child, would be the next ruler. She whispered to MC that if he wanted to swear allegiance to someone, he should come to her. The protagonist wondered, what's going on? Zimnanto exclaimed irritably, sons have priority in succession to the throne. The eldest son, that is him, should be the successor. Isabel drawled mockingly. He's so naive. Their kingdom already had queens. The throne should belong to the wisest. The first prince exclaimed, then he should definitely take the throne. He's much wiser than she is. The princess remarked. She had never heard of such loudmouthed sages. The protagonist, confused, noted what was going on here. At that moment, Leonardo told his children, that's enough. They bowed and answered as he wished. Russell laughed sarcastically and quietly. MC looked at him sternly. Lesledza turned to her husband and said that all 3 of them were Leonardo's true children, and each of them had the right to inherit the throne. But ultimately, only one of them would be responsible for the future of this country. Zimnanto, looking her up and down, grinned, noticing her bold dress. Hadn't they made it clear? If her father's noble blood flowed through her, there was nothing he could do about it. He'd heard she'd worked hard this time. Perhaps he should start praising her as queen already? Lesledza thanked him demurely. He continued, however, he didn't think she could take the throne with her lineage. Half the blood that flowed through her was that of a stray mongrel who didn't even know who she was. So, a daughter born from a dog's womb is also a dog. No? What's the difference? Lesledza responded reservedly. She was born to a low-ranking man and was treated poorly. even after receiving a knighthood. She was willing to serve this country to the fullest, so she could reward them with an honorable title. Zemnanto replied, "That's a good idea." With this attitude, she would continue to work for the good of her life, just like a hunting dog, usable by all, even if useless. At that moment, the protagonist, no longer able to restrain himself, lightly poked the prince with his finger and lifted him above his head with one hand. Lesledza gasped in confusion. The prince screamed, "What the hell is he doing? Let him go, it's hurt." Isabel and Russell watched with hidden laughter. The protagonist irritably asked the prince what kind of education he was receiving if he acted like the lowest of the low. People with whom he shares blood are not called dogs. Lesledza rushed to her husband and said, "Please, stop. They are still the same prince and princess. Only her mother is a commoner, and that's what separates her from her brother, who is the son of the king's wife." He responded indignantly, "People should be equal, regardless of their origins. Ignoring this and comparing people is tantamount to losing one's individual qualifications. The only problem with this country is that such people become kings." With these words, MC turned to Zemnanto and added, "And yet he insults his precious woman, and for this he will make him kneel before her." The first prince indignantly shouted, "What is he doing?" He began calling for the guards to help. "Let them kill this madman." At that moment, Leonard exclaimed, "Let them stop." He turned to the protagonist and declared, "The disrespect caused by this stupid nonsense will be deeply offensive to him. Can he suppress his anger?" The protagonist replied that he had disrespected him. There was no point in apologizing. The king bowed his head and remarked that he would put off speaking with him for later. Zemnanto turned to his father and shouted at him to get rid of this werewolf now. Since he had harmed the royal family, he should be publicly executed. His Highness, rudely and with hidden irritation, ordered him to shut his mouth. He added, "First of all, Ryuya is the hero of the kingdom. If he hadn't defeated the demons, this country would have been destroyed long ago. If such a worthy man were executed, power would fall to the earth. He wouldn't even consider it." The first prince angrily declared, "Well then, he'll deal with whoever is registering such werewolves." Then he turned to MC, pointed his finger at him, and said that it would be easy for him to make him thank him for his kindness and serve him loyally like a dog. The king let out an irritated sigh and said, "Let him do what he wants." Zemnanto turned to everyone, spread his arms wide, and exclaimed, "But first, he wants to tell his father something." The first prince, Zemnanto, has just returned to his homeland. He intends to continue learning the wisdom of a ruler as he did before, and train to eventually become king. He had missed his family, but now that he's back, he'll never leave them. Isabel quietly remarked, thinking he'll be here now to learn about the king's work. The second prince, Russell, waved his hand in greeting to his father and said, "He's home too." The king exclaimed, "That's right, all three of them are back." The protagonist asked his wife in bewilderment, "Have they ever left?" The girl remained silent. Leonardo turned to his children and exclaimed, "He has something to say to them, who have returned from their mother's ancestral home." Russell asked, "And what?" His Majesty glanced at everyone and blurted out that he was going to deprive them of their right to the throne. All the heirs stared at their father in bewilderment. The protagonist and Lesledza were also stunned by what they had just heard. Zemnanto, the first to recover, exclaimed in bewilderment, "What? Deprive them of their right to the throne? What did he mean?" Isabel sternly asked, perhaps he had said something wrong, or had she misheard him? Russell simply digested what he had just heard. The king asked, why had he decided so? He pointed at Ryuya and Lesledza and said that if he couldn't convince them, these two would. After all, they didn't deserve to be kings. But these two? Yes. Zemnanto angrily noted that thanks to his skills and lineage as well as his diligent training, he was rightfully considered the most worthy heir. So why not? It's unfair, Leonardo asked angrily. It's not fair. After these words, he gave a strained laugh. Lesledza told the protagonist that this unnatural laughter was a sign of trouble. He answered briefly, understanding. His Highness turned to the arriving children and said he wanted to hear them out. Why had they decided to return? Zemnanto replied, because this was their homeland. Wasn't that obvious? Isabel added, it was the country in which she was born and raised. She loved her homeland with all her heart. The king remarked, I see. If they were so concerned about their country, then why had they abandoned it and fled? The first prince exclaimed, no, that's not it. Isabel drawled in surprise. She abandoned the country and fled, Leonard said. Yes, they left the country when it faced a national crisis. How else could that be called other than a treacherous flight? The protagonist turned to his wife in bewilderment. What was going on? She replied. The demon invasion was most likely the trigger. They defeated everyone they could, and everyone wondered why. But at the very beginning of the attack, no one expected him to appear, the savior hero. Before his arrival, neither she nor he had even hoped for fate. Her father had taken command to ensure countermeasures against the demons, and he kept all incoming information secret from the residents of the kingdom's capital, so as not to cause panic. They gathered all their soldiers and medical supplies from across the country, and they also requested help from the church. Since she was a knight, she also tried to help her father as much as possible. MC looked at the king and thought, this old man really is a capable king, isn't he? He's finally coming to understand this. Lesledza continued with tears in her eyes, while her brothers and sister did bad things. He sympathetically remarked, ran away? She exclaimed. Yes, they ran away. Zemnanto said so. This country will be destroyed by demons. He accepted this as his due and fled the capital. Each of them retained their mother's family home. They understood that if they returned to that very home, they would live a rather luxurious life, so each of them lived in their mother's house until news reached them that the demons had been defeated. Ryuya said in surprise, "They must be quite brave or foolish to decide to return after that." Now he understood why the king had decided to act as he did. His Highness continued, "The king is the country. It would be simply ridiculous if the country died and the king remained alive. And yet, the candidates for king fled, every single one. It was simply outrageous." Zemnanto tried to object. "No, that's not true. He doesn't understand. That's different." Isabel asked her father for forgiveness and spoke. He said, "The king is the country. Even if every member of the kingdom dies, if any member of the royal family survives, the country's recovery is entirely possible. Even if the entire kingdom is overrun by demons and burned to the ground, a single member of the royal family is enough to return to the scorched earth and rebuild their nation," the king sadly remarked. "So that's why she ran away?" The girl replied that yes, she was prepared to be branded a disgrace for abandoning her country for the sake of the nation's survival. The protagonist remarked, "She'd gotten away with it quite well." Leonard replied, "That makes sense, but there are minimum standards of behavior. At the very least, to notify others that she's leaving the country, not to do it in secret." And yet, they all fled without warning him. It was like a stampede of rats, trying to be the first to escape a sinking ship. What they did could only be called a grave act of treason. Cowards cannot be kings. The royal offspring asked him to take his time. Zemnanto exclaimed, "What will happen to the country's future then?" Isabel shouted, "Who the hell will be the next king?" The protagonist thought, looking at the successors, it would be nice if they put all this energy into useful work instead of running away during the demon invasion. The first prince was furious. That's right, only the three of them have the right to inherit the throne. If he takes it from them, who will be next? What will happen to the country? Isabel also spoke up. Her brother is right. She's asking him to reconsider his decision. MC thought again, they're showing good unity. If only they'd shown this during the demon invasion. The king said, "Don't worry, he has another child, and she's much better than them." Leonard looked at Ryuya, and he thought in confusion. Him? Actually, he has nothing to do with this. His Highness said, "Lesledza, since her mother was a commoner, his daughter could not be considered a candidate for the throne." But this time, he took special measures. He stripped all heirs of their right to inherit the throne. And as an incentive for her participation in the extermination of demons, she would be the first to inherit his throne. When he could no longer rule the country, she would take his place and become queen. Lesledza looked at her father in confusion. She clearly hadn't expected such a turn of events. When she fully realized what the king had said, she cried out in fear. No, let her father not make such a decision. She'd been trained her entire life only as a knight, not a ruler. She doesn't know how to rule a country. His Highness said, "She can learn it right now. She's a knight, after all, so she has a title, and that's very similar to a royal title. You could say the foundation is laid." The girl rushed to MC, panicking and asking, "What's he thinking?" She turned to her father and shouted that she should discuss this with Ryuya. He was her husband now. Leonard pointed out that, come to think of it, he could be a candidate too. Zemnanto shouted at Lesledza, "What did she just say?" "The hero who saved the country. Her husband." The protagonist asked, "Didn't they know?" His Highness told the protagonist, "Well, if his daughter agrees to become queen, will he be king? After all, he's his son-in-law now. In other words, he has every chance of becoming king too." MC was dumbfounded by what he heard and sheepishly apologized. Zemnanto, unable to contain his anger, angrily shouted Lesledza's name and exclaimed, "She's a dog, born a commoner, and now she thinks she can take the throne by deceiving herself? That will only happen in her dreams." After this, he turned to his father and shouted at him to come to his senses. He was a Zemnanto, inheriting his blood from him and his mother, the ruler of the great southern power of Rubrum. The king replied grimly, "No way. Hasn't he learned his lesson yet?" He realizes, of course, that aristocrats don't allow themselves to call their own kind dogs. He's not even talking about kings anymore. They clearly don't allow such things. He looked at his three children and continued, feeling sorry for them. Half the blood of other royal families flows through their veins. This means they are only half noble foreigners, and they have proven it by their own actions. So, Ryuya will defend this country in their stead, as the true king of this kingdom. For the people are already aware of his bravery. He has already warned everyone that his successor will be Lesledza, and this must not be discussed, so as not to bring it up again. At that moment, Russelsh, who had been silent the entire time, raised his hand and asked his father if he could say a few words. The king remarked, by the way, he hadn't said anything. Let him speak now. The second prince thanked him and said that he, the king, was revered as the wisest ruler. And in this situation, he was completely right. He would follow him to the end. Zemnanto and Isabel reacted negatively to his words. He continued, "The whole point was that, as the second prince, his chances of inheriting the throne were slim from the start." Isabel exclaimed angrily, "So that's why he'd been silent?" The first prince irritably remarked that he'd been a loser from the start. Russell smiled and added that he agreed about the queen. But the problem was this main character. What kind of person was he? He looked closely at the protagonist, and he clearly saw that the second prince, despite his smile, was hiding his true feelings toward him. Russell told him that rumors about him had already spread throughout the kingdom. They said he was so powerful that no one in the world could surpass him. As soon as he returned to the country, he immediately began hearing all sorts of things about him. Yes, he was immediately shocked. And then there was the guildmaster. She spoke of him with the utmost passion. She handed out brochures like these to everyone. With these words, he pulled out a booklet featuring the protagonist with a determined expression, and Londite looking at him with love in her eyes. The second prince continued. There was something else that even he couldn't believe. Lesledza asked, "What is this?" Russell replied, "He has no skills." The protagonist gloomily wondered if this topic would be discussed again. But with him this time, he answered out loud, "That's right." The second prince, smiling, spread his arms wide and said, "It shouldn't be like this. Lesledza's husband, chosen first in line for the throne based on his abilities and accomplishments, actually has no skills." Lesledza exclaimed angrily, demanding to speak. "It's true that MC became famous throughout the country for practically single-handedly defeating demons, and she's truly proud to be married to him." Russell replied that people tend to cling to the most flamboyant deeds, turning a blind eye to other things. A queen who chose a man without skills as her husband. If this news reaches the rulers of other countries, he's afraid nothing good will come of it. Ryuya thought the second prince was probably right. After all, skills are the most valuable thing in this world. If a person has skills, they can already aspire to any high position. So, he can't hold the position of king without any skills. Lesledza asked point blank, what was he getting at? He means that if she becomes queen, she'll have to cancel her marriage to the protagonist? What did he mean? Zamnanto and Isabel looked at her in confusion. They'd never seen her so angry before. The second prince replied with a sweet smile, "Not at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. Once she becomes queen, the population's unrest will disappear. And he's kind enough to fully facilitate this." The protagonist thought, he doesn't treat people who shamelessly say they're kind. He still doesn't understand this prince's true intentions. Russell added with a smile, he just wants to take this opportunity to help the people he cares about. MC wondered, perplexed, what the hell he was trying to say with all this. The prince asked what rank he was. He answered, D. Russell exclaimed, wow, he's got that rank too. Isn't that the rank of a newly minted adventurer? He'd thought he was trying to hide his true abilities, but all he had was a complete lack of skill. Leonard wondered, perplexed, why the guild had given him such a low rank. The second prince remarked, to be honest, it wouldn't be very good for the princess's husband to only hold that rank. In terms of status, he should be at least A or S rank. Ryuya thought, well, there was nothing he could do about that. He was so powerful that Dondai, given her limited authority, couldn't have given him such a high rank so quickly. The demon extermination mission hadn't been announced to the guild yet. Lesledza exclaimed, there's a good reason for that. The king, silent all this time, exclaimed, very well. In that case, he'll issue a new order. Russell pointed out, that can't be done. Leonard countered, he'll do it right now. The second prince rightly remarked with the same smile, adventurers actually have their own rules. Even if the king ordered them to, they wouldn't obey his decrees or give the MC a higher rank. That's why the rank assigned to an adventurer by the guild was so important. Adventurers have rules that prevent even the royal family from doing whatever they please. If Ryuya, following these rules, could achieve the highest S rank, or at least a strong A rank, it would clearly demonstrate his true abilities. And even if he lacked skill, a high rank would cover that shame with the shadow of its greatness. The king exclaimed, that's a good idea. Someone with sufficient skill could easily achieve an S rank. Russell replied, I think an A rank would be enough. He turned to the protagonist and asked what he thought about it. Did he want to raise his rank? He'll send a petition to the guild. The protagonist thought, as an adventurer, he really would like to advance his class. Out loud, he replied, he'll do everything in his power as long as he has the opportunity to advance. The second prince concluded with a smile. So after achieving a high rank, announcing his marriage to Lesledza to the entire country wouldn't create confusion and mistrust. MC wanted to believe him, but he doubted whether this was friendly advice or a clever deception. Now he can't marry Lesledza until he reaches at least rank A. If that doesn't happen, she will refuse to inherit the throne. This means the successors have carved out more time for themselves, and this whole situation is only convenient for the three of them. Leonard told the second son, well, he's glad he treats him, his father, so well. He said so many kind words, and he thought he'd be angry and lose his temper when he deprived him of the right to inherit the throne. The second prince said, that's simply ridiculous. He always thinks about this country. After these words, he bowed politely. Ryuya and Lesledza looked at him incredulously. The next day, the protagonist came to the Adventurers Guild. He needed to ascend to the ranks of a high-ranking adventurer as soon as possible. He had a strong desire to succeed for several reasons. First, it would be nice if he could reach rank A at 20. Second, there was his wedding with Lesledza. At that moment, costume designers appeared out of nowhere and whispered to her that it was time to start thinking about her wedding dress. He was surprised. They had already started? The protagonist looked at Noem and asked, what's wrong with her dress? She replied sheepishly, they decided to make it themselves in the future. Suddenly, Abinion pounced on him and indignantly exclaimed, is he even listening to her? MC gloomily remarked, is that necessary? At that moment, Londite approached them with a bottle of wine and announced that he had reached rank B. He was surprised so suddenly and quickly. The guildmaster continued. The special request from the royal palace to exterminate demons had been approved by the Adventurer Council, and they had decided to promote him. Noem had also been promoted to the same rank. The two of them had saved hundreds of soldiers. What a worthy deed. Noem happily responded to the rank increase. The protagonist remarked in surprise. Was it normal for him to just jump from one rank to another? Usually, you can only increase your rank by completing a huge number of quests and increasing your own strength, right? Londite looked at him in bewilderment, and then, clutching the protagonist and Noem's faces with her huge hands, laughed and said, "Who's to blame for his achievements being so anomalous? Killing demons is an act only gods can perform." What did he expect after that? More hugs. Noem asked, by the way, why they only promoted him to rank B. That seems so low. Even among S-ranked warriors, there's no one who could single-handedly handle an army of demons. Londite shouted sharply and angrily, because the council is full of stubborn old men, that's why. MC even flinched at the guildmaster's unexpected shout. He was glad she was angry because of him, and was working hard for him, but still, it was a little strange. Abinyan told her master that she thought they were treating him unfairly, didn't they? They need to destroy the entire council. Riria glared at her, thinking darkly. She'd only just appeared, and already she was saying things that irritated him. Londite continued, but even if that were true, it wasn't certain there was a reason for it. There's a special exam for becoming an A-ranked adventurer. He asked in surprise. An exam? The guildmaster explained that for them, achieving A-ranked adventurers is a significant achievement, but legendary feats like slaying a wyvern require an S-rank, which is a whole other level. Therefore, before that, to truly understand how special A-rank is, different evaluation systems were needed to gauge a candidate's capabilities. This exam gathers hundreds of outstanding B-rank candidates every few years, and they conduct an exam to advance to A-rank. Fewer than 10 people pass, and on top of that, sometimes candidates die. MC and Noem both exclaimed, "How awful." The alchemist asked, "And when, roughly, will the next exam be?" Londite replied, "Next month, so in about 5 days." He remarked in surprise, "So soon," she continued. "If they miss this chance, the next test won't be for another 2 or 3 years. They have no choice." He thought, he needs to pass this exam the first time. He wondered how merciless this test will be. Londite asked the girl if she was taking this exam too. Noem happily replied, "Yes, she's passing." He was surprised by her answer, thinking, such a calm and intimidating girl. She'd become an adventurer around the same time he had, and was advancing at the same pace. The Queen of Alchemy's boundless potential. The guildmaster replied, "Then she'll write another letter of recommendation." The allies said they were counting on her. The protagonist sheepishly told Londite, "It always seems like she's always looking out for him." And the food was delicious too. He suddenly thought, if the local guildmaster weren't a girl, his path certainly wouldn't be so easy. The guildmaster replied, "How can I put it? She in fact also waits for their arrival every day. Let them climb even higher and show her even more interesting things. And their progress is incredibly fast." She barely audible the last words. He asked, puzzled, "What did she say at the end?" Londite was embarrassed and said she would handle all the preparations, and they should come to the meeting place on the appointed day. Okay? Abinian asked, "What kind of place is that?" She replied, "It changes every time." This time, it was in the south, in the kingdom of Rubrum. The protagonist wondered where that was. He remembered hearing that name recently. Abinian and Noem grabbed his hands and pulled him forward. Spirit exclaimed, "Since they've decided, they need to move." Noem added, "She's ready to start whenever." He exclaimed in bewilderment, resisting. What are they talking about? This isn't a stroll around the neighborhood. We need to inform Lesledza about proper preparations. It's not that simple. Finally, a few days later, the allies were there. Noem exclaimed joyfully, "They've made it." MC looked around and thought, this kingdom of Rubrum has a warm climate. The state is located at the center of several port cities, and prospers thanks to maritime trade. The color of the blue sea was simply incredibly vibrant. Noem was overjoyed. How wonderful. She was seeing the sea for the first time. So such a huge lake really exists? The protagonist said she was making too much noise. He thought, to be honest, it was his first time seeing the sea too. Even the wind smelled different. Born in a backwater in the center of Kirian, he had mostly seen only forests. But now he finally saw the sea with his own eyes. His lips stretched into a joyful smile at these thoughts. Noem, too, was sincerely overjoyed at this opportunity. Abinian noticed how their restless leader got so noisy at the sight of the sea. Noem was indignant. She was looking at them like country bumpkins. The protagonist asked the spirit in surprise, had she seen the sea before? The spirit answered, of course. How many thousands of years does he think she's lived already? The sea. She's already explored the entire seabed. Noem asked admiringly, does she really have a lot of free time? He thought as expected. Abinian answered, no. From time to time, she too sometimes attends to various matters. Magical spirits live in the sea, so she's visited them several times on various matters. MC, looking at her appearance, thought he sometimes forgets himself. She's a spirit who can cause a natural disaster and kill tens of thousands of people in an instant, and some like her live on the seabed. Noam asked in surprise, is she friends with other magical spirits too? Abinion replied that there are some who are truly compatible with her spirit, but there are also those who, for no apparent reason, begin to fight to the death, and they drag all living beings nearby into it. Rhea thought grimly, it seems she could be quite a problem. It's good that he's friends with her. Noam admiringly remarked that when such creatures are in the city, their appearance is so clearly visible. Abinion had noticed, that's for sure. In that case, she should remember to travel normally. He thought, what a convenient national trait. After some time, they arrived at another place, where the head of the Rubrum Kingdom's Adventurers Guild, Go Mojas, loudly said that he apologized, but he was not passing. Rhea calmly asked, what's the reason? If the documents were supposed to be enough, he asked loudly, but he doesn't have the ability, right? For an A ranker, this is unheard of. It can't be. He looked at him and wondered, is it really as the second prince said? Also, when moving from country to country, all accumulated successes are reset. However, since he was here, he couldn't retreat. He said with a smirk that he had heard everything. A guy without an ability. The main principle of adventurers is, the more capable, the higher. In other words, people without abilities have no place here. He doesn't know what trick he used to get the recommendation, but this time he was conducting the exam, so he was out of luck. He would never allow any illegality. He said with a calm expression that, however, he had done nothing illegal. He said loudly that there was no way a person without an ability could obtain a recommendation legally. So the guildmaster of the Centaculian Kingdom is a young girl? It's understandable why she's so airheaded, but never mind. She'll definitely take responsibility for this mistake. And this recommendation was written so crudely and with a trembling hand. He clenched his fist and said that he could tolerate insults directed at himself. But what about those directed at Lundite? He called the results he achieved in his homeland crude, but they were deliberately written in simple language. This should prove that he is a capable person. Majas asked loudly, did he destroy a monster with a killing blow? Obviously, this was complete nonsense. If he wanted to rise higher, he could have come up with something better. He calmly stood before him and thought that monsters could single-handedly destroy an entire country. They were the natural enemies of humanity. Even if he didn't believe it at first, then why treat him so rudely and unfairly? He pointed his finger at him and loudly said that he had forged an official document and that he was facing prison for that. Now he would find out how strictly they treated criminals in this country. At the same time, they would remove the guild leader who had drawn up such an absurd document from her position. Noam had had enough of this. She walked up to him, poured the contents of the flask over his head and said in a serious tone that he was too rude and should apologize to him for it. He became very angry about this and loudly asked what she was even doing. He was the guild leader, by the way. She walked away from him and said with a displeased look that it didn't matter what position a person occupied. If he didn't know etiquette, there was no point in answering him politely. He indignantly asked loudly, who the hell was she? The protagonist thought that thanks to her, he hadn't crushed that freak. She said that she also wanted to pass the A-rank exam. If he had looked at the documents, he would have understood where his eyes were looking. He took the documents and asked, is she going to take the exam? Mohus read it and asked loudly in a surprised tone, does she have the special ability of SSS rank Alchemy King? She's really suitable for the exam. They should start preparing the documents right away. She asked, she will participate together with him, right? He asked loudly, what is she talking about? She should just leave this idiot. Only talented geniuses like her are suitable for A rank. She said that it doesn't matter that he has no ability. She saw with her own eyes how easily he destroyed monsters, demons, and heroes. If he can't pass the exam, then she leaves. He was confused by this and said that, however, even if she said so, only a few were recognized without abilities. This attracted MC's attention, and he thought that this meant that even people like him were recognized. He agreed with a tense expression and said that they should begin the formal procedure. If word spreads in the future that such capable A-rank people would appear in the exam he was responsible for, then he would agree. Noam denied it and said that he couldn't acknowledge a person with legendary rank abilities. In the future, in this world, his name would be remembered as that of a great idiot. They were both surprised by this, and she said that he absolutely refused to acknowledge his strength. Then she would give him a chance and grant him the opportunity to see everything with his own eyes. Mohus asked with a wary look, what did she mean by that? She asked with a calm expression, there are a lot of monsters in the area, right? If he dealt with them alone, then he would admit that he was incredibly dangerous, right? He still didn't believe it, slammed his fist on the table, and loudly said that he was simply incapable of such a thing. However, if he succeeded, then he would admit it. She chuckled and said that he said it himself. Then he should pick up the drool he spat out. She also wouldn't let him pretend none of this had happened. Riria said he'd heard those words somewhere before. She said loudly in a dissatisfied tone that that was it. She'd made a deal, so they could go. They would show that brainless boar his strength. They went outside. He asked her to wait and said he was sorry for having to do that for him. She turned to him and said decisively that it was natural. After all, he had saved her life. She hadn't yet managed to return even a % of what he had done for her. He thought that if she hadn't stopped him and he had continued insulting Londite, then he would have attacked him, and disaster would have been inevitable. He said that pouring water on him was unnecessary anyway. She said with a smile that it was okay. It wasn't water. He was surprised by this and wondered, wasn't it just ordinary water? What was it then? She said it was a potion she had developed just in case something like this happened. It was good that it had come in handy so quickly. He was a little wary of this and wondered what if he became covered in some kind of spots in a few days and died a painful death. He asked, by the way, what effect did this potion have? She, with a calm expression, said that if she had to give it a name, it would be a hair reversal potion. Maybe it would be better to call it a hair loss potion? He sighed with relief and said that it was good that his life was not in danger. 20 minutes later, they reached the plains outside the city. Noam said that it was so spacious and flat here, it was the perfect battlefield. The protagonist, with a slightly worried look, remembered what she had said earlier and wondered, had she said something similar? He called her name, but she didn't listen and said that she understood that he was worried, but there was no need to do that. She raised her hand and called Abinion. She appeared next to him and asked, "This is the same potion, isn't it? She can feel free to take it." He looked at them with a worried look. She started walking across the field and asked, "Maybe I should use it here?" She hovered next to her and asked, "Maybe a little deeper?" He continued to look at them from the side and wondered, "What is this? And what's going on?" She took out a large flask and said that it was a monster pun. She had prepared one potion for the purpose of research. He was surprised by what he saw and said loudly that she had done so much. She said that she had made a potion from the stench that attracts monsters. The last time she opened this bottle, this stench began to disperse in all directions, and the smell began to lure everyone to the center. He thought about it, and she said with a smile that in other words, the monsters will come here. MC was a little nervous and thought that he would have to defeat them one by one. He asked how many could be lured with this bottle, approximately. Noem said with a smile that it would cover the entire area of responsibility of this city. He was surprised and said loudly that she was opening such a strong potion without any ulterior motive. She poured the potion on the ground in a spiral, and he covered his nose because it stank so much. Abinion said with a smile that the monsters would come running here immediately. She looked towards the forest and said with a smirk that they were already coming. Beast-like, half-humans, with an indefinite slug-like form. She even sensed the undead among them. She had made a high-quality potion. He asked with a slightly confused tone how many monsters exactly were there. She took a closer look and said that there were about 200 monsters. Noem, with a joyful expression on her face, said that this was the effect she was going for. She was very happy that the transformation was successful. He asked with concern, "Now there are a lot of them, but what will happen to the city?" She said in a carefree tone that everything would be fine, because he would defeat them all. Abinion said that they had gathered them here precisely for this. He thought they were relying too much on him. He asked, "So if he missed even one, a catastrophe would happen in the city?" She asked with a smile. He wouldn't allow such a mistake, would he? However, even if something were to happen, let this city, where he had been insulted, be wiped off the face of the earth. A crowd of monsters reached them, and he immediately began fighting them with his fists. He thought that the problem was only in numbers, and the length of his arms and legs was limited. He needed some kind of plan. He swung his hand very forcefully and attacked several monsters at once with air. Noem looked at it and said that it was an amazing wall of compressed air. He thought that it was excellent. It worked, and something like this was enough for weak monsters. Abinion called the master and said that the information had been adjusted. Hiruya turned to her and asked, "What is it?" She said that the effect was stronger than they thought, so monsters from a wider area were gradually approaching here. He asked for a simpler explanation, and she said that their number had already reached 1,000. She wished him luck, and he continued to fight the huge hordes of monsters following the smell of the potion. The next day, he stood amidst a pile of corpses and thought he destroyed them all. He noticed a huge snail, shocked by what he'd seen, killed it with one blow, and thought that was it for sure. People crowded around, examining the place, and Noam joyfully said there were more than 5,000 of them here. A bald Magus came to them and loudly asked what had happened here. Why were there so many monsters? This was a predatory wolf, and these were the orcs, goblins, and even Comtike, familiar to him. This was the powerful rhinoceros beetle Kleos. He had even defeated all the monsters from which they extract useful materials. What about the special product of his city? How did this happen? She approached him and asked, "Does he mean to say that he overslept?" It wasn't the master's fault. It was he who didn't want to believe in his abilities, which is why he agreed to this. He said that because he had killed so many monsters at once, they might not appear here for the next few months, or even years. The protagonist said that this was good, since no one in the city would be in danger now. However, he didn't know what would happen to the adventurers whose job it was to exterminate monsters. monsters. She said that he should think carefully about whether a D or C rank adventurer could do it. They would begin the formalities of recognizing him as worthy of the A rank title. He wanted to object, but she turned around with a displeased look, called him over, and asked if she still had any potion left. So maybe they should continue hunting monsters. He became very worried about this, loudly asked her to wait, and said that he would handle all the formalities. She said with a kind smile that that was what he should have said from the very beginning. After some time, she came to him and said with a happy expression that he probably hadn't even thought about it, but during this time, they finished collecting materials from 5,000 monsters. On the way, they also talked with the local head of the Artisans Guild. She left this work to them. She didn't even have to do anything herself. He sipped his drink and said that this was incredible. They walked down the street and he thought that the exam would be in a few days. What should they do in the meantime? Everything needs to be planned carefully. Now their goal is to pass the A rank exam. They need to find out how the previous exams went. He said with a serious expression that success only comes to those who don't do stupid things. He has only one rival, and that is himself. Abinion flew to them and asked if this was really true. If he asks what they need to do now, her answer is to wash. They were surprised by this, and she covered her nose with her fingers and said that they both smelled terribly. It seemed to be the effect of her spell. This terrible stench just wouldn't go away. Noam was very surprised by this, sniffed her clothes, and asked him with a worried look if they really stank. MC also sniffed, and with a confused look said that he didn't understand anything. Maybe they got used to this smell? She flew next to them and said that people passing by constantly commented on the unbearable stench. After thinking about this, they went to a seaside resort of this kingdom. He washed himself and thought that they grew up inland and didn't know this, but it turns out that swimming in the sea is so good. This form is called a swimsuit. It seems it is designed specifically for relaxing at the sea. She put their clothes in a powerful detergent she invented. Earlier, she said that she had a product that would wash away the smell from the body. They should wash with it when they went into the sea. He looked away and said that, however, for some reason, she was still late. He bought swimming trunks and got ready very quickly. Noam came to him and said in an embarrassed tone that she apologized for making him wait. Ryuya saw her swimsuit, began to examine it, and with a confused look wondered, "What is this?" She was only in her underwear. Does she want to feel like a young girl before getting married? She blushed because of this and said that, in fact, she was shy. The seller said that it was a very ordinary swimsuit. He looked around and asked, "Is this serious?" However, the other customers, he saw that the other girls were wearing similar clothes, and she covered his eyes and loudly said that he cannot look at this. He was confused because of this, and asked why she thought so. Abinion called the master and said that he needed to understand the girl's heart. She tried so hard, and he looks at others. She bought a two-piece swimsuit. She tried so hard to dare to show him her body. For her, it is a serious test. He needs to praise her well. He asked if he said that it suits her. Will she take it as praise? Noam, her face flushed with embarrassment, said that she did not know, but was grateful for it. This was her first time wearing a swimsuit, and there were so many different types here. He looked away, surprised when he saw Abinion, and she laughed because of this and asked if he was surprised. She made it from half spirits, half physical ectoplasm, and it can freely change its shape. She has one technique that allows her to change it at will. He called Noam loudly in a confused tone and said that she should cover it with something. She agreed and said in confusion that it was slipping so much. She flew up to her, put her hand on her shoulder, asked her to be quieter, and asked, she saw how the gentleman panicked, didn't she? If she seduced him as boldly as she did, he would undoubtedly be hers. However, if she continued to behave so clumsily, her skin would eventually work against her. She hesitantly agreed and said that, however, she shouldn't seduce him in such public places. They approached him, took him by the hand, and she said that since they were on the sea beach, they needed to have a good time. She agreed. They dragged him along, and Abinion said that she could give them a lecture. She even knew the crawl stroke. She admired this, called him, and said that they should learn it. He asked them to stop with a serious expression and asked, did they come to this country to have fun? There would be an exam very soon. They had something to do now. He still couldn't resist them, and they spent quite a lot of time on the beach. On the day of the exam, they arrived at the central arena established by the king, Battle Paradise 2. Noam saw this and said with slight surprise that the exam would begin soon. The protagonist walked alongside and said that he was so nervous. She turned to him and loudly asked why he was even nervous. He could handle it without any problem. She was the one who should be worried here. After all, she had no fighting ability. He wondered when she had started to glow so brightly with adventure. So this structure was built to hold ceremonies for the kingdom of Rubrum. Bloody battles used to be held here. Now, it has quietly transformed into a place of national significance, where the exam to promote adventurers is held every few years. Many countries of the world continue to help each other for the sake of holding it. At least, that's what he heard from the man in short pants. He turned to her and said that they should show their best together. She agreed with a confused look, and he said that besides, it was more likely that he had a higher chance of failing the exam than she did. She denied it and said that it simply couldn't be. He said that he wasn't joking now, because they didn't know when the pattern about him having no ability would pop up again. He thought that after leaving the country, he again acutely felt the social stereotype of being without abilities. Most likely, he wouldn't have to wait long. Several huge guys approached them and said that so he was the guy without an ability. An idiot who didn't know his place appeared again. He was going to become an A-rank adventurer with no ability. He should stop. A-rank is not for him. He was probably so spoiled by his class that he thought he could advance without abilities. Is he ready to die yet? The world isn't that simple for him to get A-rank so easily without an ability. Noem was scared when she saw them, and MC calmly said that he really didn't have an ability, but that was no reason to give up. No matter what happened, let things be as they are. They laughed out loud and said he was very brave. However, among A-ranks, there shouldn't be anyone who hopes to somehow solve a problem with enthusiasm alone. If he still thinks that enthusiasm will help him figure everything out, then he's still very young. Also, to get A-rank, one plan consisting of his iron will won't be enough. He doesn't get the logic. How is he going to achieve his goal? This is just awful. He calmly looked at them and asked, "So what?" They laughed out loud again and said that he explained, he is completely unprepared. He didn't even come here without any weapons, did he? However, there won't be another A-rank exam for a long time. Does he think he can pass it all without a single potion? It can't be helped. Perhaps he will share with him the potions they have. They handed him the potions, laughed loudly and said that, however, the A-rank exam is not so easy that you can relax with only potions. He also needs an antidote and something to help with paralysis. Since he doesn't have the ability, he should have prepared it because it is absolutely necessary. Since he doesn't have the ability, he should take care of his safety. He should take a stamina drink, eye medicine, a potion of vigor, a cooling potion, a petrification resistance potion, and a throat lozenge. They gave him a lot of supplies, laughed loudly and said that even with these, it's not a guarantee that he will be able to pass the A-rank exam because it is very strict. If they really want to get an A-rank, it is better to fail this and only then give up. At the very end, he will loudly declare that he is not going to give up. They began to leave and said that there was a new little boy there too. As elders, they need to guide them on the right path. No one looked at them with a confused look and said that they had as many potions as she did, and the throat lozenge was very tasty. Ryuya thanked them, and someone loudly said that the greeting before the exam would begin very soon. All exam participants were asked to gather in front of the stage. They all gathered near the stage, and the curator with a serious expression said that it was time to begin. To begin with, they were provided with a place to conduct the exam, as well as assistants and all the amenities. On the stage stood A-rank adventurer Invincible Shield, Sides, the curator in charge of the rank promotion exam, a direct member of the guild council, a fellow curator, A-rank adventurer Iron Beam, Grinda. One of the curators said that he therefore wished to warmly thank the Kingdom of Rubrum as a representative of the Adventurers Guild. Among the curators were two more A-rank adventurers, Sentence and Shigar. Side stepped forward and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the future A-rank adventurers gathered here, as well as the arrogant ones who think they have the right to be so. Their job is to distinguish who is who among them, including him. Standing behind the podium now are the 4 people they are trying to become. He sincerely hopes that among the newcomers standing here today, as many as possible have become their equals." The protagonist thought, so will they look at him the same way as they, current A-rank adventurers? That's quite rational. Shigar said with a smile that it might turn out that none of them will pass. Sentence sighed, looking at her, called her a toothy girl, and asked her to be quiet. Sides waved his hand and loudly announced that the exam was about to begin. He wished he could say so, but first, they had invited a guest to this exam who said that this experience could somehow help him in his future as king. They should allow him to introduce the first prince of the Centakelian kingdom, Zemnanto. He walked onto the stage and said with a smile that there was no need to look so sad. He really was the #1 candidate for the next king of the Centakelian kingdom. Many representatives of the Kingdom of Rubrum might wonder why the prince of a foreign country was here. However, they didn't even need to ask. He has very strong ties to this country. After all, they know that his mother is the second bride of the king of the Centakelian kingdom, Kiriana, and she was the former queen of the Kingdom of Rubrum. In other words, the king of the Kingdom of Rubrum is his uncle. He allowed him to look at them and study. MC looked at him with a serious expression and thought, so that's how it is. So that's where he heard about this kingdom. Now he definitely thinks that nothing good awaits him. Sentence said that there is definitely nothing bad about it. In other words, since the Prince of Two Kingdoms is here, with his good grades, if they receive an A rank, it will be much easier for them to carry out their future activities. Sides agreed, and with a wide smile said that the most important thing is that those who have a low score from the very beginning will not be able to take a step and will not change anything. Zemnanto approached him and quietly asked, did they understand everything? He only wants one thing from them, for those associated with Lesledza to definitely fail the exam. He covered his mouth with his hand and said that if they receive a decent amount of financial assistance from the prince, they will be able to help him with this without a problem. Ryuya, with a slightly dissatisfied look, thought that he heard everything perfectly well. After all, his level is 8 million. They quietly said that his sister's face would fall off when he couldn't pass the exam. Besides, his father would undoubtedly make him his heir, and when he became king, he would never forget what he had done for him. He would still see how he would torture them. He looked at them with a displeased expression and thought that now he was definitely convinced that this exam would not pass peacefully. Zanato quietly asked, but still, why did this dog of Leslid's come, knowing about such a hopeless situation? He crossed his arms and said with a displeased expression that they hated him. Noem stood nearby, denied it, and said that it was not true. No one hated him. They stood on the stage and quietly said that, as he had already said, he apparently ended up here due to a mistake by the guildmaster of his region. He was counting on him. He listened to them with a serious expression and said that they got along so well. She stood nearby and with a puzzled expression said that they were true friends. Side said that he shouldn't worry. When it came to a fight, they would personally attack him. He only had to let his guard down for a moment and there would be nothing left of him. He called him a schemer in a serious tone and said that if he was going to do it, he could try. This stunned her even more, and he began to leave the stage and said that he must not betray his expectations. When he came down, he said that everyone he called must come forward. The protagonist, with a displeased expression, called her and said that he would not succumb to provocation and would not give in. They must try. She agreed and thought that he was so kind, but a little incomprehensible. After that, they began to call out the names of the participants, who raised their hands in response, and he wondered what kind of a test this was for those absent. He wished Noam luck and said that it seemed like he would be called soon too. She agreed and went to the stage. Later, the curators finished listing the people, but the group of adventurers still remained standing. Sentence stepped forward and asked, "They all probably already understand why they weren't named, right?" He asked with a serious expression. "The rest of them don't have abilities, do they?" He agreed, and said in a serious tone that they were branded as failures from birth, poor wanderers abandoned by God. They come here every time, despite the fact that there are so few of them. They don't have any abilities, but they somehow got B rank. But you shouldn't think that means they are allowed to participate in the exam. He said that, however, the rules say they can participate. The other adventurers without abilities supported him, and he said that all that remains for him to do is eliminate those whose logic doesn't work. Did they know that since the Adventurers Guild began, no one has ever achieved rank A without ability? There have been, now, and in the future, 0. However, it seems even those who failed, those who are incapable of anything, want to see those who will have superiority over them in the future, thanks to their powerful abilities. This could benefit the entire Adventurers Guild, so maybe they should leave here before their bodies are stained with blood. In that case, they will be properly valued as people worthy of their lack of talent. What will they do? The MC said in a determined tone that he would pass the exam and had no intention of giving up. He originally came here to obtain an A rank. The soul of an adventurer demands to challenge the impossible. The other participants responded similarly, and Sentence, with a displeased look, said how annoying they were. Why did such idiots always smell of trouble? He began to use his ability, and with a wide smile, said that in that case, everyone at the A-rank adventure exam venue would receive a special exam from him, the dungeon conductor. He sensed something approaching, turned around, and loudly declared that they should watch their step. He continued using his ability, laughed, and said that it seemed there was someone with good sense among them. However, as the person conducting the exam, he ordered them that anyone who moved even a shang would be instantly disqualified. He created a large hole under the participants' feet and used the highest-ranking ability, Dungeon Spot. They all started falling down, and he said with a smirk that they didn't need to worry. Falling into a hole wasn't the only danger that awaited them. He'd simply guide this trash to a suitable exam location. He thought that the moment he'd been calmly and coolly sent into the pit, using a shared gaze with Albion, he'd confirmed it and seen his information. After they found themselves in an unknown cave, he emerged from the ground after falling and asked, "Are they all okay?" The adventurers, who'd also ended up here, said that he'd thrown about 20 to 30 people here. It looked like they were now in a dungeon of the Rubrum Kingdom. Indeed, most cities are built over dungeons from which they gather resources. However, he didn't think they'd intentionally set a trap here. Ryuya denied it and said that it was his ability that opened the hole in space, the Dungeon Spot ability. Sentence watched him with his ability and thought he was quite good. He understood everything right away. Did he really guess what his ability was? He said he had a spare test for them, the incapable ones. It involved escaping a dungeon. If they could pass it, he would admit they were at least capable. Their time was unlimited, but if they didn't hurry, the test would end. Still, he was in charge of this test. If they wanted to give up, they could ask him for help at any time. He could still allow even those who weren't capable of the job to live. He said goodbye to them, and the protagonist turned to the participants, firmly calling them stubborn and saying they should move on. All the adventurers without abilities resolutely agreed with him and continued on. He led them forward and thought that their hearts were united, not only by their hatred for the high-ranking adventurers and the sense of superiority that had humiliated them so much, but also by the results they had brought with them, hoping to become A-rank adventurers and the pride of those who lacked abilities. On the way, they met several guys who gave him a lot of potions and loudly said that they would continue in the same spirit. If they all united, then these difficulties would be nothing. He was surprised to meet them and loudly asked, "Does that mean they also lack abilities?" They asked, "Did they say that they didn't?" This was already their 7th exam to obtain A rank. They must all pass it together. MC looked at them and thought that's how it was. On the surface, they seemed like simple hooligans, but in fact, they had endured the most hardships and suffering and still made it this far. They laughed loudly and said that they would survive even without the blessing of an ability. That's right, because they've been doing this for 20 years, by the way. They are supported by an unbreakable spirit. He asked them to stop laughing so annoyingly first and thought he understood everything. Everyone here, even without abilities, is a very strong person. They all walked through the dungeon together. He called Abinion and asked if she could hear him. She immediately agreed with the master and said that it looked like he was sent to a very strange place. Any orders? She needs to destroy the culprit who sent him to this trash heap and then save him? He said that none of that is necessary. He will try to handle it on his own. She must support Noam, because it would not be surprising if something suddenly happened to her too. She sat calmly on a tall building and said that he was being overly cautious as always. It seemed she was showing herself quite well. Would he like to use a shared gaze and see this for himself? He agreed and immediately saw her standing next to the wounded adventurers. The curators were easily defeating the exam participants, and he asked what kind of situation this was. She said that this was a simple candidate selection. Apparently the point of the exam was to withstand the onslaught of examiners. Apparently, at this rate, they only want to leave 10% of the candidates. He asked if she didn't think this was too harsh a selection. She called the master and said that it seemed that with their fortitude, they both could easily handle everything. He asked if their souls were really that strong. Shigar defeated one of the participants, turned to Noam, and said that the cute prey had been found. Ryuya began to worry and asked, "Wait, does that mean she's in trouble, right?" Abinion laughed and asked if that was really true. Maybe he wanted to see their abilities too? He saw that her ability was to transform into a panther. And before the attack, she said that she was so much trouble, she was too cute, so she wanted to cuddle her. Here's her special ability. It's a shame, of course, that they told her to make a lot of noise today. Now she'll turn into a beast by 50%. She doesn't even have a chance of a random victory. Depending on how long she resists, passing her exam depends. Noam asked with a serious expression, did she fall asleep, or how long will she continue talking? Is she seriously going to defeat her? Most likely, she will do it first. They are simply the worst. You shouldn't judge people only by the presence or absence of an ability. The master is an order of magnitude stronger than everyone else, but they demonstratively ignore him and avoid him. They even dare call themselves examiners? What are they heretics doing anyway? Shigar asked what she was even talking about. She has no idea what she is talking about. Is it really because she becomes stupid in a state of beasthood? She called her annoying and said that even though she was a small fry, not fit to hold a candle to the master, she definitely wouldn't lose to her. She would show the difference between them. All this threw her into a stupor, but she quickly jumped towards her and loudly said that it was clear she was challenging her. She was quite brave to dare to be so insolent to an A rank. With an unperturbed expression, she opened the flask with the potion, and Sides, looking worried, loudly said that she shouldn't approach her so thoughtlessly. After all, she had that variability of the king of alchemy. Noam spilled several potions on the ground, and she, looking worried, immediately ran away from her. However, she smelled a strong odor and in a displeased tone, loudly asked, "What was that smell?" It was so painful. It felt like her nose was pierced with some kind of knife. The protagonist watched what was happening and wondered, was it a mixture of numerous smells? She looked at her opponent and said in a serious tone that when she turns into a beast, the senses of her eyes, ears, and nose are proportionally heightened. In other words, the reaction to potions will also be heightened. Wild cats, after all, react radically when their territory is marked by another owner. However, since she adopts the characteristics of a cat, this instinct is also included. This means that many of her potions work simply wonderfully. She will pour this over her body, and it will be incredibly interesting. Shigar, with a very displeased look, loudly asked her to stop and said that she was thinking like the devil. She threw another potion in front of her, which caused her to loudly say how it stinks. The stimulating smell is getting stronger and stronger. She asked her to stop, but she continued throwing potions at her, without a drop of pity. Sides watched this from the side and loudly said that she would dispel the transformation into a beast. Then she would not react so strongly to smells, and it would cease to be dangerous for her. She didn't listen to him, continued to dodge the potions, and loudly declared that she was using animal reflexes and would definitely escape. They watched and said that things were bad. She had instinctively fallen into the game of dodging potions and fallen into a trap. She had completely underestimated her opponent. That girl's ability was an order of magnitude stronger than hers. She noticed a bottle that was different from the previous ones, but at that moment it exploded in a bright flash of light. She covered her eyes with her hands and screamed loudly in pain, and Noam approached her and asked Her vision had also improved, hadn't it? Thanks to the alchemical transformation, she made a light potion. She should move, she was already tired. She should be a little more foresighted. She poured the potion on her head, which made Shigar feel a strong pain, and loudly said that the smell was making her dizzy. Abinion watched this from the same place and said that she really had won, how merciless she was. She took out a large club, which frightened her opponent even more, and she asked in a frightened tone loudly if this club was also an alchemical technique. Noem began to prepare for a blow, denied it, and said that she bought it at the store. She calmed down because of this, and the other curators loudly said that this was bad. Doesn't she understand the situation she is in now? She put the club to her face and said that she needn't worry. After that, she would scrape it off with an alchemical spell. As a result of the alchemical effect, at the moment of contact, it will become 10 times harder, and it seems the mass will increase by about 300 times. Now she must be kind and die. She delivered a very strong blow with the club, causing a large cloud of dust to rise, and Shigar opened her eyes when it was over. She saw a huge crater left by the blow, which hit the ground next to her. Noem asked, maybe this happened because of the dark glasses? Next time she won't miss. What should she do? She began to raise the club, and she, with horror in her voice, loudly said that she gave up, but asked not to hit. She did not want to be flattened by her blow. Abinion, smiling, said that it seemed like she would stop being sarcastic now. MC, with a confused look, asked, is it really necessary to do something like this after several insults? Grinda, with a displeased expression, said that this girl had become completely insolent. Sides called him and said that he should stop. Shigar lost. After all, the ability to transform into a beast has conditions, and she is also A rank. Naturally, it is not comparable to an SSS rank ability. He approached her, extended his hand, asked her name, and said that she passed the first part of the exam. She should sit somewhere in the corner and rest. She agreed, and he said with a smile that he was very glad that such a talented girl like her, with an excellent ability, was passing the exam. Maybe they should fight in honor of her passing the exam and becoming an A-rank adventurer? She took off her glasses and asked if the ability was so important. He was confused by this question, and she said in a serious tone that she hated abilities with all her heart. She lived wonderful days before she received the ability, but it ruined everything. Because of her ability, her life consisted of nothing but bullying. That was until one day, one person changed everything with his own hands. Meeting that man brought her much more happiness than the ability of the King of Alchemy. He apologized and said that he did not understand what she was talking about. She said that there are many things that are much more important than abilities. She passed by him and said that since he was one of those who did not notice, he would be destroyed. Abinion said that she could not stop watching her grow. Now the master was convinced that he did not need to worry for a while. Although even if something happened, she would make all the enemies understand how unclean the world they lived in was. Ryuya ran on and said that in that case he would concentrate on his exam. He caught up with the other participants and they loudly asked what had happened to him. For some reason, it seemed to him as if he was not here. If he were in the clouds while in the dungeon, he would easily die. Would he like to lick some candy or salt? Moderation is essential for traveling. One of them called out to the people running ahead, asked them to slow down, and said that people without good endurance were starting to get out of breath. Their goal was to get out of here. He would run last, so as not to get unexpectedly hit in the back at the end. He looked at them with slight surprise and thought that they really were reliable. From the very start, not a single one had fallen behind or been injured, all thanks to the perfect defense of these strongmen. He asked why they took command and didn't try to act roughly. They looked at him and said that he decided to ask straight out. He was the same as them, wasn't he? And probably already understood everything. They treated those without abilities with disdain. They arbitrarily decided that they were weak, so they constantly picked on them. They had become completely insolent, and were even trying to intimidate them. They were not quite right in the head, and no one would approach them of their own free will. He also understood how harsh this world was for people without abilities, didn't he? The protagonist looked at him and thought that his voice suddenly became so sullen. They said that their life as adventurers is full of bitterness. They are constantly underestimated, trampled, and kicked out of everywhere. You will ask how they are able to continue despite this torment? It's all because they cannot give up on their goal. Even without abilities, they will definitely achieve A rank. He was surprised by this and thought that because they all lack abilities, he ended up with these people who cannot be broken by any difficulty. They survived and became true veterans, constantly refusing to give in to despair. No matter how bad the situation was, they did not lose hope and continued to move forward towards their cherished goal. They laughed loudly and said that, in other words, if he wants to become an A rank adventurer without an ability, he must become an idiot. This year, they will definitely become A rank adventurers. He's out of breath. He seems to be running at too fast a pace. Sometimes it's hard to tell when you're completely exhausted, so he needs to remember that. He drank too much water. In a dungeon, you need to drink water at certain intervals. It can't be helped. He'll share his canteen. They're allies now, so they'll cover each other as much as they can. They noticed an enemy ahead. He defeated him with one blow and thought that it was certainly not bad. but their laughter bothered him. The strongmen loudly said that this guy defeated a monster with one blow again. He defeated almost all the monsters single-handedly. Thanks to this, he moves at a fast pace and doesn't need to worry about the rest of the way. The adventurers continued running and loudly said that the exit was already close. He noticed that the passage further on was too dark and wondered if they thought that was strange. Usually, there should be a light at the exit. He said loudly with a serious expression that they should wait a bit. Something was wrong here. The man running next to him loudly warned about it, but one of them passed through the black portal, disappeared, and they looked at it and asked, "What is this darkness?" MC looked at it and said that for sure, it looks like a dungeon spot. The guy next to him loudly said that this is the ability of that skinny freak. This means that the passage leading to the exit is one-way closed. He asked, "What will they do?" One of them said that they don't have time to think, they will get through it. He was about to object to this, but they loudly said that it has already absorbed one of their comrades. If they don't unite with him quickly, then a whole swarm of monsters can surround him, and then they won't be able to save him. He thought that they were right about that. The worst thing in the dungeon is to get separated from your comrades. He agreed with this. They all ran forward, and he thought that to save his comrades, he is ready to do anything, even go to a deadly dangerous place. Only idiots from the ranks of adventurers are capable of such things. He had heard something similar somewhere before. Sentence watched them, laughed, and said that they were such idiots. They ended up in another dungeon and said that this place was exactly the same as the one they were thrown into the first time. Are they all here? Is this an infinite loop using the ability of another dimension? Ryuya thought that it seemed like this smiling guy was not going to let them pass the exam. He said with his ability that this was not the case. He believed in them. Even without the ability, with just effort and enthusiasm, they will achieve excellent results and pass this. If they don't have the courage for this, then there's no point in giving them the right to take the A rank exam, right? He will warn them just in case. He is always ready to accept those who want to give up. He thought with a serious expression that he has no shortage of impudence. It's obvious what he wants. Eliminate them by giving them an absolutely impossible task. He simply justifies his actions with absurd logic. The adventurers, with a displeased expression, said that they looked down on people without abilities, and now speak so bluntly. He thought it must be because of him. Without a doubt, Prince Simnanto is targeting him, and they have implicated the others in this plan. One of the strongmen was about to give up, but the protagonist loudly asked him to stop, and asked if he was really going to give in so easily. He said that retreating also required courage. First, they would get out of here, and then they would appeal and tell the guild council about such an unfair exam. Right now, that was the best plan. Abinyon called him, and he asked what was wrong. He was busy right now. She said he would be pleased to hear what she had to say, but first he would have to listen to her lecture. So, will he listen? While he was listening to the story, the adventurers said that this was the second round, and there were already some who were giving up, exhausted. They were adventurers precisely because they were here now despite their weakness. In this situation, they were pushed to their limits, so they needed to consider this training and first get to the surface. He finished listening to her, raised his hand, and said that they needed to go down. He needs something. The dungeon core is below, and he'll just destroy it. They were surprised by this, but he said that if the core is destroyed, the dungeon will fall apart. The space will change dramatically, which means his ability will instantly disappear. In such a turmoil, they will get out of here with great dignity. They listened to him, thought about it, and loudly said that this was too reckless. Does he even understand how difficult it is to destroy the dungeon core? The core is at the very bottom. It's unknown how deep, but at least 20 floors. He understands that, right? There are a horde of monsters there, and even for an A-rank adventurer, something like this is impossible. They asked him to reconsider, but he stepped aside and thought, are they all worried about him? Since they are like that, he wants to take the exam with them. He swung his fist and said that everything is fine. He has a good idea. He punched the floor really hard, destroying it, and everyone was shocked by it. They looked at the hole left by his punch and said that he could see the lower level. MC turned to them and said that if he continued punching the floor at the same pace, he would quickly reach the very bottom floor. They should retreat to the exit and wait there. One of the strongmen asked, who is he? If he destroys the core while being at the very bottom, then the destruction will most likely affect him. He asked with a confident smile, to reach rank A without abilities, you have to become an idiot, right? The three of them laughed loudly and said that he was absolutely right. Great, they will do as he said. He has a wonderful delinquent spirit. Should they all gather together in this company later? Now he also sees a way out of this situation. He continued to destroy the floors of the dungeon and quickly reached the very bottom floor of the dungeon and asked, is this the core? He punched the crystal hard and an earthquake started, and he asked, is this a signal before destruction? He needs to hurry and go back up. He got out very quickly, looked at the exit of the dungeon and asked, so this is the dungeon? He turned to the adventurers and asked, did everyone manage to get out safe and sound? They were all happy about this. He laughed loudly and said that they all passed. Sentence came to them and in a shocked tone asked loudly, is this some kind of joke or something? Do they even understand what they just did? He said with a calm expression that they put all their effort into passing the exam. He said loudly in a dissatisfied tone that he didn't care at all. They destroyed the dungeon, and it is, in fact, the property of this country. Do they even know how important dungeons are? Countries use them to mine all kinds of materials. The strongman laughed, and Ryuya, with an impassive expression, said that such things happen. He said loudly, looking shocked, that the economy of the entire city would stop, and this would lead to a huge disaster. Their answer did not change, and he said loudly that with the disappearance of the dungeon, many jobs would also disappear, and all the local adventurers would lose their quests. He asked them how they would take responsibility for the hundreds of ordinary people who suffered from their actions. They answered the same thing again, and he became very angry and said loudly that they must respond immediately. He said that so be it, he would answer him seriously. What was he even talking about? Has he completely lost his mind? Will they take responsibility? The Joker here is definitely him. He was surprised by this and said loudly that, however, it was they who destroyed the core and destroyed the dungeon. He said with a serious expression that he personally did indeed destroy the core. However, it was he who forced him to resort to this plan. He threw them into a dungeon and made the goal of the exam to escape from there, so they got out, guided only by his instructions. Without the ability, they found a way to do it. Sentence was about to say something, but he said that he himself had said so. Even without the ability, with only diligence and enthusiasm, they would achieve excellent results and pass this. He was shocked by this and asked, then who would pay for this enormous damage? They pointed a finger at him, and he asked, since he was the exam supervisor, he had prepared an example solution to his task, right? After all, he had sealed the exit from the dungeon with his ability, which means the only way to get out of the dungeon was to break it, right? However, if he had instead given a task that was impossible to complete, then there was no point in having such an exam supervisor. He gritted his teeth in anger, and the protagonist asked if he didn't think now was the time to act according to his rank and show them all how to take responsibility, the so-called current examiner of A-rank adventurers. The other adventurers began to loudly support him, and with a very worried look, he said loudly that he didn't care at all. Initially, he himself was against it. He didn't want to be the curator of trash like them. Sides pushed him into this, so it's all his fault. He is the main examiner, which means the responsibility is on him. Sentence began to use his ability, and said that they should go report this to him, but he didn't care. Besides, it was the guild's fault that organized such a stupid exam. He is not to blame for anything. They were standing next to this place, and the strongman asked what they will do now. MC said that the examiner told them to go to someone more important and ask him. They walked on with serious faces and thought that it was not their fault. Later, they returned to the exam venue. Sides noticed them and asked if they were the same people without abilities that Sentence failed. Why did they come back here? They failed the exam, right? Now they can go home. They just finished the first part of the exam. This time, the exam takers turned out to be so timid. Of all the exam takers, they are confident in only one person. This conversation does not concern them, so they should return to their homes. He looked at them with a calm expression and said that they passed the test. They passed the additional exam, so now they are asking for the main one. He was shocked by this and asked what kind of joke is this? He wants incapable people to fight him? What was their examiner doing anyway? He said in a calm tone that he ran away in a hurry. During the exam, he destroyed the dungeon and, apparently, this destroyed the examiner. He has a message from him. He, as the chief examiner, will take full responsibility. He was even more shocked by this and asked, what kind of nonsense was this? Grinda asked, did he destroy the dungeon? There must be some mistake. Ryuya, with a calm expression on his face, denied it and said that he really did destroy it. They still denied it. Sides ran away and loudly said that it was not even worth talking to such a person. He would leave them to the second examiner, and he himself would go and check everything. He clenched his hand into a fist and said that if he really did destroy the dungeon, he would hit him so hard that he would fly out of his clothes. However, if this turned out to be a lie, he would punish him well. Later, he checked everything, came back and with a shocked look said that it was destroyed. He was surprised by this and asked, what does this mean? He said in a confused tone that this is exactly what it means. What did Sentence do? The protagonist calmly said that if they didn't mind, then they, incapable as they were, could quickly explain everything. After hearing this, the curators loudly declared it a lie. He didn't admit that someone without abilities was capable of such a thing. No, he didn't care anymore. He needed to be punished and arrested. He calmly stood before them and said that they first said they didn't recognize him, and then asked to be arrested. They were contradicting each other. Sides loudly declared that he should shut up. Did he understand how important the dungeon was, which was the property of the kingdom he had destroyed? The Adventurers Guild will be required to pay a huge sum of money in compensation, and in the future they will not be able to use the arena for the exam. All responsibility will fall on them. He calmly said that, however, it was they who allowed this to happen. He grabbed him by the clothes, lifted him off the ground, and loudly said that since this had happened, the best solution would be to shift all the blame onto him and get rid of him. If everything worked out, he would be able to repay everything with the life of one useless person. In that case, he would no longer be useless. He remembered how Abinion had said earlier that people like her could give birth to what people called a dungeon core. Their fateful meeting had happened in a castle, which in a broad sense was also a dungeon. Besides, if they wanted, she could give birth to a new dungeon core after they destroyed this one. After all, she was ready to fulfill absolutely any wish of her master. MC thanked her then, and now thought that when he was shown such an attitude, he understood why everyone started to worry about him when he asked them not to worry and leave everything to him. He looked at him with a calm expression and said that they created absurd exam conditions in order to prevent people who did not have abilities from passing. Moreover, the fact that they fulfilled this unrealistic condition is not a crime. He has an excellent ability, which means he can solve this problem, right? He should do it in place of his escaped comrade. He was very angry about this, called him a freak, but Grinda came to him and said that he should leave it to him. They need to shift all the responsibility to him, right? He will deal with cleaning up this garbage. He activated the steel exoskeleton ability and collected all the iron nearby. Sides let him go and said with a smirk that he decomposes metal into fibers and creates armor from it. That's why he is called an iron beam. He can be proud that he will die at the hands of an A rank. He approached him, delivered a very strong punch, but his armor was shattered into many pieces. He fell to the ground and loudly asked why his armor was broken. He was also shocked by what happened and said that his ability gathers all the metal in the area, and since his fist is hard as metal, only one thing can resist it. It was thanks to strong feelings that he trained his body so much. Ryu approached him, delivered a strong punch, and threw Grind aside with great speed. He hit the ground a couple of times, and his armor was completely destroyed. Sides, looking shocked, called out to him and loudly said that this cannot be. He turned to him and asked in a serious tone, "I think the condition for passing the first part of the exam was to defeat one of them, the examiners. So did he pass, or did he need to beat him, as he was the strongest among them? Then he will officially pass the exam. The title of A-rank adventurer?" He was very angry because of this and asked loudly, "What did he just say? He thinks he can defeat him even though he doesn't have an ability?" He calmly looked at him and asked, "Isn't he the strongest among all these small fry?" He became even more angry because of this. But a member of the Adventurers Guild Council, Mario, came to them and said that they should stop. He was very surprised to meet her. She jumped towards them and asked, "This place is officially where the exam to obtain rank A is being held, right? This is not a place for a bloody battle, is it?" The protagonist asked with a confused look. "Who is this child?" Sides bowed to her and loudly told this incompetent man that he should be afraid. A member of the council stands in front of him. He must show respect. It was this great girl, a member of the council, the one who controls all the adventurers guilds in the world. He still bowed to her and wondered, is she some kind of influential? He doesn't really understand who she is, but perhaps he should bow. She was confused by this and said that it was not necessary to bow to her. After all, they are just parasites who only formally lead them, but in reality, they are simply ruining their lives. He was very surprised by her modesty and wondered if maybe she is a good person. She said that it would be better for him to answer. For some reason, he has been looking somehow unwell for the last few minutes. Had he really gotten into some really bad situation? His whole face was even sweating. He said that destroying the dungeon was not at all part of his plans, and he understands that the council will no longer be able to avoid problems. Since things have already come to this, he will say that this person, without an ability, personally committed this crime, so he immediately decided to make him apologize to the kingdom of Rubram. She thought about this, and he looked up and said that he also sincerely regretted that she, a member of the council, had to come here in person. She hit the ground with her cane and said that she wanted to tell him that this was not good. He was the exam supervisor, wasn't he? In that case, he was responsible for everything that happened during the exam. If he set a condition that couldn't be fulfilled without destroying the dungeon, then it was his personal fault, wasn't it? Just in case, she would ask again. He was the one who destroyed the dungeon? MC agreed with this, and Mario asked how he did it. He said that he went down to the very bottom and then hit the core. She was surprised by this, and he said that if she didn't believe it, then she didn't have to. She said she just wanted to make sure. He said everything correctly. All responsibility lies with the exam supervisor. This exam was held without the permission of the council members. It was their initiative. People without abilities were surprised by this, and she said in a serious tone that she hadn't heard anything about holding an additional exam for those without abilities, so he must answer for his actions. They all differ in the presence or absence of ability, kingdom affiliation, gender, ideology. He must cast aside all prejudices and select new A-rank adventurers. The evaluation criteria should be solely ability and merit. He must make her a promise. After all, she instructed him in a way he would understand. Is that why he looks so pathetic now? Sides, with a tense expression, said that he offered his sincere apologies. Mario said in a serious tone that he disobeyed his elder's order and secretly began to decide right and wrong on his own. Ryuya thought that he never thought she would pick on him like that. She said that she would say it directly, She was disappointed in him. It seemed that it was better for him to give up on the path of becoming an S rank. He asked her to wait in a worried tone, but she didn't listen and said that, however, of course, she wasn't going to blame everything on him. If his statement about the other person being held accountable is true, then she will personally apologize to the Kingdom of Rubrum, and if she fails to beg for their forgiveness, then she will have to muster up the courage and cry in front of them right there, even if she doesn't want to. He was surprised by this and wondered if she was a 3-year-old child. She said that she was now addressing all the exam participants. She must sincerely apologize to them for all the effort they had to put in. She asks them to accept her deepest apologies. The protagonist said that they had tried hard enough, they should get to the main thing. She agreed and said that she would guarantee that everyone who had not yet been told they had failed the exam could continue taking it. So, for starters, they would suspend the exam. A little later, she would definitely continue it. They could go rest for now. She called sides and said, with a serious expression, that before going to apologize to the Kingdom of Rubrum, she wanted to hear everything from him in detail. For example, why he didn't do as the council demanded. He looked at them and thought that it looked like he was in for a real hard time. He wanted to continue taking the exam already, to get this over with as soon as possible. Noem called him and said in a cheerful tone that the most important thing was that he was okay. He looked at her with a smile and said that he was also happy for her. Maybe they should go to the hotel? She agreed, and they heard the strongmen laugh loudly and say that at this point, they would also have to part with him. It looked like they didn't drop out of the exam either, and it was all thanks to him, so he should allow himself to thank him. Traveling with him was fun. They left, and she asked what happened to them. She was about to say something else, and he said in a calm tone that they just looked like that. There's a hotel here we can stay at, right? They started to leave, and he thought, by the way, he forgot to say that he could get the dungeon back. Let them worry a little longer. However, that girl from the council seemed nice. Maybe he should have quietly told her. He noticed that Zemnanto was watching him with a displeased expression and thought that he looked pretty bad. It felt like he was terrified. Did he still have anything left in store after that? Later, they came to the God of Romance Inn in the Kingdom of Rubrum. Noem said that she would take a shower first. She was drenched in sweat. He agreed, looked around the shared room, and thought. However, he warns right away. There was no hidden meaning to this. From the very beginning, he was going to take separate rooms. However, she started saying something like they needed to save money, so they took the shared room. There was no hidden meaning in it. She came back and asked if maybe he would take a shower first. She apologized for not asking his opinion. He refused and said that everything was fine, she could go. She left, and Abinion asked the master if he wanted to save money. Why not take a shower together? He called her by name, and she asked, it's a logical suggestion, right? Besides, deep down she hoped for it. They would rub each other's bodies, act according to the instinct of reproduction. This is the best pleasure for all living beings, isn't it? MC was indignant about this and said that they would take showers alone and in turns. These are the rules of this house. She took the things and said with a happy look that then she would take a shower with her. He asked her to wait, called her a ghost, and said that it was impossible for her. How are things there? She turned to him and said that she saw what happened to that idiot. She did a good job as a secret agent and saw how well they mocked him. That important girl was very angry at what he did, so much so that it was difficult to tell which of the two was the child. He's the strongest after all, and he hardly allows himself to rest. Does he really hate losing that much that he's going to get rid of all the factors that could hinder him? He thought that he didn't want to lose, because they might pester him again. She said that he would be punished appropriately anyway. The guild would inevitably have to pay a huge amount of compensation. This meant that he might even be stripped of his A-rank adventurer title. If it ended like that, then he'd gotten off easy. Anyone who made him look like an idiot should regret it. Let them get what they deserve. Ryuya thought that, since that was the case, it seemed to him it would be better to ask her to create a new dungeon core later. However, if he hid it for too long, they would charge him with the question of why he didn't say this earlier. It all depended on the right moment. She asked why not just leave it in its broken state. He refused and said that it wasn't right. He was in favor of thinking clearly. He would like many people who could suffer from this to still avoid such a fate. She said that she thought he was exaggerating. They had a reason for doing so. She was talking about that idiot whose name she forgot. He was put under house arrest, but he had already headed to that place. Where exactly did he think? He thought that she was back to her old ways. Nothing could be done. He took her hand and said that he was grateful with all his heart for always helping him with her limitless power. Abinion was surprised by this and asked why he said it so suddenly. He said with a serious look that he was happy to have such a reliable ally like her. She said in a confused tone that it was not necessary to say that. However, she was very glad that he said it for her sake. So, up until this moment, this guy was followed by her clone. She will reproduce everything he saw on the wall. It will be something like a moving picture and he will see everything for himself. He thought that he didn't quite understand what she was talking about, but it was great. She sat down next to him with her clones and said that they would begin the show. After the intro, she showed the 5-star Noitani Hotel in the Kingdom of Rubrum. Zemnanto asked loudly in a dissatisfied tone How will he explain this? Now he is a criminal responsible for the destruction of the dungeon of the kingdom of Rubrum. Sides stood in front of him and asked if there would be a problem if their connection became known. He loudly agreed and said that if people think that he is involved in the crime, then it will affect his fight for the throne. He said with a wide grin that he shouldn't say stupid things. He grabbed him by the collar, lifted him off the ground, and said that it was he who put him up to it in the first place. He told him to kill the guy he doesn't like. He thought the job would be easy when he heard the man had no ability. He also thought it was a wonderful offer, a mission that required killing just one person, and with such a reward. However, because of this, he was on the verge of losing his rank as an A-rank adventurer. That lousy Bistamario had told him this straight to his face, but if her threats came true, then that would be the end for him too. Did he understand that? He let him go, and the prince asked why he had decided that. Sides pointed at him and said it was because he wasn't obligated to cover for him. If he died, he would take him with him. He was surprised by what he saw, and Abinion said that after that, it would immediately become clear who would inherit the throne. Zemnanto was worried about this, asked to listen, and asked if perhaps he should take the blame only on himself after all. He would thank him accordingly. He pinned him against the wall and said that he had warned him that if they were to die, they would all die together. In other words, they had a common destiny. He did understand what that meant, didn't he? If they were both going to die anyway, wouldn't it be better to try to find a way out of this situation? Tonight, he was going to go to that guy and attack that guy without the ability. First, he would kill him and then set the inn on fire. That way, he would not only burn his body, but also get rid of all possible witnesses. This would make the investigation of this case more difficult. Besides, there was supposed to be an adventurer named Noam with him, and they should get rid of her too, just in case. Zemnanto called him and asked if they couldn't leave her alive and just take her with them. After all, she had a very valuable, high-level ability. He would also like to see her innocence and beauty. Officially, she would be listed among those killed in the fire, and they would make a slave out of her. The protagonist heard this and thought that this damned prince didn't have the qualities a king needed. Sides refused and said that, although it was a shame to lose her ability, it also needed to be gotten rid of, all for their safety. He asked with a smirk, then before killing her, he would allow him to do one thing. Deal? He decided to prevent this, called Abinion and said that she could begin. Magical energy began to engulf their bodies, and Sides said that he had already prepared everything necessary. If anyone tried to escape, they would need to kill them. They noticed that their bodies could not move. Zemnanto called for help, and he loudly said that he should be silent. He had warned them to act stealthily. She flew to them and said that she really wanted to see a pleasant sight during the people's panic. They called her a ghost in surprise and loudly asked what she was doing in the middle of the city. Was this her doing? She agreed and said that they did want to do something bad to her master. This attracted Zemnanto's attention, and he asked, "So she's someone's familiar?" MC ran up to them, greeted them, and said it was him. Sides, with a displeased expression, loudly asked, "So, he used a ghost and found out about everything?" He said that it was good that he understood everything at a fast pace. She flew up to him and said that pathetic people cannot escape from her shackles of consciousness. Maybe they should leave these suspicious people here until the morning? The prince was very worried about this and loudly said that someone should help. He was the future king of the Centakelian kingdom. He chuckled, broke free from the effect of her ability, called her a pathetic ghost, and said that they should not underestimate him. She was surprised by this and asked. He got out and called her pathetic. He wondered how he was able to remove these shackles. They saw that his ability changes the direction of power and redirects it back. He read this and asked, "Does it change the direction of force?" Abinion asked, "An ability governed by the laws of physics?" It turns out he can even reflect her telekinesis, which has no form or body. A rather rare ability. By human standards, his abilities are excellent. Sides got angry about this, called her a vile ghost, and asked if she was spying on other people's abilities and judging them. She got angry about this, and he, with a serious expression, said that then he would explain what his vector reflector ability was. All attacks directed at him are returned to the opponent with the same force. Since receiving this ability, he has never been injured in battle. Rhea threw a rock at him, but it shattered before it hit him. She said that the stronger the attack, the more powerful it will return. This ability affects the force applied, so there is no limit. The rock turned to dust only because the throw was extremely powerful. He ran towards them and loudly asked, "Do they think that with this ability he can't attack himself?" He began running around them very quickly, and thought that the activation condition of his ability is touching something. In other words, he can return blows received from any other methods. Even the reaction of strikes to the ground and their reflection, as well as the force of the jump and speed, will be doubled. Abinion called out to the master and said that this ability definitely uses the pentagram. He stood nearby and thought that if there was no response, he would eventually be unable to jump further. It was time to stop thinking about such trifles. Sides loudly wished him death and struck with his sword, but he caught the blade of the sword, which greatly surprised him, and he asked loudly, did he take the attack with his bare hands? He jumped back sharply and loudly said that this could not be. He had accumulated so much power with the help of multiple reflection that he could easily cut even armor. An ability that prevents his skin from being cut even by a bladed weapon? He definitely does not have this ability. In that case, what was that? The protagonist, with a calm expression, said that he was very surprised that such a gifted and arrogant person as he thought that all this was because of an ability. He chuckled and said that judging by his statements, something like this could happen to someone who was not gifted with anything. He must stop lying. He jumped towards him very quickly and said loudly that the Vector Reflector ability was assigned SS rank and it was a first-class ability. The fact that he was the owner of this ability and had an A rank was the inevitability of all inevitabilities. He began to attack with his weapon and said loudly that he could not allow his A rank to be taken away because of a mediocrity like him. He must die. His instinct told him that after that, he, the owner of an excellent ability, would be saved. He easily reflected all his attacks and said that the small fry said the same thing. He continued to attack and said that because everyone should understand this, he was destined to kill him. He watched him with a serious expression and thought, does that mean he has an SS rank ability? This is the first time he has encountered an ability that has the power to ignore almost everything. He, a person not gifted with the ability, can only increase his level, physical strength, striking power, and durability. For him, this is the only way to become stronger. However, his ability makes everything he has achieved useless. This is the strength of his ability. Will his efforts really be shattered by his talent? He tried to grab Sides by the shoulders and thought that it was too early. He returns an invisible force, like a stone cliff. He said loudly that he is an unteachable guy. He won't even be able to grab him. He reflects not only punches and cutting attacks. His ability can reflect absolutely any external force. He has no weak points. He wondered if this is really true. Abinion's telekinesis worked perfectly from the start. In other words, the reflection ability does not work automatically. No, most likely it is simply not capable of this. He continued to reach out his hands to him and asked what would happen if he continued to try to grab his shoulders. He laughed with a carefree smile and asked if he started talking because he started to get short of breath. He had met several idiots like him before. This happened to everyone. He took out his sword and said that it would cut his stomach. He struck him hard with the sword, failed to wound him, called him a monster, and wondered if it could even cut his stomach. He continued to strike quickly and said loudly that he would make 1,000 swings on mediocrity. He continued to try to attack him for a long time, but his arms went numb, and MC was able to grab him by the shoulders. He said that it happened quite quickly. He was ready to spend a month on this. He squeezed his shoulders very hard, and Sides felt a lot of pain. He screamed loudly in pain. Abinion flew to him and asked the owner, does he think it was worth squeezing all his bones? It looks like he can no longer be an adventurer. He said in a calm tone that he actually wanted to cut him in half. She called it fair, and he went to the prince and said that now they will talk about him. He is a very vindictive man, and in pursuit of the throne, apparently, he does not choose his methods. He was very scared, loudly denied it, and said that in fact, it was not he who planned their murder. He said that the very fact that he spoke of murder speaks of his involvement. Does he understand that if his father finds out about this, then he will definitely not become king? Or would he rather choose to die a glorious death right here? He pretended to be scared and loudly said that he did not want to die and for his father to speak either. Zimnanto began to fold his fingers into a seal and use the royal skill, flattering speeches. He began to laugh loudly and said that he had let his guard down. Did you think that successors did not have abilities? His skill is not as simple as Leslie's. With the help of his ability, he told him that he must heed the voice of the idol and obey its words. Anyone who heard his voice will do whatever he wants. This is the skill inherent in blue bloods. Ryuya thought his voice echoed in his chest. What was this feeling of boundless respect? It felt as if his heart was completely open. It was an unbearable high vibration. He said that now he would be its master, his power, a power only for him. He agreed, called him Lord, and Zimnanto said that everything was exactly as he asked. Now he was completely at his request. He didn't have time to finish because he broke free of his ability and hit him hard in the face with his fist. He said with a serious expression that his voice truly echoed in his chest. However, his voice didn't move him in the least, which meant he couldn't command him. It's not skill that makes him one who commands people, but only his qualities and actions. Without them, he cannot be king. Only Leslie's had a voice that could shake thousands of hardened hearts. Her words made her heart beat faster. Abinion sighed, and he looked at her and asked, what is it? She thinks hitting a royal was a bad idea? She denied it and said, just think, his ability didn't work on him. He really is a very strong-willed person. He said he doesn't think such an ability could subdue anyone with such a brainless master. She denied it, and asked if he knows that almost no one in the entire history of mankind has been able to resist an ability like his. Perhaps this means that he is no longer human, but something even higher. This is very interesting. By the way, hitting him was the right decision. He thought that since they were able to stop the main instigators, all that was left was to send her to deal with the rest of the small fry. That would be the end of their business with the crime investigation in Rubrum. Suddenly, Sides smashed the jar and loudly said that it was too early. He laughed loudly, and the protagonist looked at him and asked, "What did he just do?" He said with a very tense look that he understood what Mr. Rekolis said before leaving. He wondered with a little surprise, "Who is this?" Another council member. He raised his head and said that if someone whose power is beyond his understanding appears in the exam, if they meet someone whose existence would deny everything they knew. Also, if he turns out to be their enemy, then it was necessary to use it, and he said so. He, who does not have the ability, dared to sharpen his teeth on them. Now he will know. He will never be able to change the foundations of the world. People with skills have always been stronger than those who do not have it. Because of his misunderstanding, he will die at the hands of this monster. He broke the seal of this monster. Now he knows no limits. He must eat this idiot and tear him to pieces. MC looked at something in front of him and thought that something floated up in a puddle, something translucent with several tentacles. Come to think of it, he'd never seen anything like it. Was it a monster that would bring disaster? He looked at it with a confused expression and asked, "What is it?" Abinion flew closer and said that it was a jellyfish. He sighed with relief and said loudly that so she knew what it was after all. Then he asked for an explanation. Sides looked at it with a confused expression and asked loudly, "Why isn't it moving?" He had to kill it. It was a devilish monster, wasn't it? Had Lord Rekolis really deceived him? He stood nearby and wondered if this council member wanted to joke about him. She said that no one had deceived him. This jellyfish-like creature is the child of Nelis. You could say it's the devilish ghost of the seas, and everything belongs to Oceanus. Ria looked at her and thought that she, too, was a devilish ghost. The same subspecies of creatures as she, but with a different habitat. She said that this goddess treats these Nelis like her children. She has several thousand of these little creatures, and if anything happens to even one, she will fly into a rage. Also, if she senses that one of them ends up on land, she will come to save her child, bringing the entire ocean with her. A special spell was cast on the glass. It created the necessary conditions for existence in a test tube. The water is also unusual, quite painstaking work. While Nelis was in the jar, Oceanus couldn't find out about his disappearance, but now he was outside. He looked away and said that the earth was shaking. She said in a serious tone that it wasn't the earth that was shaking, but the ocean. It seemed that she had already sensed his disappearance and was now approaching here. The people on the ocean shore noticed that the sea had receded sharply and loudly called it a great tsunami. Abinyan said that this was the sea goddess's anger for the harm caused to her child. However, there was also an upside to this. Now that Nelis was on land, she would bring the sea, and then they wouldn't have to travel far to get there. They would have a whole new beach right here. He became worried about this and asked if they could somehow convince her not to destroy the city. She said that it was practically impossible. Actually, she belongs to the most powerful class of beings. It would be strange if she listened to a human's request. Although, it seemed that seeing her child in a jar would be even rarer. He said loudly that she should stop. They had more important things to do. She flew up to Sides and tried to call him, but forgot his name. She leaned close to his face and said that she didn't care who he got Nelis from, but that bastard had fooled him well. He had just summoned a creature from the most powerful class of beings. He thinks he can get away with literally destroying a mass biological weapon? He said with a tense look that he would somehow escape. She looked at him and said that he wouldn't be able to, only if he could run a few kilometers away in 5 minutes, preferably into the depths of the sea. He probably thinks it would be great to have the ability to hold his breath, right? He will have to accept it. He gritted his teeth in anger and said that he was used simply as a pawn. The protagonist looked away with a serious expression and thought that he probably felt unpleasant, but there was no time to empathize. He couldn't let this country sink underwater. He asked if he could just take the jellyfish back to the sea, right? She said that wasn't possible. If it had been a fully mature Nelis, it might have worked, but they were babies. They live in the deepest parts of the sea for years, never mind being on the surface for even a short time. Even rising to the surface, to water with a different salt concentration, Nelis would experience problems that could lead to its death. When exposed to air, they quickly weaken. Even if they carried it to the sea, it would most likely eventually die due to unsuitable conditions. If they even managed to get it there in time, it would die before they could count to 50. He said with a serious expression that if they didn't do anything, Oceanus would become even more angry and wash away the city. She said that such a problem was just because of one jellyfish, but there was no need to panic. He asked with a worried voice what they should do. How can you not panic in moments like this? Abinyan said that he should just not worry, because help is already on the way. Noam came to them and said that she was already here. She contacted her using telepathy, and she ran as fast as she could. They should put him here for now. This is the water she took from the sea. She was trying to normalize the salt content in the water. They put the jellyfish there, and MC said with surprise that he seemed to be getting better. How did she even do that? This is the first time they have encountered this kind of danger. She closed her eyes and said that there was no salt yet, and she did it herself. Abinion flew up to the jellyfish and said that it was too early to rejoice, because it was a child. It was terribly weak. To return it to normal, it would be necessary to repeat the conditions of deep water. She drank something from the flask, asked them to wait, and he looked at her and asked what she was drinking. She said that it was just a specially made remedy for sleep deprivation. Suddenly, she gained energy and asked in surprise, "They have a jellyfish straight from the deepest depths of the sea, right? She can see everything. She sees every atom of salt and all the minerals. Everything will be fine. There are no problems." Abinion looked at her and said that she seemed a little out of it. He asked with a confused look. She called this a little? She said loudly that right now her skill as the king of alchemy would come into play. They must watch and learn. In a second, she will create absolutely ideal conditions for the existence of this jellyfish. She flew up to him and said that there was one more thing left to do, and that was to stop Oceanus. You shouldn't look at this enemy so easily. She is fast and will probably easily make it to the shore before she finishes. Besides, if left as is, the city will be plunged into eternal aquatic darkness. He was about to ask her something, but she said with a serious expression that if a fight was unavoidable, she wouldn't hold back. But she didn't feel like she could win either. If they had to fight, the battle would definitely end with one city completely wiped off the face of the earth. That's why someone else needed to stop her. Someone with much more strength, and someone who could finish it all with a couple of blows. He ran to the sea and said loudly that he understood everything. When they were done, they should immediately come to the beach too. He would try to protect the city for now, and she should look after Noam. He looked at sides and said that they would talk to him later. He quickly ran to the beach and wondered why everything turned out like this. They just wanted to pass the exam to become A-rank adventurers. However, now for some reason, he was running to save the city from a disaster that could destroy the entire city. The people around him felt it too. 3 strong men ran up to him and loudly said that it was such a coincidence to meet him here. After all, this is a friend who is going to become an A-rank adventurer. He thinks an earthquake is starting. Ryuya looked at them and thought that it would be hard to get rid of them. He said that he had a favor to ask of them. A gigantic tsunami is approaching the city. He asks them to evacuate all residents, preferably as high as possible from the sea. They were very surprised by this and loudly said that this is terrible. He loudly said that he has to go. He needs to stop this tsunami. He looked at them and wondered, did they understand this? Maybe he explained it unclearly. Although help would be useful, it doesn't seem like he can handle it all alone. He thinks they thought it was a joke. Unexpectedly for him, they loudly said that if so, they ran. He can do anything. He has to stop this tsunami. They believe in him. They will cover him so he can calmly deal with this problem. They ran to the people, began to drive them away, and other adventurers also came to them and said that they would help him a little. They should all go to the high ground. He can rely on them, just like they relied on him in the dungeon. The protagonist thought that even when the city is in danger, adventurers come to the aid of the residents. They know perfectly well what to do in situations like this, and do not hesitate at all. It seems that only such people can be called true adventurers. He said loudly that he is counting on them. He ran to the beach and with a surprised expression on his face thought that this can't be, as if a black mountain was moving towards him. All those he had met up to this point, be they criminals or other adventurers, the feelings they evoked in him could not compare to the feelings from this wave. Even standing in front of Abinion, he had never felt something like this. This time, he had no room for error. There are several thousand people and their homes behind him. He must protect everyone, even if they are strangers, because for someone this person is important, just like for him. There are people important to him in this city, and he will protect them. The tsunami will not pass. He doesn't know if his 8 million levels are enough to stop it. But with his strength, he could barely resist his teacher. He delivered a very strong punch and stopped the wave. He thought he had succeeded, but noticed that a second wave was already moving and said that it was moving too fast. He struck again with his fist and thought that he, however, was not going to retreat either. He thought with a serious expression that if even one wave passed, the city would suffer irreparable losses, as would the people. He repelled many waves approaching him with his blows, and said that since she was so persistent, he would make a series of blows. He cut through the waves and wondered if this Oceanus was seriously ready to spend so much energy. He also could not continue his attacks indefinitely, and nevertheless, he needed to resist. He hoped that Noam would try to restore the baby as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would not last long. 5 months and 23 days at most. He looked down with slight surprise and thought that his clothes had become heavier. Maybe because they were wet? He heard Oceanus's voice asking why he was getting in the way. Could it really be that he was the one who took her sweet child? She will kill the one who took her child from her. She poured a lot of water on him, and he realized that now it was clear why the clothes had become heavy. He said that if she thought he would drown from lack of air, she was wrong. Thanks to his training, he could hold his breath for at least 10 years. He thought that she couldn't harm him, but he couldn't do it either. She called for her child, and he thought that it looked like they wouldn't be able to come to an agreement. Her maternal feelings were no different from human ones. She loudly asked for her child to be returned to her, and Noam asked her to stop and said that her child was right there, completely safe. She immediately changed her appearance, went to her and called for her child with a worried look. She took the jellyfish from her hands and asked if he was scared, lonely, and if he was hurt. She apologized. She was a little late. They saved her child, and she was grateful to them. She said with a small smile that everything seemed to work out. MC looked at her and wondered who it was. Could this really be the one he had fought? She and the sea instantly calmed down. Oceanus placed her child in the water and said that the waves of this baby were filled with feelings of love and gratitude to them, and she was grateful for that. Abinion flew to them and said that she was, as always, crazy when it came to children. She was surprised to meet her, called her by name, and asked how she was doing. She hadn't risen to the surface for a long time and was a little nervous. He wondered in surprise why they seemed like best friends. She pointed a finger at her and asked if she knew that one wave of hers would flood at least a city. She didn't think that living beings would be happy to be underwater. He was surprised by this and thought that it looked like they really were friends. He looked to the side and said that the sky in the east was already light. Had he really fought until morning? Noam approached him, agreed, and said that, thanks to this, she had chosen the most ideal conditions for the jellyfish. Not only he, but also their acquaintances, along with the adventurers, had done a great job evacuating the locals. This was their victory. He agreed, and Oceanus said that she thanked them again. She had been out of sorts lately, and while watching over 6,327 children, she had accidentally overlooked the disappearance of one. She had been so worried. A rebellion had even arisen in her heart. Abinion said that she couldn't imagine the rebellion in their hearts, seeing these waves. Rhea agreed, thinking that in an instant her aura of a true devil had vanished. She said thoughtfully that, however, it was hard for her to imagine being outsmarted. Did she know whose work this was? She said, looking confused, that was the point. She didn't know. However, if she finds out, she will immediately come to him, drown him with waves, and spin him around in the water whirlpools. After that, she will give him oxygen, but then take it away again. She will drown this freak for a very long time. Of course, this time everything worked out, and her child is safe. However, next time she won't let people get away with it so easily, especially the main culprit. Do they know who did this? Noam denied it, asked for forgiveness, and said that they cannot help with this. She said with a friendly smile that they should not protect the culprit. He said with a worried look that they honestly do not know who did it. Although the one who released Niles was an A-rank adventurer, no one else comes to mind. She immediately became very angry upon hearing this and asked, so they were adventurers? He was even more worried because of this and thought that it seemed that he should not have mentioned it. Abinion weakly attacked her and said that she shouldn't be so hasty. There's no point in lumping everyone together. Did she really want to swim to them and drown them all? Did she know that those who saved Niles were also adventurers? Oceanus apologized, and she said with a smirk that they should think like her. Therefore, they will conduct a thorough investigation and find out who is pulling all the strings behind the scenes. Then they will simply catch the bad people and punish them. It seems that nothing will change if one or two people disappear in the city. He was surprised by this and said loudly that so that's what she was getting at. She looked at her with a joyful look and said that what a clever plan. It seems they will stop there. She created water in front of her and said that they must not misunderstand her. She was grateful to them with all her heart. Her child also really liked them. She took out a bottle, handed it to them, and said they should take this as thanks. Noam took it and asked, is this a vase? She said she had made this magical vase herself. It gives an unlimited supply of water. She opened the cap and said with surprise that it was amazing. The water was just gushing out. Oceanisa said that, just in case, if she closed the lid, the water would stop flowing. This is water without a single impurity. It seems that this is exactly the kind of water alchemists need. She thanked her with a joyful expression and said that she was right. It was simply a wonderful gift for an alchemist. She was already looking forward to getting started. He can feel it, right? The protagonist, with a slightly worried look, agreed and thought that he hoped that everything would turn out without madness, so he would keep an eye on them. She said that she had memorized their waves, and if someone else got their hands on the artifact, it would stop working. These were safety precautions. Abinion said with a little surprise that she turned out to be prudent. She calmly said that she was simply being too dissolute. She called the two of them and said that their help meant a lot to her and she would never forget their actions. Well, it was time for them to go back. If they needed help, they could always count on her. Noam asked if she was already going back. He thought that he would undoubtedly never forget her rage either. Although, if you don't count her anger, she seemed quite kind and reasonable. She called Abinion and said that now the gratitude was hers. She placed her hand on Noam's head with a smile and said that everything was fine. She already got everything she needed with these people. Even this time, without doing anything, she experienced nervousness, shock, and an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. He wondered with surprise, was she even proud of it? He came closer and asked how she understood her. Oceana said that all the demonic spirits, she sought out fun and adventure the most. She was stubborn with people. engaging with them without ever considering the consequences. Simply put, a unique being. She asked her to stop, slightly embarrassed, saying that otherwise she would blush. He closed his eyes and thought it wasn't praise at all. She called him by name and said that if one were to ask what demonic spirits were, one could say they were personifications of nature. They existed as deified elements of nature, such as water, fire, wind, earth, and time, while still having personalities. However, at the same time, they possessed the same qualities as beings from other worlds, such as dragons, beings from the fourth dimension, and beings of dark and light matter. Since she had decided to accompany them on their journey, they must be no less amazing. Abinion smiled and said that of course, her master was amazing. After all, the dragon himself had chosen him. However, there is no need to even mention his power. He is stronger than all of them combined. Oceanus was surprised by this, began to disappear, and said that she apparently lived a very rich life. She laughed with a joyful smile, and MC, with a serious expression, thought that she also helps him in different ways. She dissolved into the water, asked for forgiveness, and said that she needed to return. She hoped that this was not the last meeting with these two wonderful people. He thought that this was how she returned to the sea. Side's plan, which almost completely destroyed this city, miraculously failed without claiming anyone's lives. He asked, by the way, where is Sides? Hours later, an audience with the king of Rubrum, Oshanshir Wetarock IX, began. He said that first, honorable ones, he must apologize to them. Due to his nephew's reckless act, the lives of many civilians were on the brink of death, and they were forced to save them from disaster, for which he sincerely asks for their forgiveness. They both bowed to him with worried expressions and said that he was not worthy of thanks. Ryuya looked at him and thought that, surprisingly, he was a rather short king, giving a feeling of reliability. However, he gave the impression of being insightful and fair. To them, commoners, he did not seem arrogant. He said that his sister's son, Zemnanto, who could become king, had the potential to make a strong kingdom their ally in the future, firmly binding them with strong ties. Dreams that foreshadowed this haunted him for a long time. He wondered if their kingdom was strong. Noem, with a serious expression, thought that no one was stronger than her lord. He said that, unfortunately, he had fallen in with a malicious adventurer and attempted to take a man's life. He failed to live up to his expectations, nearly bringing grief to every family of his people. The protagonist looked at him in surprise and thought, it's incomprehensible. With such wise kings among his relatives, how could Zemnanto be so foolish? Oshan said that his actions had put the kingdom in great danger, something that could not be forgiven. If it were him, he would have sentenced him to the highest degree of punishment. However, since he is from a different royal family, he will leave this prerogative to his father. He said with a calm expression that, knowing their king, he is confident that he will make a fair decision. By the way, what happened to Zemnanto? The king said that he is in the castle under house arrest. Still, imprisoning a royal person is impossible, even for him. He groans in pain just lying on the bed, so there is no need to worry about his escape. The process of his repatriation will begin soon. He asked with a serious expression, what about Sides? He shook his head, making it clear he didn't know about it, and he thought that it was, as he thought, the culprit of the failed disaster, an A-rank adventurer, disappeared towards the end of the disaster, leaving many of the circumstances of Oceanus's arrival unknown. He was sure he couldn't move. Bistomario came to them and said that she should apologize regarding this incident. The king called her in surprise, and she knelt before him and said that the Adventurers Association would take responsibility for this incident. To truly express her remorse for the disaster that had come to Rubrum, it was decided that the council member who had Sides under his care, that is, her, would be dismissed. MC looked at her in surprise and thought it was incredible. Even council members bowed their heads before the king. Suddenly, Oshan loudly said that under no circumstances should this be done. No one wants this outcome. The entire Adventurers Association would be pointless without her. He and all the other people supporting her would be heartbroken. She mustn't give up. His subjects also supported this, and she said with a smile that, since they asked so, she had no choice but to work as hard as she could. He was confused by this, and wondered what kind of attitude they had. The king said that, besides, the kingdom had been saved from disaster, scattering mountain-high waves with dozens of powerful blows over the course of several hours. They had saved everyone, and no one would dare question their feat. It was a divine rescue. Besides, a man with no abilities could pull off such a feat. Was that true? Ryuya was surprised by his observation skills, agreed, and said that his strength lay in his levels. He reacted calmly to this and said that, as expected from a vaunted hero, it was an excellent job. He thought that, reflecting on all the difficulties he had to go through to become who he is, he was beginning to think that in moments like these, he was not being praised at all. Noem and Abinion supported him with joyful faces, and he thought with displeasure that they should be more modest. Oshan said that he would like to continue praising them for their merits. But Bistomario had something to say to them. She said that she listened and obeyed him. She called him by name, called him a hero, and said that she wanted to talk about the A-rank exam. They were thinking about what to do next. He understands that, right? He said that he was asking not to finish the exam, since their comrades worked hard to get to this stage. She agreed and said that it would be bad if they devalued the efforts of the adventurers. However, there was a nuance here. She used the ability Analyze. He noticed it and asked what this ability of hers did. She said it simply helps one see distant things better and also see the hidden, everything that is invisible to the naked eye. She can even see their motives and behavior. In their emergency, this is very important to do. She also sees that thanks to his type of behavior, he turned the disaster around. He wondered, she sees the actions and motives of A-rank applicants? He asked, what does that even mean? She said loudly that, simply put, it is a special second stage of the exam, which determines the type of unpleasant adventurers. Compatibility with the behavior characteristic of A-rank is checked. Abinyan was surprised by this and said that it sounded interesting. He thought with a slightly displeased look that she was interested in everything. Bistamario said that there were different types of adventurers. Adventurers who run away because of her cuteness. At any dangerous moment, they go to the toilet. Noem said with surprise, what does that mean? Their history of actions and motives is recorded and checked. She also looked at it, was about to say something, but she said that, however, in connection with today's incident, the actions of adventurers who evacuated and in every way assisted in neutralizing the danger were also recorded. Such adventurers, who give the prospect of salvation to others, are awarded additional points. The protagonist asked, so that group of 3 strongmen passes? She asked, is he talking about Red, Ito, and Bino? Indeed, these 3 have every chance of passing the 3rd stage of the exam. They have courageously overcome adversity for a long time. She is confident that success awaits them. Now they, Noem, who showed how to approach difficult situations and cope with them with distinction. Her motives are noble and her actions are graceful. She was confused by the praise and said that it was some kind of mistake. She is not like that at all. Bistamario called him over and said that he, who stood on the front lines and protected an entire city from destruction, shielding the deadly waves with his valor and altruism, was guided by good intentions, and his actions were grandiose. Noem raised her hand and said that was exactly how it was. She added that they had also identified traitors among the examiners. Based on this assessment, there was no need for either of them to take the entire exam. They were awarded the title of A-rank adventurer ahead of schedule, as well as a recommendation for promotion to S-rank status. He was delighted by this, thinking that he had been able to obtain A rank without going through the 3rd stage. Confused by this, he asked, did she say S-rank status? She replied with a slight smile that there were only dozens of A-rank adventurers in the various kingdoms, while S-rank status was considerably fewer. Only a select few in the entire world were granted the privilege of holding such a title. Also, only adventurers who passed the A-rank exam perfectly could become candidates for this rarest title. He declined with a confused look and said that they understood her explanation. However, had she thought it through? They could really skip an entire rank like that? The king said that there was no S-rank exam. Bistamario agreed and said that the association monitors the achievements of adventurers and awards the S-rank title through a vote among the council members. However, in his case, no S-rank adventurer had ever saved an entire kingdom before, so he would be given the title without a problem. MC asked her to wait and said that saving this kingdom wasn't only his merit. Besides Abinion and Noem, many other adventurers had helped him. She laughed and said that she understood what he meant. However, firstly, it was the 2 of them who made the greatest contribution, and no one doubted that. Secondly, without them, these adventurers would have suffered too. He still doubted this decision, and she said that nevertheless, a convocation of the council members was still necessary. She planned to submit a petition immediately upon arrival. Oshan said that he was also going to recommend it, but now they needed to get down to business. Besides that, he would like to reward them financially for this feat. If they had any wishes, now was the time to voice them. Ryuya immediately understood what he wanted and said he had 2 requests. He thought his 2 wishes were just that. First, not to interfere with Zimnanto's fair and public punishment. The king, with a calm expression, said he saw no problem with that. He does not have royal patronage, due to the fact that he is no longer a member of the royal family of Rubrum. Without this patronage, he will not be allowed to interfere with his punishment. He thought of one more wish. In connection with today's incident, he asked for all possible assistance in the advancement of the future queen of Centakilian, Lesledza, who has no supporters due to her family position, to the royal throne. He listened to him and said, so that's who she is. Although an illegitimate child, she has a generous heart and great strength. He agrees. Although he cannot interfere in the affairs of another kingdom, the necessary support will be provided in the event of her coronation. He said that he is grateful. His help is very important. Right, before he forgets, they will fix the dungeon they broke. Later, they received certificates of A-rank adventurers and were very happy about it. He said that besides this, they brought with them many pleasant things. Noem agreed and said that Leslids' support, a new vase, and a recommendation for S-rank. He thought joyfully that it was amazing. She was already at level 38, amazing, but the main thing now was something else, the new rank. He said that when they reach A rank, it turns out his card begins to shine. Abinyan flew up to them and said it was amazing. Dew rolling off the forbidden fruit hanging on the tree of life and death in a paradise of heavenly blue flowers. He turned to her and loudly exclaimed in surprise that she was talking nonsense again. He thought that, however, Perhaps very soon they would become S-rank adventurers. I wonder if an S-rank card would shine differently? A crowd of adventurers came to them, congratulated them, and said that here they are, the crazy ones. He knew he would rise first. He thought they all came to say goodbye. They laughed loudly and said that they were now at the last stage. They were only able to reach it thanks to his crazy act. The protagonist thought that while celebrating their victory, everyone felt an invisible but pleasant feeling of closeness in the air. What will he do when he misses them? Remembering those times, the adventurers said that miraculously, only adventurers without abilities remained. It seems they were all allowed to the next stage thanks to that attack. They say that people with abilities have all failed. He doesn't even know why. He thought it was just as Bistomario said, because not a single adventurer with abilities helped in that trouble, without showing what they are capable of. Each of them was considered to have failed the second stage. The strongmen said that now they will not miss their chance. They will also become A-ranked very soon. He must wait for it. He said with a small smile that he will pray for their success. They shook hands. The adventurers left, and loudly said that they would show these important examiners that people without abilities could give them a head start, just like their brother had. MC looked at them and thought that, like the day, their time was also coming to an end. Evening was coming, which meant it was time for farewells. Noam laughed and said that he didn't have to hide it. It was obvious from his face. He turned to her with embarrassment and said that he wouldn't have shouted like them, honestly. She asked what he thought about trying on a mohawk when they returned. He declined, and later they reached the capital of Centakilian and went to the Adventurers Guild. There was a congratulatory banner at the entrance, and when they entered, Londite loudly announced that the heroes of the occasion had arrived. She hugged him and said that he had tried his best. She knew they would definitely succeed. He looked to the side, noticed Noam's reaction, pushed her away and asked if she already knew about this. She agreed, and said that she and Bistomario were actually childhood friends. However, they still passed and both at once. How many years had passed since the last A-rank adventurer graduated from her branch? Or had anyone ever graduated at all? He was surprised by what he heard, and wondered if they were both childhood friends. If he thought about it, was it possible that she was pulling the strings behind the scenes? He imagined that she could have sent her a letter, and thought that maybe he was just overthinking it. She said that, by the way, every new A-rank adventurer is due to the influence of her branch. It's just that among the A-ranks here, she is the only one, really, which is sad. They also told her that they fought bravely to save the kingdom, for which they were recommended for S-rank. He wouldn't refuse that, right? He was about to say something, and she said that S-rank is glory for an adventurer. He had to imagine how everyone would find out that she had an S-rank adventurer and how her monthly salary would be raised. He realized that these thoughts were making his body hotter, right? Maybe they could start dating right now? He refused, and the people around him started supporting her. He grabbed Noam, ran to the exit, and said that they had to report to the king. They came to an audience with the king, and Ryuya thought that this was a very dangerous atmosphere for her. The downside of commoners is that they are easily admired for anything. Entering the hall, he was very surprised to see a very joyful Leonard dancing, who was repeating only the words S-rank.